Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Got Depressed and Returned Back as Namikaze, Part 4. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
As he gradually regained consciousness, Naruto remained silent. Rather, his muscles remained limp and his eyes closed. His only action was to slightly open his nostrils and inhale the scents of everyone in his vicinity. Hiyashi, several Anbu, Inoichi, Ibiki, and Old Man Hokage. This wasn't good, I see. Sarcastically, Shinigami asked, "What was your first clue?" When Ibiki said, "You can open your eyes now, I know that you've woken up." Naruto said, "Well, of course you would, Ibiki-san," in a conversational manner. His friendly tone made the men in his immediate vicinity stiffen. The Namikaze opened his eyes slowly, scanning his surroundings. His initial response made a powerful, favorable first impression. He was not panicked, no, not at all, in contrast to how most people would respond in this kind of circumstance. Rather, his calm, bright blue eyes moved slowly around the room, as if peering right through them to absorb as much information as possible. His body language gave the impression that he was in charge of the situation, even though he was restrained and had chakra suppressors painted on his body. However, Naruto's inner thoughts were more along the lines of, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. Despite this, he genuinely thought that he would not be harmed and that, while this was a setback, it was only a major annoyance. What Ibiki and the others sensed was this dominant feeling of annoyance. A dangerous man, indeed, Ibiki thought. Hell, he should have remained unconscious for another 2 hours or more. A furious Hiyashi approached Yurei before anyone else could intervene, and without using Juken, he drove his not-so-gentle fist into Yurei's stomach. The man in the mask grunted. He was still wearing his mask for a very straightforward reason. In reality, the mask was a component of Naruto's henge. This implied that they were unable to remove it in spite of their repeated attempts. Yurei exclaimed, "Now, what was the point of that?" Hiyashi's Byakugan came on by itself. His voice was cold and quiet as he said, "You threatened my clan." Yurei's voice was quiet and lethal as she said, "That I did. You threatened mine first." "Wait," Sarutobi said briefly, "he threatened your clan?" I did," Yurei remarked wryly. "As well as his own daughter." I objected, strenuously. The words, "I thought that you would already know of this, Lord Hokage," came out of Hiyashi's bewildered mouth. "One of my elders reported to me that he had already informed you of what had happened. He told me that you had said that we should ever remain silent on the subject, in case others would learn of Konoha's weakness." Hiyashi was indignant inside. Horinsa wasn't telling the truth, and he shouldn't have trusted her. He consistently advocated for the Hyuga clan's superiority. Admitting such a weakness, Horinsa, he preferred to gouge out his own eyes. "I am sorry to say that I did not get that message, Hiyashi." "What was it, exactly, that Yurei threatened your clan with?" Hiruzen inquired. "Genocide," Yurei replied casually. The room fell silent as everyone's attention was drawn to Yurei, who was comfortably reclining in his chair and gazing up at the ceiling. The other people in the interrogation room gazed at the man who had so casually discussed massacre. In some way, it seemed ludicrous, not possible. Inoichi questioned incredulously, "And you took him seriously?" Hiyashi remarked cagily, "He had a very strong bargaining position." "What the Hyuga Lord means to say," Yurei broke in, his voice pleasant enough for a conversation, "is that once a person has taken out each and every single one of your guards, placed paralysis seals on every other remaining member of the clan, then dragged you around the compound by your hair, stopping only to enter the doors of your clan members and coming out with either a sword or a kunai dripping in red, then showed you the room where he had stuffed all the unmoving bodies of the ones meant to protect you, then you start to believe that he may just be able to back up what he says." After he finished speaking, Yurei cracked a broad grin at the group of sick people. However, his eyes were ruthless and icy. Naruto was infuriated even now at the thought of what they had done to Hinata. "You killed them," the Hokage exclaimed in horror, despite the fact that his more sensible side knew that it would have been impossible to conceal such a thing. Yurei gave a headshake. "No, I didn't kill anyone. There wasn't even a single long-lasting injury. After all, it was only a threat. I was just proving that I could." Hiyashi smashed Yurei in the face, sending a loud thud through the room. He roared, "You made me think my clan was dead." And in doing so, Yurei whispered, "I created an opportunity for you to stop being simply a clan and to become something more, a family." If your daughter knew about it, she may even thank me. Don't give me that. I made a start, Yurei said again, shouting louder than Hiyashi. By forcing you to follow my rules, I made a start in bringing you and your daughter together. When were you going to? Hiyashi heard Naruto's critical voice in his head. When were you planning on starting? When your eldest child lay on her deathbed after a mission gone wrong, or after she saves a teammate's life at the cost of her own, having lived her entire life believing that her beloved father hates her very existence? As Yurei's voice interrupted Hiyashi's thoughts, I don't regret anything that happened that night, but the real question is, do you? Hiyashi struggled inside himself, dumbfounded by the question. Did he truly feel bad about Yurei's actions? Had he done nothing, would he have liked it better? He saw a picture of Hinata with her arms partially around his waist and her face pressed against him. She had one of the happiest smiles he had seen in a long time. No, he muttered. Behind that mask, Hiyashi could see Yurei's approving smile. I don't regret it at all. Unexpectedly, he also heard Uzumaki's voice again, and for some reason, Hiyashi knew that this would be the last time he heard it in this manner. At least for a while, after his vocal confession. About bloody time. Then you understand the lesson that I was trying to teach. This statement was met with silence, after which Hiyashi simply sighed and turned to face the other members of the group. He had a lot on his mind. Inoichi, who seemed unable to remain motionless, got up and began pacing the room while the men and women surrounding him just stared. What kind of man were they up against? They were apparently dealing with a man who would try to unite a divided clan by merely providing them with a shared fear and a set of guidelines. Who are you? Anbu Cat inquired, both out of professional curiosity and morbid fascination. Yurei shook his head and grinned. I seem to be asked that question increasingly often lately. I'll give you the same answer that I gave your Hokage. No one of importance. One of my elders expressed a suspicion that he was a Namikaze, Hiyashi acknowledged with little hesitation. According to Hiruzen, in that, they were correct, that is, if Yurei can be believed. The third made a small movement with his hand as he spoke. Inoichi, who had already moved stealthily behind Yurei, approached him almost silently with a hand outstretched, reaching for his head. However, when dealing with someone like Naruto's enhanced hearing, nearly soundless was simply insufficient. Naruto calmly stated, if I were you, Inoichi-san, I would not do that, without even looking at the Yamanaka clan head. Inoichi boldly hid his surprise as he grabbed hold of the Namikaze's skull and entered his head, asking, but you're not me, are you? Naruto's final unspoken thought before he passed out was, it's going to get real crowded in there. Inoichi grunted, oof, as his face slammed into the bottom of what looked like a sewer, causing a huge splash of water to fly everywhere. Pulling himself to his feet with a moan, he wondered absently if his nose had just been broken again. It had been the first time he had met Shuza. He had never heard of the forbidden word before. Luckily, Tsunade had still been in Konoha at the time. She and Dan had laughed about the incident, which she had found very funny. Inoichi's wandering thoughts came to a screeching halt as he froze. There was a problem. He took his time surveying his surroundings. Because he was in someone else's head, the very rules of his method were designed to make it nearly impossible for the user's own thoughts to stray. This could pose the greatest risk to one's health. He was in something that, despite having read about it, he had never really expected to see because he had done it so unconsciously. He was in a mindscape, but it wasn't just any mindscape. It was one that the subject was conscious of and frequently utilized. This implied that there was a chance this mind had defense mechanisms of some sort. Inoichi tightened his grin as a feeling akin to excitement surged through him. He was the undeniable mental examiner of Konoha and a former master of his clan's methods. He hadn't faced a true challenge in his line of work in a very long time. In any case, he would likely find this enjoyable. He took a deep breath, and only because of his now iron self-control did he not question why he felt the need to breathe even though he was a fully incorporeal form inside a man's skull. The mind reader absorbed the details of the sights around him methodically. His unexpected fall was likely not much aided by the water covering the floor as far as the eye could see, which only reached mid-calf. The passageway, or tunnel, in which he found himself was roughly 11 feet in width and height. But there were a number of pipes running the length of the ceiling above his head. These made the ceiling lower, sometimes to the point where Inoichi had to duck his head. The passage appeared to go on forever behind him, and it did the same in front of him. Torches, their flames crackling audibly, were spaced along at even intervals. The only thing keeping the darkness at bay was the flickering light they supplied. Inoichi chewed pensively on his lip. It was a straightforward question. Which way did he go? He could go in either direction, one that would bring him the memories he wanted. He would spend hours looking in vain for the other. Inoichi closed his eyes and focused, trying to sense something, anything. And he perceived a shadowy darkness ahead of him, one that burdened Yurei's spirit. The best place to start would be there. Inoichi made up his mind, nodded, and moved forward. The fire blazed an all-consuming bright orange, and the torches surrounding him instantly flared up. Before the sight burned at his retina, momentarily impairing his vision, Inoichi could only make out the ceiling above him abruptly appearing to vanish as those conflagrations stretched up, clawing at the heavens themselves. Inoichi opened his eyes again, blinking quickly. Everything had returned to normal. The torches continued to crackle happily. Inoichi walked cautiously forward, thinking suspiciously, almost innocently. Nothing took place. Inoichi stepped forward again and sighed with relief. Suddenly, all of the lights were extinguished, leaving Inoichi to wade in a sewer in complete darkness. Crap, was Inoichi's concise summary. As Hinata used the tree walking technique to reach the roof of the Hyuga Elders' council room, she asked her friend, "Are you sure that this is a good idea, Arlia?" "Of course it is, honey. I did not like the look on that dirty old man's face. So, we're going to spy on them and see what exactly they're getting up to." Hinata shrugged and pulled out a practice kunai. With unexpected skill, she opened the window and slipped into the attic, shutting the window behind her. "Make sure you keep to the main support beams, honey," Arlia said absently before carrying on with her discussion. After all, in order for them to actually get up off their butts. Hinata gently reprimanded Arlia-sama, by this point, having grown accustomed to the eccentricities of the goddess. She underlined the phrase, "So sorry dear," in order for them to get off their asses, with a smile tugging at the corner of Hinata's mouth. And organize something like this, especially that old fart Horensa, and during a storm no less, when all those old bones of theirs will be full of pain and aches, suckers. Unexpectedly, Hinata had swiftly taken over as Arlia's moderator of her more rash behaviors. Just because you don't get old Arlia, you don't need to rub it in. What was surprising was that she was able to do this to some extent. Gomen, complained Arlia. But the clincher is that they've done all this when your father is out of the compound. That just there is enough to send warning bells ringing throughout your head. In private, Hinata concurred with her. This is why she was spying on the elders while doing something that was a little bit out of character for her. The best part was that Hinata was completely hidden because the Byakugan were unable to see through the ceiling due to their own exaggerated sense of paranoia. That worked both ways, though, because Hinata was now limited to using her sense of hearing to obtain any information. There was only one issue. "Can you hear anything, Hinata?" "No, not a thing." Arlia cursed. In contrast, Hinata was taking a positive action. She fumbled in her kunai pouch, pulled out a plain storage scroll, and opened it to reveal a simple drinking glass. "Dear." Ignoring her boarder, Hinata put her ear on the base after firmly pressing the glass against the wooden ceiling. Arlia questioned, "Where did you learn that?" With surprise. Hinata gave her a mental eyebrow raise. "Right, Naruto." Silly question. Hinata was able to understand what was being said when the conversation abruptly leapt out to her. Takashi's voice cracked at the end of his question, "Are you mad?" Horensa replied in a gruff voice. "Are you? We have, at this moment, the perfect opportunity to right the wrong that we have had committed against us." Takashi gave a loud snort. "I'm not entirely sure about that. What guarantee do you have that Yurei is indeed in prison?" "The thing about remaining inside a person is that you lose awareness of, well, everything," Arlia gasped. It was one of the aspects of her circumstances that Arlia typically found appealing. But now it was just frustrating. Arlia was spoken to by Hinata. Naruto had convinced her clan to issue an apology, she had been informed. So, he had most likely been the one who committed the wrong against the Hyuga. Did that imply that Naruto-kun was incarcerated? Hinata asked the goddess in a worried tone, "Arlia, is Naruto-kun in trouble?" Their conversation was literally as quick as their thoughts. "If he isn't, then he's going to be," Griffin's response was. Concerned for her friend and crush, she questioned, "Is Naruto Yurei? What did he do to my clan?" As Arlia tried to come up with a way to explain to Hinata exactly what Naruto did without making her feel afraid of him, silence greeted her. She would not be better off putting a roadblock in the way of this relationship's development. "Thank you so much." Naruto being, well, Naruto, was a barrier in and of itself. Horensa's angry response to Takashi continued the conversation below them. An Anbu from the Hokage himself came and told Hiyashi that a man called Yurei was in custody and asked him to accompany them to interrogation room 3. That is a fairly strong guarantee, is it not? Takashi scowled. It does seem almost certain that Yurei is imprisoned, but are you willing to risk it? Yes, Horinsa declared right away. Arlia had another opportunity to respond to Hinata's question during a pause in the conversation beneath them. Naruto, while calling himself Yurei, played a prank on your clan. A prank that, although no one was really hurt, was still one of the most terrifying that I have ever seen. While doing so, he managed to open them up to the prospect of being not just clan folk, but kinfolk as well. Remember, Takashi cautioned, he's a Namikaze, for all we know the man might just be testing us. This time, a woman answered him, but Hinata was unable to identify her because her voice was too strangled as she spat the words out at Takashi. If he were testing us, then he would be testing Hiyashi as well. We all faced him in that room together, or don't you recall? She said. Takashi, who was only a few years older than Hiyashi and the youngest member of the council, snorted. His use of the term was disparaging. I remember everything that happened that night, Ba-chan, he said. I remember being woken up in my own room, unable to move. We're not allowed to talk about it, Horinsa growled. To ensure that none of the Hyuga clan would realize how severely they had been humiliated as the elders and as a clan, the council had constructed numerous safety nets. The simplest was that they were not allowed to discuss the incident. At everything, now, at least in part, Takashi was violating that rule. I remember, he continued, his tone rising above the reserved respect that suited a Hyuga, seeing a man bend over my body towards my wife with a knife in hand while I could do nothing. I remember the trip to the dojo. I remember each stop on the way here. Did you know that my eldest son was a guard that night? And I remember you, old woman, pissing yourself in fear when Yurei unleashed his ki. I remember you, Horinsa, keeling over, with a stopped heart and Yurei bringing you back from the brink. Horinsa reddened fiercely. His hatred stemmed from this. He had consistently maintained his belief in his own and the Hyuga's superiority. He believed he was a great man deserving of the title of head of the clan. And Yurei had destroyed the principles he had based his entire life on in a single blow. He thought he was an exceptionally skilled ninja, but this man killed him with a single glance. Looking into those cold eyes that kept changing from blue to red, flaying his very soul as they did so, made him feel more fearful and horrified than he had ever experienced in his entire life. His heart had just stopped. To escape that scourging terror, Horinsa had willed his heart to stop. But even in that case, Yurei had ruthlessly shown himself to be his superior by using only his own hands to restart his heart, not a medical procedure. Yurei had died him at her whim. Yurei had summoned him back at her whim. He was his absolute and total subordinate. Horinsa had never felt so frail. Hinata was solely to blame. But most surprisingly, mentioned Takashi. As Yurei spoke to us about what we had done to Hinata, I remember feeling guilt. Takashi's highly controversial statement caused a gasp from everyone in the room. Hinata clapped her hand over her mouth in the rafters, reprimanding herself for her outburst while simultaneously expressing amazement at the assistance she was receiving from an elder. Hissing. So, Horinsa choked out his words. You would side with that bitch out of feelings of what? Pity. Responsibility. Guilt. We do what is best for the clan. We always have and we always do. I don't just do this for Hinata. My concern is for the clan as well, Takashi growled. This statement was met with a startled silence. Hinata sighed above his head. I guess asking for one of these was too much to ask for. Say it, urged Arlia, for one of these old farts to genuinely stand by me. Now, didn't that feel good? Smiled Arlia as she probed. Reluctantly, Hinata acknowledged that it did, adding guiltily, almost, liberating. They grow up so fast, sighed Arlia. The pause came to an end below. A voice murmured, go on, Takashi, and Hinata had to strain her hearing to hear him. Why is this a benefit to our clan? Hinata has shown a remarkable improvement across the board ever since that night, Takashi responded immediately. Yes, Horinsa, he said loudly to the man, who had snorted tremendously. Even you cannot deny that. If she keeps growing, she might one day make a worthy heir. Yes, I did just say that, he continued, seemingly content with the enormous gasp this statement had caused, but that is all in the long run. In the short term, though, Yurei may be in jail right now, incarcerated, unable to do anything, but what kind of certification do we have that he will stay that way, Horinsa was the one to end yet another awkward silence. Your concern, Takashi, has been noted, but the votes have already been cast and you are, significantly, outnumbered. Hyuga Hinata will be branded with the caged bird seal in 10 minutes' time. At her sentence, Hinata froze, feeling the bile rise to the back of her throat. Arlia let out a loud curse. "No," said Takashi coolly, "she won't be." Horinsa questioned incredulously, "Excuse me?" "I refuse." Before the distinct sound of a Jukan strike striking solidly against flesh and the cries of protest filled the room, there was the sudden sound of one being deflected, followed by another and another. With an angry shout, Horinsa said, "You will concede." The glass had been superfluous now. Takashi appeared to be laughing in Horinsa's face. "Well, it can't very well happen now, can it? You just sealed all the chakra in my arm, and in case you've forgotten, I'm the Hyuga Seal Master. The only other person alive who knows how to make the cage bird seal is Hiyashi himself." Takashi seemed quite pleased with himself. "That just means that the seal may not be perfect," Horinsa said, her voice smooth and silky. After hearing that voice, Hinata struggled to stay conscious, her face drained of blood. She had only ever been more afraid when she had been abducted by Kumo and when she had heard Horinsa threaten Naruto-kun. You can't," exclaimed Takashi. Horinsa's voice took on a reflective tone as she asked, "I think you were the one who painted the seal onto your youngest child's head." "Higashi!" Takashi exclaimed uncontrollably, his voice twisted. As Hinata slipped out the window and ran for her freedom, Horinsa's vile laugh followed her, ringing in her ears and giving her wings of fear. He had been walking for what seemed like hours. Sometimes utterly nonsensical and always unpredictable, this man's mind was a labyrinth. Despite the fact that he was still walking in complete darkness, he had not yet been able to find any information about the man. That sense of wrongness, that sense of darkness, was the only thing that kept him going, that kept acting as a beacon to him. And now he was practically touching it. At last, he could see the stigma that had attracted him to it like a moth to a flame. This is where he discovered Yurei's astral form. The man's ankles and wrists were shackled to two enormous bars, and his feet were hanging far above the ground. After the continuous darkness, Inoichi blinked as a gentle glow radiated from his person and reflected off the filthy water below. Inoichi let out a sigh of relief when she saw the chains. At last, something had gone right. At the very least, Yurei had remained mentally restrained thanks to the seals and protective measures that had been installed in Interrogation Room 3. Then Inoichi called, "Hello up there." With a start, Yurei's restrained head jerked up and he looked directly into Inoichi's face. The head of Yamanaka grinned. He asked cheerfully, "Did you not expect me to get this far?" Yurei screamed, "Come no further," and Inoichi heard the tiniest trace of panic in his voice for the first time. The floor itself appeared to change and burst into spikes as the Mind Master snorted and took a step forward before jumping back. Inoichi whistled long and low. Inoichi only needed Yurei's silence to respond. "You have a very strong will, to be able to instinctively bend your own mindscape to its whim. I'll bet that you were the one to turn off all those torches and you didn't even realize it, did you?" Before Yurei could react, Inoichi pondered, "Whatever you're hiding, you must really want to keep me away from it," and then he dashed forward and got in. He had gotten past the bars. All he had to do now was discover what the man was concealing. With a soft sigh of defeat, Yurei said, "You fool," lowering his head to his chest. "I wasn't trying to keep it away from you. I was trying to keep you away from it." Puzzled, Inoichi turned to Yurei, where he could see the sewer's waters rising from their resting place, piling on top of each other, and then solidifying into something that looked like crystal. High overhead, Inoichi's eyes were drawn to the ceiling by a flickering red light. It appeared as though a non-existent crack in the ceiling was leaking a bubbling, blood-colored syrup. One drop fell. The eye was drawn to its luminous light before it struck the water below with a sizzle as steam rose from the surface. A single pinprick of bright orange light was the only feature of the roiling scarlet mass that slowly and rapidly ate away at the ceiling overhead, revealing an endless black maw high above that stretched on into infinity. As more of the blackness of the void was exposed as the ceiling was eaten away, the tiny light perforation that was the first thing to show through the hole from which the red substance was coming gradually grew larger. A horrified Inoichi soon realized that the ceiling had virtually vanished and that the light was actually decreasing rather than increasing. A pillar of fire, gathered from the hundreds, possibly even thousands, of torches that had once lighted the labyrinth of this man's mind, was hurtling down towards him. Inoichi threw his arms above his head in a futile attempt to defend himself just before impact. However, despite the firestorm's blinding illumination, the flames approached at an angle and crashed into an object that was still tens of feet off the ground, somehow remaining in the dark. Inoichi watched in horror as the flames swiftly spread across the object. No, the creature, before revealing its enormous body to his eyes. While the fire from above danced over his form, a fox lay there, glowing in its orange, gold, and dark blood-red garment. Its eyes were a bright scarlet, and each of its 9 tails was covered in a different shade of fire. The Kyuubi rose slowly to his feet, stretching as though he had just awoken from a pleasant slumber, his eyes closed, his fur illuminated by the very fire of hell, but he was unburned. With a yawn, the great fox opened his great jaws, and his cage was instantly filled with flame. Flame danced across the water's surface, crawled over the walls, and climbed into the air, leaving only a small half-circle of safety around Inoichi, which was made possible by decades worth of jutsu and protective seals that had been repeatedly layered into the room where Inoichi's body lived. Inoichi could still feel the unquenchable heat of those flames, though, the most intense of which came from Kyuubi's own dark orange flesh. The man was aware that even the smallest flecks of the demon in front of him would expose his mind and soul to the fox's touch and its every whim. Yurei yelled, "Don't hurt him too bad, Fuzzbutt," as more and more power was required to keep Inoichi safe. The chains holding him in place were glowing a bright cherry red. The tiny amount of killing intent that managed to get past Inoichi's shields caused him to cower in fear. And Kyuubi cocked his enormous head in his direction, looking at him with one blood-red eye. Kyuubi opened his mouth and roared, seemingly expressing his opinion about him. The flames were higher than ever before as Kyuubi's breath swirled throughout his cage. As all the power was used to protect the clan head, Yurei's chains suddenly melted, dripping harmlessly off his wrists and sending him to the ground. Inoichi was surrounded by symbols that glowed in a silvery light before breaking into innumerable fragments with a pealing bell sound. As Kyuubi's foul breath attacked his skin, the Yamanaka could smell it and feel its moist warmth. Inoichi could finally feel the heat of the flames as the seals failed, unable to withstand the demon's voice alone. He could also hear a voice in the cage, whose terrifyingly cold tone contrasted with the fieriness of his body. "Blood so pretty, blood so sweet. Find the blood, drink the blood and crack the marrow. The prey has come to us. Hear the screams, little screams, and loud scream, the pretty screams. Scream for us precious. Scream." Inoichi let out a scream as death and fire rushed toward him, their fingers clenching horribly. Inoichi had pressed himself against the cage's bars in a desperate attempt to escape as far away from danger as he could, but then a fist smashed through the crystal structure between them. In one violent motion, the hand grabbed hold of his coat and ripped him through the once impregnable wall, flinging him to the ground behind him. High into the air, flames of 100 different colors blended and combined to create an amazing display as the fire smashed against the cage's bars and broke upon it. There was only one word that came to mind for Inoichi, even though that same fire nearly killed him. He muttered, "Beautiful," in awe, then recoiled as the great fox screamed in fury at his fugitive victim. Inoichi, still barely able to move, was pulled to his feet and forced to look into the stony, angry, and frigid eyes of the Yurei. He said simply, "Get the fuck out of my head," and then he slammed his forehead into Inoichi's nose, driving him out of his head. For those who had spent the last 1.5 hours in Interrogation Room 3, it was a huge surprise. The Hokage himself had checked Inoichi's vitals to make sure he was okay after he had stood in the same spot for over 20 minutes. Luckily, everything appeared to be going smoothly. Nevertheless, as time passed, everyone's concerns grew. The room's seals suddenly broke, and Inoichi began to scream in fear before he flew violently away from Yurei. He was caught by one of the nearby Anbu, who then pushed the two of them into the wall with enough force to create a spider web of cracks. On top of the groaning Anbu, Inoichi lay with eyes so wide you could see the whites everywhere. In an attempt to ensure his safety, he looked wildly around the room while hyperventilating. The others looked at Yurei, who looked at them all equally with a sapphire gaze. He cracked his neck and twisted his head to the left and right idly. With a whip-like voice, Hiruzen demanded, "What happened?" Yurei gave a shrug. Inoichi-san just found out what happens when you enter the mind of a Jinchuriki. Higashi's protection was Hinata's first action. She refused to let the child be punished under any circumstances. After the elders concluded their meeting, they would immediately notify the guards that she should be placed under arrest, even if she tried to leave the compound. The instant she had made the decision to protect Higashi, she had forfeited any chance of choosing that course of action. Had she? She said, "Arlia? Could you give me a hand?" Curiosity prompted Higashi to inquire, "Who are you talking to, Hinata-sama?" With a hint of nervousness, Hinata answered, "My invisible friend." With a bright smile, Higashi said, "Oh, you have one too?" Hinata replied, "Yes, yes I do Higashi," with a warm smile. "Arlia," she pondered, "is there anything you can do?" Arlia said, "Just a moment, dear. I'm in the middle of swearing up a storm," in a somewhat icy tone. As dread started to gnaw at her stomach, Hinata said, "You mean you can't help me?" "Well, of course I'm going to help you," Arlia broke out. "Who does that old man think he is anyway? Threatening to seal you. Blackmailing the only elder who seems halfway decent with hurting his youngest daughter. I should storm in there myself and give him such a—" "Wait," Hinata cut in. Arlia actually stopped her tirade because she was so taken aback by this. "You said storm twice now. Can you make the storm any worse?" replied Hinata. "And if so, can you help me get through it?" A slow smile appeared on Arlia's face. "I'm afraid I can't, honey, that's out of my area of expertise, but I know someone who can." Despite Higashi's presence, Hinata felt nearly alone as Arlia left her thoughts. She planned to pay a visit to her longtime friend Susanoo. Ordinarily, a god would never submit to the caprices of another. But compared to Susanoo, Arlia had a few advantages. First of all, she was never normal. Second, Shinigami was her husband, and he was envious. 3. Susanoo had once unintentionally peeked on her during a shower as part of a drunken dare. Jiraiya had first-hand experience with the power of an angry husband's beating to override that of the husband's wife. When Minato beat the living daylights out of him for admiring Kushina's feminine figure, that was definitely the case. And then there was Arlia's father's case. Sadly for Susanoo, Shinigami was the first to learn of his violation. The storm god had already rushed to Kami, confessed his crime, and acquiesced to his divine wrath before he had even finished his beating. Compared to Shinigami's unholy wrath, it was far kinder. One of the worst things about angering the death god is that you can't even wish you were dead due to the fact that, in addition to him fulfilling your wish, you would be even more trapped in his grasp, in his own domain where, to be honest, he could do anything he wanted to you. This implied that Susanoo had essentially become Arlia's go-to person until Shinigami pardoned him and revoked his threats. She simply needed to wait for him to stop drooling and understand the true consequences for his health before threatening to flash him, and then she would have one storm god pleading for forgiveness. Therefore, Hinata only needed to avoid her clan for 5 to 10 minutes while Arlia worked out the details and made sure that nobody would be killed in the storm because she didn't want that to be on her conscience. In spite of this, Arlia made it very apparent that she was not bothered by Horinsa being struck by lightning. Arlia had to make a brief trip back home to ensure that nobody perished, and she informed her husband's shadow clone that nobody in Konoha should ever perish in the storm that night. After returning and realizing how much time had gone by, Arlia was quite impressed with Hinata. Even though it might not seem like much, it was much harder than it seemed to keep a 4-year-old girl entertained while avoiding nearly an entire clan. It was a lifetime of avoiding them and being ignored by them, Arlia explained. In Hinata's mind, Arlia said, "All right," and the girl jumped a little at her sudden reappearance. "You've got 5 minutes and then the storm's going to hit full force. It's going to last for about 5.5 hours. In that time, you cannot get caught. You've got the first 10 minutes as a window to get the heck out of here. After that, you're going to have to find shelter. It's going to be crazy for any normal shinobi to go out in the weather that's going to be going on here." Hinata gave a nod. "Higashi? Would you like to sleep in my bed tonight?" Higashi was enamored. Compared to her own pallet in one of the shared branch dorms, Hinata's bed was far superior. "Can I cuddle Foxy-kun?" she reluctantly inquired. Hinata's forehead got a tick mark. She kept a fox plush on her bed because, for some reason, Naruto always made her think of a fox, even though she knew it was ridiculous. Furthermore, Higashi asked to cuddle, which she wasn't totally sure she was comfortable with. "Yes, of course you can. I'll even make you some tea to help you sleep, MK," she said, smiling and shaking her head. "K," said Higashi. Hinata bid Higashi good night and left the room 4 minutes later. Without delay, Higashi left the bed and set "Foxy-kun" on Hinata's desk. She was unsure of the reason behind Hinata's eerie expression when she had asked to cuddle the toy. Overall, it would have been wiser to ignore Foxy-kun. Hinata made her way to the gardens by sneaking down the hallway. She should be able to cross the walls and reach the sanctuary once she gets there. If only. Hinata's heart fell. Horinsa and a posse of Hyuga from the main house and branches were standing in front of her. Horinsa rubbed his own spittle over his hands and exclaimed, "Hinata Hyuga, with pleasure. It has been decided that you are to be branded with the cagebird seal." Naruto was now being connected to a machine that had not been used since the Second Shinobi World War because he had refused to say anything more after making his declaration. In short, it compelled people to speak the truth while simultaneously projecting recollections of incidents onto a large screen. Due to the massive, continuous chakra drain that required the prisoner, in this case, Naruto, to supply it, it wasn't utilized very frequently. The drain would be lethal to most people, but they reasoned that if Yurei was who he claimed to be, and Inoichi attested to this almost violently, then he shouldn't have any trouble. Hiruzen finally posed the first query after the machine was operational. "Do you have any intention of harming Konoha?" Yurei said, "No," right away, and many people sighed in relief. "Are you a Jinchuriki?" "Yes," was the unwelcome response that came out of Naruto's mouth, even though he had made every effort to lie in order to demonstrate that their machine had no control over him. It seems to have done so. "Which of the Biju do you carry?" Everyone in the room became tense as Inoichi muttered a name. "Kyuubi." "Shit," thought Naruto. "Now what should I do?" "Tell them the truth. Only the truth, but misdirect them like hell. I can fiddle around with some of the images that they see, change faces and the like, perhaps give my own point of view, but I can't do anything about what you say. You've always been pretty good at talking, kid. Let's pray that it's enough." As Hiyashi put it, "That's impossible. Naruto is the Kyuubi Jinchuriki." Yurei chuckled aloud, as if regretting something. "Well, guess there's no point in hiding it. I've already told you, Hiyashi, I was there at Kyuubi's defeat." An image of the great fox appeared on the screen, with Shinigami's arm reaching out to grab him and hurling his strength in defiance against the death god. Minato was shown standing in front of the fox with his back straight and proud. At his side, Kushina was resolute in every way and gazing down lovingly at Naruto, the baby they both held. They were seeing things from Shinigami's perspective, even though the shinobi around them were unaware of it. The image depicted Shinigami taking half of Kyuubi's chakra into himself. From his perspective, it appeared as though the jutsu was being used to seal that half inside a random person. That was the day when Minato sealed Kyuubi into Naruto. But that is not all that he did. Minato first split Kyuubi in two. Kyuubi ran Minato and Kushina through with his enormous claws before using the Shiki Fujin on Naruto. "He sealed half into me. He sealed half into his son." A commotion erupted in the room upon hearing this declaration. Naruto? The Yondaime's son? The Kyuubi Jinchuriki? It just could not be, it was not feasible, and yet. "Yurei!" exclaimed the third. "That is an sulfur monosulfide class secret. You're the one who has got me hooked up to this machine, old man. It makes me tell the truth, remember? So I'm telling the truth?" Hiruzen's ninja stared at him, and he fell silent. Ibiki inquired, "What happened after the sealing?" Yurei gave him a tight smile. "I am bound to answer the Hokage, not you, Ibiki." Ibiki asked in the hopes that he would reveal something. "How do you know my name?" Yurei gave him a funny look. "We've already established the fact that I am related to the fourth. Minato believed in me more than almost anyone else, and I was entrusted with a mission unknown to anyone else. Do you really think that I would not know the name of Konoha's top interrogation specialist? I know many things, Ibiki. Hell, I even know about how you got those scars," he said with a sarcastic tone. Ibiki tensed up. Few people were fully aware of his scars. How could this guy be aware of it? "I admire you for your actions that night, and so, I'm willing to give you some information, say, a gift of respect," Yurei said, cocking his head slightly toward the large man. The interrogation specialist instinctively leaned forward. He had spent half his life collecting information, so when it was freely given and there was no possibility that it was untrue, he wasn't about to ignore it. The statement, "Idate is alive," Yurei stated simply. As though he had been physically hit, Ibiki rocked back on his heels. That was not what he had anticipated. He exhaled the question, "What?" Yurei gave a nod. "Yeah, alive and well, as a matter of fact. From what I understand, he's working with a friend of Tsunade's, still as fast as ever." That final remark was the deal-breaker for Ibiki, who felt completely taken aback and convinced that Yurei was in fact referring to his younger brother. "Yurei!" exclaimed Hiruzen sternly. Naruto shrugged and turned back to the old man, saying, "You are here to answer questions, not mess with Ibiki's head." That, in fact, had been his goal. He considered Ibiki to be the most dangerous person in the room at that moment, even more adept than Hiyashi at spotting deception. However, he was relieved that his mind was now too busy to focus entirely on Naruto. Sarutobi had seen right through the wry smile he was trying to hide. But he still felt a little bad about it. Although Ibiki was frightening, he was also a good man. What was the mission that Minato gave you? According to Yurei, his son will complete that mission, gently, to defeat the one who unleashed Kyuubi upon Konoha. The man who went by Toba's name showed up on the screen, his Sharingan eye visible to everyone. One of the Anbu exclaimed, "He's a Uchiha," with a start. Yurei laughed. He said, "An Uchiha, that's what he is," and everyone in the house could hear the quotation marks. "I've spent most of my ninja career chasing after an Uchiha." As the machine resisted the half-truths he was revealing, Naruto could now feel the strain. Sarutobi questioned, "Why can't you defeat this enemy yourself?" Yurei gave a headshake. "I call myself Yurei, and a spirit I am, nothing more than a figment of imagination. Hell, I'm not even registered as a ninja. Soon, Yurei will cease to exist, and then, Naruto, who will be the last Namikaze, shall finish the mission." As Naruto continued to speak in the third person, the strain was starting to hurt him, so he automatically pumped more chakra into the device. The tension subsided. Naruto blinked. "Wait, mentioned Hiyashi. You said you call yourself Yurei. Who are you?" Fear causing his mouth to dry up, Naruto froze. Shinigami cursed the boundaries he had set for himself as he barely stopped the image of Naruto's face from appearing on screen as the machine's compulsion took over. Said Sarutobi, "Who are you, Yurei?" Naruto had to open his mouth as the pain doubled. It was done. He was going to reveal his true identity to them. He had not succeeded. He was never going to be a ninja. Orochimaru would be joined by Sasuke. His life was now essentially over because of everything he had done. Furthermore, what would happen to Hinata after Hiyashi discovered that the threat to his clan was actually an 11-year-old boy? Desperation overcame him at this thought, and Naruto hung his head, ready to give up. "Weak," Kyuubi's raspy voice said. Naruto's head jerked upward. He mumbled, "What did you say?" Sarutobi asked again, assuming the man was addressing him, "Who are you?" Naruto felt that the phrase, "After all that you have done, not even I expected you to fail here," was extremely disparaging. Pathetic dead last. When Naruto responded to their query, rage boiled in his chest. As he spoke, the amount of chakra that pushed into the machine increased as he recalled everything he had done. "I'll tell you who I am. I am a man who has fought 3 of the legendary swordsmen of the mist. I am the man who defeated the Ichibi, Shukaku." The screen started to flicker with images. In preparation for his Kirigakure jutsu, Zabuza raised his hands. Over his shoulder, Kisame held the Samahata, lightning enveloping Raiga. And the one-tailed Tanuki, Shukaku, battling what appeared to be an uncontrolled Kyuubi. "I am the man who has fought against wielders of many Kekkei Genkai and proved myself their equal. I am the man who has defeated wielders of the Hyuuden, the Sharingan, the Byakugan and Crystal Jutsu to name but a few. I am the man who fought the last user of the Bone Pulse bloodline. I am a man who has witnessed a fight between all 3 of the Sannin. I am a man who has entered Orochimaru's lair to find a friend. Thrice have I fought the Snake Sannin, and once have I caused him to flee the battlefield." Pain. Naruto felt a kind of pain that he had never experienced before. His marrow felt like it was being filled with molten lead. His flesh was torn from his bones by red-hot hooks. It was less painful than when he had the chakra required to travel back in time, though. Even that had not been as painful as the time he roared his anguish to the heavens while holding Hinata's cooling corpse near him. That kind of pain could never exist. A room full of unconscious Hyuga, a woman surrounded by a pink crystal dragon, ice mirrors with an indistinct figure in the center, the Uchiha in the mask nearly receiving a Rasengan, and picture after picture scrolling across the screen. Hiruzen watched the screen remain motionless. With their summons at their sides, he witnessed his students engaged in combat. There were multiple photos of Orochimaru, but the final one showed him receiving a strong right cross in the face, which made him smile. "I am the man who has faced more S-class shinobi than most have ever seen, and I am still here. I have faced Itachi Uchiha, Kisame, the Biju without a tail, Sasori of the Red Sands, Deidara, the artist, Kakuzu of Waterfall, Orochimaru of the Sannin, and at least 9 others of lesser infamy, and yet I never rose above the rank of genin. I am the man who has been eaten and then defeated the Sanbi." The more chakra Naruto pushed into the machine, the more the pain grew. It was impossible that Yurei was the source of the issue because of the drain that the machine would have on most people. By this point, the machine was beeping in warning, and Anbu was frantically trying to determine what was wrong. Yurei kept seeing pictures of the faces she had mentioned. They were concerned when he mentioned S-class shinobi of lesser renown, A village could be in danger from even one S-rank shinobi. They might be even more dangerous because they were not well known but still met the requirements for that ranking. Many people gaped at a picture of the Sanbi with its head burning. Now that his own chakra was swirling around him and the machine was wailing a high-pitched alarm, Naruto's voice was raised. I am a man who has looked the Shinigami in the face and spoken to him as an equal. I am the man who has survived a broken neck, a lightning-encased fist thrust through my chest, twice, my heart held in the grip of another, being stabbed by the Kusanagi, being struck by the Raijin, being encased and crushed in hundreds of tons of rock. I am the man who has opened all 8 of the celestial gates and survived. I am the man who has held the body of the woman he loves in his arms and almost sold his soul to the Shinigami so that he could see her again. I am the man who has become as a spirit, for none of those I have spoken of will even remember my face, thanks to my greatest jutsu. I am a Jinchuriki. I am a Namikaze. The building trembled as a powerful thunderclap seemed to explode outside, and there was a rumble as the machine exploded due to chakra overload. All of the people in the room were blasted to the ground as Yurei's own chakra erupted in a solid wave around him, except for 2. Hiyashi exclaimed, Kaden, as his own chakra grew into a dome to shield him. Hiyashi moved swiftly when he noticed that Yurei's chakra had broken the cuffs that had bound him to the chair. 128 palms. Hiyashi's attack and Yurei's exertions caused him to lose consciousness and collapse to the ground. The third said coolly, thank you, Hiyashi, and moved forward. Quietly, Hiruzen remarked, wonderful that he managed to overload the machine. Hiyashi inquired, do you think it was still working? Hiruzen gave a nod. Of that I have no doubt, but to be able to erase so many ninjas' memories with a single jutsu? To open all 8 gates and survive? Hiruzen nodded. I can't let him go, not until I know who he is, and yet, how to hold him. He turned to face Hiyashi thoughtfully. Hiyashi, I am aware that you have dabbled in Fuinjutsu. Do you have any that will be able to at least limit his chakra? Hiyashi gave a slow nod. 1. Hiruzen questioned sharply, the cage bird seal? Hiyashi gave a headshake. No, an Uzumaki seal. As he continued to rub his hands together, Horinsa asked sourly, so, Hinata? The faint light glinted off a gold ring on his right hand. Do you have anything to say? Horinsa, the gods will be furious with you for this, Hinata muttered. Horinsa laughed. I'll take my chances, in 5, 4, 3. With an almost casual shrug, Hinata lifted her hands above her head. Your choice. She clapped her hands together in agreement. Just in front of Horinsa, and precisely in time with Hinata's clap, lightning struck the ground in a thunderclap, tearing the heavens apart. Hinata yelled, Ga, and gestured to the ground ahead. As thunder ripped through the air, several Hyuga fell to the ground as another lightning bolt ripped into the ground where she had pointed. With lightning, the spears of heaven, falling in a sheet in front of them, Arlia kept telling Hinata where to point. Innumerable streaks of burning energy tore at the outdoor dojo at the garden's edge, striking between Hinata and the elders, but none of it touched the gardens, which were Hinata's favorite spot. Everyone who stayed outside got soaked by the rain that fell. When Hinata lifted her hands to the sky in prayer, the biggest blow of all ripped into the earth between her and those who wished her harm. The intense light briefly blinded them, making them run blindly for the shelter that the buildings provided. The moment they were able to see again, Hinata slipped over the compound wall and leapt. She was caught in midair by the wind, which was strong enough to carry her 3 times as far as she had planned to jump before gently lowering her to the ground. Get here! Demanded Horinsa. As thunder roared overhead and lightning danced through the clouds, the wind retaliated with a howl that would flatten anyone still outside to the ground and the walls, preventing them from moving. All of the Hyuga in the room had the same thought, you first. Naruto regained consciousness with a quiet groan. He became aware, blearily, that no one else was in the room with him and that his face was pressed against a stone floor. He thus spent some time attempting to determine how many different locations his aches and pains came from. He became disoriented. Remind me again why I didn't just send a shadow clone to do this job? You did. It stopped for ramen, remember? Naruto let out a sigh. Curse you Ichiraku, and your irresistible culinary arts. Shinigami gave a shrug. All right. I was kidding. Joking. Exclaimed Naruto frantically. No. He sat up and looked around. The cell in which Naruto had been imprisoned was rather large, with a thick oak door and a small window that was barred with steel bars set deep into the wood. He was unarmed, of course, and oddly enough, the left arm of his long top had been neatly severed. Just below his shoulder, A spiral-shaped seal appeared to be tattooed onto his arm. You're kidding me. They gave me a tattoo? Shinigami gave a headshake. Not a tattoo, kid, a seal, although I think something may have gone wrong with that seal. He gave a brief summary of what had transpired while Naruto was unconscious. Retrospection. A member of the Anbu called out, Lord Hokage. Turning, Hiruzen faced his subordinate. Yes? The Anbu dropped to one knee and bowed to him. The storm is too strong for us to make our way through safely. We will have to wait until it blows over. Sarutobi's gaze lifted in astonishment, but he trusted the advice of his Anbu. We can make our way to the bottom level of Anbu headquarters underground from here. As I recall, there is a nice cell there that I am sure Yurei will be very comfortable in. The Anbu bowed his head to his leader and nodded. Lord Hiyashi, are you almost finished? The Hyuga Lord said softly, almost, Lord Hokage, as he completed the seal he was painting on Yurei's arm. Hiyashi painted the final, minuscule character of the seal, then used a kunai to prickle Yurei's other hand. Holding the blade above the seal center, he let a single drop of Yurei's blood fall into the seal network. There. Fuin. Hiyashi pushed himself back in shock as the seal burst into light, each of the numerous characters glowing a different shade of scarlet as they moved up Yurei's hand and arm, giving the impression that his skin was on fire, before circling the top of his bicep and coming to a bright stop in a flash of white light. Hiyashi's work resulted in a spiral, swirl-like seal, which made him blink foolishly. Yurei's skin seemed to have absorbed the ink. Furthermore, it had changed color, with gold flecks surrounding a red swirl in the center. He cautiously attempted the unsealing method of the Fuinjutsu, pale when it failed. Muttering to himself, well, that's never happened before. The end of the flashback. All right, so, tell me Shinigami, what does the seal do? Replied Naruto. No idea, he said with a smile. With a groan, Naruto attempted to access his chakra. The realization that such an act was impossible made him feel suddenly sick, and he swallowed. Naruto declared, boys, we're in deep shit. You don't know the half of it, sweetie, said a voice, barely containing its rage. The three inhabitants of Naruto's mindscape turned to confront a furiously irate Arlia, who had just left her ominously decorated door with pink flowers and a heart. Crap, they let out a whine. Arlia told them about the situation with Hinata after an effective tongue lashing and a promised beating that would be administered when there were no impressionable children around, a fact for which Naruto would always be thankful, in which she chastised them for being foolish enough to be caught and for not inviting her to accompany them. Naruto said, so, let me get this straight, slowly. I need to break out of a maximum security prison within the next 4 and a bit hours? Yes. Getting past the entirety of Konoha's Anbu, in their home turf as I do so. Affirmative. Not to mention Old Man Hokage. Naturally. And then escape through a storm that is currently being powered by Susanoo himself? I'm so glad you understand, Naruto-kun, Arlia said, grinning and giving him a dimple. Normally, this would be sufficient, but at the moment, Naruto was trying to will away a headache he felt coming on by massaging his temples while his eyes were closed. He said, and if I don't, then Hinata is likely to get the cagebird seal, exhaustingly. Shinigami stated rationally, in which case you're going to have to do something to the Hyuga clan, after all, you left them with some rather impressive threats. Naruto grimaced and nodded. Thing is, I'm not sure that I'll actually be able to go through with them. I don't know if I can really be that cold. Yeah, then stop moaning kid, and get us out of here already. Then, all you need to do is run for freedom, Shinigami said with a smile. With the suddenness of an unexpected lightning strike, Naruto's head shot up as he had an idea. He glanced around quickly and saw a flat, stone floor with no dust to speak of, a metal bed that was bolted to the wall but had one sharp edge, the sound of a guard's heavy, pacing footsteps outside. He assumed it was a male and, most importantly, the front door opening outwards. He took the Namikaze emblem off his jacket's intact right sleeve and twirled it in his fingers. The words, I got an idea, he smiled. An idea that is so crazy, it just might work. The lone Anbu stationed outside Yurei's cell let out a dissatisfied sigh. How could he have earned this? The job was totally unnecessary. Even though the man was a Jinchuriki and dangerous, he was in a cell that was notoriously unavoidable. There was no way for any of the Sannin to escape this prison. It goes without saying that this was pretty boring to the relatively new recruit to the Anbu. He was taken aback when he sensed the prisoner's hints of murderous intent. He dismissed it with a shrug. In any case, the production of killing intent did not require chakra. However, The degree of killing intent increased steadily until it was impossible to ignore. Shivering a little, the Anbu went to the doorway and opened the window flap to see how the prisoner was doing. In the middle of what appeared to be a summoning circle, but one more intricate than any he had ever seen, he was startled to see Yurei sitting in a meditative position. The Anbu could see the blood-stained corner of the metal bed, where Yurei must have cut himself to paint the seals, and it had been made completely of blood. He said, "What are you doing?" "Summoning the Kyuubi," was Yurei's calm, eye-closed response. "You can't do that," yelled the Anbu. Yurei responded, "Watch me," without shifting. His killing intent suddenly surged to a level never before seen by his guard in all his years, with the exception of the one time he faced Kyuubi. Did he see red chakras swirling around his seated form, or was it just his imagination? Fear clouding his judgment, the Anbu knew his duty and refrained from running for assistance, confident that the demon would be freed before he could enlist the aid of others. The Anbu acted quickly, slamming the door open and taking a full-force sock in the nuts. The crunching sound of impact made Naruto wince. In front of the door, his clone had been kneeling on the ground, out of sight. The clone rushed upwards as the Anbu pulled open the door, putting all of his weight, shoulder, and legs into a single, devastating blow that struck its mark. Thankfully unconscious, the Anbu crumpled silently. Naruto, feeling sorry for him, pulled him into the cell and laid him on the bed before leaving, making sure to lock the door behind him. Wondering, "I can't believe that actually worked," he said. "Course it worked." His clone cried out, "It was our idea." With a sigh of relief as a Rasengan materialized, Naruto bowed his head in recognition of the point before attempting to direct chakra to his hand. He could access his chakra outside the cell, but it appeared to be much less than usual, less than a quarter total. In addition to whatever Hiashi's seal had done to him, blowing up that machine took a tremendous amount of energy. "No shadow clone spamming for you then." Slowly, Naruto nodded. His clone smirked as it leapt at him and hanged back into the Namikaze emblem, which Naruto grabbed out of the air and carefully pinned back to his sleeve. "Then I won't dispel this one." "Now, which way is out?" "At this time, there is only one path accessible to you," Shinigami said icily. "I suggest you take that." A patrolling Anbu tackled Naruto to the ground after he had traveled about 40 meters. The Anbu had pinned Naruto to the ground with his wrist high up on his back before he could stand up. He could feel where a raised part of the floor dug painfully into his ribs, and the chakra-enhanced grip felt like steel bars wrapped around his wrist, grinding the fragile bones together. "Be advised. Subject Yurei is on the loose, bottom floor, sector." Naruto exclaimed, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." The Anbu raised his head instantly, looking for the new, non-existent threat. The preoccupied shinobi relaxed his grip on Naruto's wrist as he did so. Just enough, but not much, to give Naruto space. A huge error. Even though using chakra to strengthen your limbs could give you much more strength, it would take more than a second to adhere yourself to surfaces unless you had extremely high chakra control. This meant that the Anbu was at risk at the moment. Slithering out of his attacker's loose hold, Naruto got a knee underneath his body and drove his newly freed elbow into the solar plexus of the Anbu. With the full weight of his hanged body, Naruto grabbed the Anbu's shirt at the throat, twisted it, and threw it off him and against the wall using both arms and legs. Not to be outdone, the Anbu rolled to the ground and faced Naruto, but Naruto had followed the Anbu he had thrown, and by the time the ferret-masked Anbu raised his head, Naruto's kick had hit the man's head more than halfway. The mask cracked when Naruto's sandaled foot struck the Anbu in the mouth. The Anbu retreated in a stunning blow. Naruto leapt forward as soon as he was upright, slamming his shoulder into the man's abdomen. However, as the double-fisted blow to Naruto's back and the right knee to his chest could attest, he wasn't an Anbu for nothing. However, when Naruto struck the back of the ferret's left knee with his left fist while his right shoulder was still in the man's stomach, he had nothing to support himself with because one of his knees was off the ground. The Anbu fell onto Naruto's back as the leg crumpled. Startled, Naruto abruptly stood up, launching the Anbu into the hard rock floor headfirst. Aware that the Anbu would have cushioned the blow with his arms, Naruto kicked a mule behind him, directly into the Anbu's already battered abdomen. Naruto kicked the Anbu in the head, knocking him unconscious as the blow landed on his back. Was the last one really necessary? It was good, thought Kyuubi. Overkill is underrated in my opinion. When Kyuubi finished removing the Anbu's kunai and shuriken, Naruto rolled his eyes, seemingly unsurprised by his remark. He didn't have time to restrain him. Naruto blessed the durability of his layered henge as he stretched and cracked his back. He has discovered that a Rasengan is the only weapon capable of shattering a 5-layered henge thus far, and if he were struck by one, he would have far more serious issues to deal with. It had been challenging at first to maintain that many layers, but he had found a relatively easy solution. It was a recycling seal of some sort that simply maintained the chakra's circular motion while reducing the amount lost. Naruto was aware of the device's utility even though he did not fully comprehend its workings. He continued to run. After about 30 seconds, Naruto turned a corner and nearly collided with a special Jonin. He acted instinctively without ever thinking. Naruto would have already lost if the Jonin had been successful in sending a kunai into his leg after grabbing him by the front of his shirt. Swiftly, Naruto slapped him and rocked back. He held his wrist loose and his 4 fingers together in a cup shape. He could still feel the kunai's line of fire burning across his leg, but the loud echo of the slap to the Jonin's ear confused him for a vital half-second. It was over by then. The Jonin's head was thrown to the side when Naruto delivered a forceful elbow strike to the head after the slap. A headbutt followed the elbow strike. Fortunately, the hit was on the man's arm. The man squatted in agony as Naruto moved in for the finish, sending a knee into his groin and another into his nose. The man's nose broke and his head rose, causing blood to spurt out. Naruto then used his low-powered Rasengan to propel the man into the wall, where his head whipped back, crunching against the rock and knocking him out before he even slid down the wall and hit the back of his head on the ground. Shaking his head in amazement, Naruto gazed down at his leg and saw the skin close in front of him. He had yet to fully adjust to his new healing factor. Naruto rolled the limp man from his back onto his side and continued forward. "What are you doing, sweetie?" queried Arlia. "Making sure he stays alive," concluded Naruto. Shinigami responded to Arlia on Naruto's behalf since she was unable to understand. "The man's nose is broken. On his back, unconscious, there is a chance that he'll end up drowning in his own blood. Not a very pleasant way to go." The sounds of running feet were picked up by Naruto's enhanced hearing. His little altercation had apparently drawn attention. 4 people, he counted. Naruto turned white. The sound of 4-to-1 odds did not sit well with him. Opening a door and running silently into a room, Naruto swore a little to himself and shook out what looked like a sheet. 3 Anbu, led by Hiyashi Hyuga, encountered the special Jonin that had been killed. He activated his Byakugan and told the Anbu that the Jonin was still alive, albeit unconscious. Hiyashi said, "I'll take care of him, you continue to search for Yurei." The Anbu confirmed, "Hi," and then, like good little soldiers, they dispersed to find him, opening doors and looking in every room. After turning the corner, Hiyashi stood up from his knees where he had been tending to the man on the ground and entered the room where Naruto was now staying. Byakugan was still active as he shook his head from side to side, reducing his blind spot. "I know you are in here, Yurei," he said, turning and locking the door. The words, "I can see you," he said menacingly. Naruto reinserted his camouflage cover sheet into his pocket and asked, "Then why did you send the Anbu away?" Hiyashi looked at him and cocked his head. "You brought me and my daughter back together, Namikaze. Your methods were unorthodox, yet they worked. I always my debts, Namikaze, and I owe you a great deal. You and Uzumaki-san, or Namikaze-san both. You being incarcerated leaves me in a very bad position for repaying either of those debts." Bewildered, Naruto questioned, "So, what? You're just going to let me go?" Hiyashi grinned a little. Hiyashi deliberately cracked his knuckles in both hands before rolling his head in a way that would have been more impressive if his hair had been longer. "Not quite. I also owe you for the manner of how you brought us together. Good intentions, or otherwise, aside, you made me believe that my clan was dead. And in here, you can't use any ninjutsu for fear of bringing the Anbu down on your head. I'm going to enjoy this." After Naruto counted 4 minutes and 42 seconds, Hiyashi departed the room with a sigh of satisfaction that was unusual for the head of the Hyuga. "Now, Namikaze, we're even." Yurei's voice sounded a little mangled for some reason. Horinsa plans on sealing Hinata with the cage bird seal. He even managed to blackmail your sealer Takashi into doing it by threatening his youngest daughter. Hiyashi froze, clenching his fists so tightly that fresh blood started to trickle from his injured knuckles' exposed skin. He was an expert in the gentle fist, but there's always something inexplicably satisfying about slapping someone across the face with your closed fist when you're at odds with them. It was odd how your attention wandered when in the middle of an icy rage. Hiyashi snorted. He turned again and bowed his head toward the person in the room. Without questioning how Yurei could have known this even while imprisoned, she said, It appears that I am in your debt once more, Namikaze-sama. I will take care of it, however, I would ask one more favor of you, Hiyashi responded. Hiyashi went on, observing Yurei's arm twitch in agreement. Naruto has been spending a lot of time with my daughter. In fact, she talks about him often. Please pass on the message that if he ever does anything inappropriate, or if he ever hurts her, I will make the light spar that you and I have just had seem like a love tap when I get my hands on him. Hiyashi paused and turned around. One more thing. With sufficient force behind the throw to embed the first eighth of the blade in the stone floor, his father's tri-pronged kunai struck the ground approximately 2 inches from Naruto's face. This is yours, I believe. Hiyashi had just given him the worst beating he had ever experienced, bar none, and Naruto gulped, still crumpled on the floor and nearly immobile. Well, bar none except that this time he hadn't had a Chidori pressed into his chest. Hiyashi's final threat, more accurately, a statement of fact, repeated repeatedly in Naruto's mind after he had left. Shinigami? Fuzzbucket? Yeah, Kyuubi said grudgingly as the two immortals answered. Remember when you said that one day I'd understand why a father-in-law is higher up in the food chain? Yeah, I think I understand now. The only one who laughed was Arlia. That reminds me, sweetie. I was just going through the memories of your interrogation when I came across something interesting. Oh, man who has held the body of the woman he loves in his arms. Care to tell me what you meant by that? In order to escape Arlia's taunting, Naruto blushed and wished his legs had enough feeling to allow him to return to Anbu-infested territory. Naruto soon found himself back in the hallway, looking for a way out, kunai ready. Before continuing, he had stopped one more time. A tiny sealing kit had been carried by the special Jonin. Naruto had taken the time to create a single, highly specialized sealing array using wires and kunai. But in this case, it wouldn't help him. At a T-junction, where he could either go straight ahead or turn right, Naruto cautiously looked around the corner using his father's kunai as a mirror. It wasn't good. The turn-off to the right was guarded by an Anbu and 2 Chunin. He had no idea how he was going to get past these 3, even though that meant he was headed in the right direction. After getting an idea, Naruto tried to merge with the wind by closing his eyes and drawing on the surrounding air. Well, he made an effort, but to no avail. Shinigami responded to his unspoken query. You draw on the wind, Naruto. I told you, this is an internalized ninjutsu. In fact, the technique is the closest thing to turning yourself into an elemental possible. Right now, you're underground, surrounded by earth. There is no wind for you to feel and as such, you can't use the technique. With a fluid curse, Naruto slammed his head against the wall and looked up at the ceiling. The bright lamp almost directly overhead made him blink his eyes as he did so. His face lit up with a slow smile. Softly, that might work, he said. Naruto worked rapidly, making the 3 required hand signals. Inhaling and exhaling, Naruto spun around to face the shinobi at the end of the hallway, positively pumping chakra into his hands as he felt it arrive. Food and Kazutama Seisha. The Anbu gave a shout of recognition before a solid, but blunt, ball of air, traveling at just over 90 miles per hour, struck him in the face. Although chakra draining, the wind ball volley, also known as the Kazutama Seisha, was a reasonably easy jutsu. It simply created baseball-sized balls of wind and launched them from the user's palms. It wasn't lethal, however, it had 2 advantages, speed and quantity. It was very similar to automatic fire because Naruto could continue shooting them in a volley because there was no time spent honing the wind. At the moment, he was using his left hand to fire 3 Kazutama every 2 seconds and his right hand to fire 2 every second. Down the hallway, Naruto continued to apply pressure to the 3 ninja, hosing them down until the Anbu spat out a mouthful of mud, forming an earth wall behind which they could take cover. Together, the 2 Chunin produced a tremendous fire jutsu that swept down the corridor, scorching anyone inside, and blew through the wall. However, nobody was present. With her palms extended almost casually, Yurei whirled around the corner. However, his jutsu precisely struck the lamps that had lit the hallway, sending them into obscurity. They were struck by a number of additional Kazutama before the Anbu sent it down the corridor with a flare, which allowed them to see Yurei's retreating form. When they discovered that Yurei had continued to destroy the light fittings on his way down, they immediately started the chase, lighting their way with flares. Naruto's first reaction was to exhale in relief, but instead he laughed softly as he removed the hinge that had made him appear to be a piece of the wall debris, the Namikaze clan emblem no longer on his shoulder. Spitting a globule of blood to the side, Naruto undid the hinge that had covered his mouth. He had been hit in the mouth by one of the rocks that had bounced around the corner. Luckily, it would soon heal. Naruto yelled devilishly, "So long, suckers!" in their direction. As he turned to go on, he was struck in the jaw with such force that he was not only knocked to the ground but also skidded for a considerable amount of time. With a small groan, Naruto turned his head to look at the person who had struck him. He continued to look up until he saw Asuma Sarutobi's bearded face. Naruto whimpered, "Help me, suckers," as Asuma assumed a ready stance with his knives already out without saying anything. Still on the ground, Naruto yelled, "You wouldn't be able to direct me to the bathroom, would you?" Asuma merely laughed. "Thought not." Asuma jumped back a little to give himself some breathing room in case his opponent threw them, but Naruto acted swiftly and flipped himself to his feet, drawing out 4 kunai. But when Naruto hurled a kunai into each corner of the rectangular hallway, 2 on the floor and 2 on the ceiling, the large man raised an eyebrow. Since each pair of kunai was connected to a single wire and the kunai dug deeply into the stone, the 2 pairs formed an X shape in the center of the hallway. When both wires were intercepted, Naruto seized them and muttered, "Fuin." At that moment, a clear blue veil of chakra that emanated in a wave from each of the ready-made kunai sealed the hallway. Asuma gave a small nod. "You first take out the lights to give you cover. The shadow clone leads the enemy away, using the same jutsu as you to further confuse them. Once you've got them out of the way, you release your genjutsu, get past their position and then seal it off to prevent reinforcements coming, while simultaneously guarding your back. Excellent use of tactic." Naruto told Shinigami and the others, "To be honest, the only thought I had was that I can see in the dark and they can't. But the sealing technique shows that, whoever you are, you're not just a rookie, and you streamed wind chakra into those kunai to get them so deep into the stone, so." Asuma started to channel his own element into his knives, giving them a characteristic blue tint. Asuma hesitated a little as Naruto gulped and drew his father's kunai, channeling his own wind element to the metal, making it nearly as long as his mother's sword. After thinking, "Shit," he jumped into the battle and met Asuma halfway. Asuma took control of the battle right away, tearing and cutting Naruto's clothing, which instantly soaked with blood. Shortly after a second fight, he had severely cut Naruto's leg, making it impossible for him to move and dodge as well as he had. Asuma caught a desperate double-handed overhead blow from Naruto between his crossed blades. A high-pitched whine that irritated the ears was produced by the 2 wind chakra blades grinding against one another. Asuma appeared dissatisfied. He looked at Naruto between their blades and said, "I expected more," shaking his head a little. His face was spat in by Naruto. The spittle struck Asuma in the eye, and he recoiled at the sudden movement. With his left hand flicked down in that moment of uncertainty, Naruto executed a Kaisen that drove Asuma's knee into his thigh, supporting all of his weight on his allegedly injured leg, and cut deep into his right arm, just below the shoulder. Asuma gasped when he felt what appeared to be his opponent's greave drive a spike into his leg. Naruto backflipped away from Asuma, withdrawing his hanged knee blade, showing that he had somehow recovered from his previous injuries, albeit he still slightly preferred his leg. "Don't underestimate me. True, when it comes down to it, most of my taijutsu will never hold against a master and my blade work is pathetic. What do you expect? I'm an overkill specialist. Either I take him out hard and fast, or I use an over-the-top jutsu to finish him. Problem is, that most of my jutsu are lethal and I don't want to kill any Konoha ninja. The rest of them are either useless in such an enclosed space, or highly chakra draining. Breaking out of that prison took a lot out of me, so sue me." Asuma nodded, contemplating whether to summon Kurenai from hiding and apply genjutsu to him. However, that would be equivalent to conceding defeat. He made 4 hand signals, albeit a little more slowly than usual, and yelled the name of his jutsu after saying, "Fortunately for me, not all of my jutsu are unusable and judging by how quickly you've been recovering, you can take this." Kaden. Heizekisho. The man in the cloud of burning ash screamed in agony, and Asuma winced. He had not been giving it his all against him. Attempting to capture him was far more difficult than attempting to kill him, so he refrained from setting the pile of ash on fire. Because of this, he only witnessed the kunai, driven by a Kazutama and infused with wind chakra, emerge from the ash cloud at the last second. He tried desperately to move aside, but his leg was not supporting him. The stab had been exactly in the middle of a thick cord of muscle, but no artery had been cut. The kunai sliced into Asuma's flesh as he stumbled, some of its edge dulled by Asuma's own hurriedly made wind blades. However, it had cut an artery and punctured his stomach. The large man was likely going to bleed out in roughly 7 minutes due to his heavy bleeding. Wondering why Asuma had not attacked again, Naruto emerged from the smoke, limping. At that moment, he emerged from the cloud of ash and saw his rumpled body on the ground. He swore, "Shit," and rushed to the man who would be the next Ino Shikacho team's sensei, applying pressure to the wound right away. The entire world around him started to shift as he did this. "Kurenai-san," Naruto uttered, straining to focus on the current task. "I advise you to release that genjutsu and help me with Asuma's wounds before he bleeds to death." Kurenai advanced, her jutsu dormant. She couldn't help but rush to Asuma's side despite her misgivings about this man. Yurei yelled, "Keep pressure on the wound." Yurei let go of his own hands and sliced into his blackened jacket, extracting a tiny bottle of red pills as Kurenai did so. "What are you doing?" Kurenai bluntly inquired. The Namikaze took 3 pills and pushed them into Asuma's mouth while rubbing his throat to ensure he swallowed, keeping him alive. "Here, use this," he said, handing Kurenai a towel. Not having witnessed him henge it into being, the kunoichi blinked at the fluffy object, then seized it and applied pressure to Asuma's abdomen. "You won't get away with this, you know," Kurenai abruptly stated. "I will take you out." Yurei gave a snort. Yurei reached forward and jerked the kunai out of Asuma's stomach in a single, harsh motion, unplugging the hole made by the knife and allowing blood to flow more freely. "Is it just me, or are you admitting that you have feelings for Sarutobi here? Remember, we're ninja and our loved ones can be torn away from us at any moment. As for me not getting away," he turned and fled after saying, "Try and stop me and your boyfriend bleeds to death." Naruto felt Kurenai's cries of "BAASSSSTARRRRDD," but the kunai had to emerge. Before drawing the knife, he had waited until he could see Asuma's healing progress to a point that was comparable to his own, thanks to the pills he had given him that were made from his own blood. Uzumaki blood or not, Asuma would not have been able to fully recover if he hadn't. Though he hadn't been ready to take the chance, Naruto assumed that the freshly healed flesh might have been able to push out the blade. There was no question that Asuma would survive. He was reassured by this thought as he rounded the last corner and came to a stop, facing the Hokage and 4 Anbu. "That's not fair. Kid, there's an empty space above you," Hiruzen said softly. "End of the line, Yurei. Give yourself up," but beneath that was a firm order. Yurei clenched his fists on either side of his body and stared at the ground without uttering a word. Suddenly, his hands opened, revealing a whirling gem of pure white chakra in each palm. The gem was so bright in the dimly lit tunnel that it could blind the shinobi in front of them. He hurled them both in front of him as one, forming a veritable wall of lethal wind. Without wasting any time, Naruto used a gazebo and 3 Kaisen to cut a triangle into the ceiling above him. He then blasted the stone out of the hole and leapt through it, scraping himself in the process. He entered a room that was deserted. Heavy door, no windows. "Up, kid, up, ceiling's too thick to cut your way through, gonna have to be something bigger." With a nod, Naruto united his hands to form a Kage Bunshin, and an Odama Rasengan materialized. On this one, Naruto had expended half of his remaining chakra. His clone used its own chakra to perform as many Kaisen as it could, weakening the ceiling. When it had just under half of its chakra left, a kunai struck it in the middle, dispelling it. "Time to go." Naruto jumped, holding the upgraded Rasengan above his head. It might as well have been cobwebs on the ceiling. Naruto tore through the roof 3 stories up and confronted the storm's full force and wrath. He lay on the roof of the Hokage Tower, nearly exhausted by chakra, the whole structure and its inhabitants below him in ruins. Naruto lay on his back with the storm surrounding him, gasping for air that would not come, nearing chakra exhaustion. He felt the wind all around him as he struggled to his feet and turned onto his side. However, the storm had subsided, at least a little, and a large number of shinobi were now outside, preparing to confront him. "I thought you said the storm would be too powerful for people to go outside." Arlia swore. "It appears that Susanoo recognizes you. He wants to see how you handle yourself." "Now," shouted Naruto. "Yes. Now." Naruto shut his eyes, felt, and suppressed his first impulse to blaspheme. He sensed the rain hitting his face, the air currents swirling around him, and the precise locations in the atmosphere where the slightest touch would have the biggest impact. Naruto sent his chakra to 4 specific points in the air in the form of a Kazutama, which exploded as he spoke, while the shinobi below him attempted to reach the top. He was immediately in the center of a wall of air that was swirling around him at the speed of a tornado. Naruto believed he had found some respite for the time being, but the Anbu surrounded him after entering through the roof. After surveying the surroundings, their captain turned to face the weary Yurei. Use of lethal force, authorized. As though he were thirsting for the wind, Naruto drew on it and drew deep in a panic. Even as the Anbu started their hand signals for the jutsu that would kill him, he could hear the Shinigami yelling at him to stop, almost like it was in the background, but it made no difference. This was so much easier than the last time he drew on the wind. And the world changed for him. He moved at what appeared to be normal speeds, taking advantage of the wind's speed, while everything else slowed to a snail's pace. Why shouldn't he be able to sense everything around him? He had joined the wind, after all. Every Anbu sent jutsu at him, but he was prepared. With a staff composed of solid, pure wind in his hand, Naruto shaped the air itself to his will. A lightning strike came hurtling in his direction from the first jutsu. By somehow absorbing it and holding the lightning inside his staff, Naruto was able to block it. A boulder of sprang forward at him as 3 Anbu finished their jutsu, while the other 2 used Suiryuden. Naruto slammed his staff on the ground, ignoring the water dragons, and used it to propel himself into a vertical kick that sent a wind blade slicing through the boulder. Naruto let out a little cry of effort and hurled his staff like a javelin into the narrow line his Kazekin provided. The staff, enhanced by wind and lightning, bore through the rock with ease until it reached its center, where it exploded in a wind chakra explosion, pushing the boulders 2 halves apart. With his arms folded across his chest and palms facing each other, Naruto stood erect. As the boulder's 2 halves passed by on his left and right sides, he was unfrightened. When he sensed that the moment was right, he used 1 Kazutama from each hand. The storm had given them strength, and it only took 1 to send each half of the boulder hurtling away from him. The Anbu who had used the jutsu was struck by the earth, which smashed through the water dragons with enough force to send them hurtling toward the tornado wall. Each Anbu flew through a sudden opening in the wind wall when Naruto casually gestured, but the boulder that followed was so finely cut that it looked like dust. Unfortunately, his act of kindness exposed him to Kei's no Yaiba, the next jutsu. It caressed his skin affectionately. Why would the wind injure itself, after all? Karyuden. Naruto was able to make out every detail of the dragon of fire as it approached him. He grinned. Wind style. Void. Heat, fuel, and oxygen are the 3 things that fire needs to burn. The fire will go out if you remove one of those 3. This specific jutsu produced an environment devoid of oxygen and wind. With the wind itself, however, Naruto was capable of much more. He compressed the air into a tiny column that curved around his body rather than distributing it randomly. Following that column, the fire struck the shield of the void, launching itself at the lightning user and sending him hurtling through the wind wall. The wind rushed in to fill that gap as Naruto let go of the jutsu. He spun that wind around himself and hurled it at the wind user, then a Kazutama. He was successfully removed from the battle by the 2 wind forces. Naruto saw the sharp tips of stone rise slowly, oh so slowly, from the ground as the earth user slammed his hands onto the ground. Almost apathetic, he leapt to his feet, another staff in his hand, the wind catching at him. Naruto drew the wind near his staff and caused it to swirl while straining with his greatly depleted chakra reserves. It kept swirling and condensing until even he started to experience some discomfort from holding onto it. He raised it above his head and, as he returned to earth, shouted it into the ground. The stone spikes were destroyed in a wave as the wind exploded outward. The wind ripped through the tornado like wall, dispelling the Anbu as it went, leaving them unable to avoid the wave and flung from the tower roof like flies in the wind. Since the wind was the only thing holding him up at the moment, Naruto dared not let go of it and knelt on 1 knee on the ground. A tremor in the ground beneath him caused him to catch his breath, and when he raised his head, he saw the 3rd Hokage rise smoothly from the stone floor. "Oh, come on," he whispered to himself. Hiruzen simply surveyed the devastation surrounding him. He gave a headshake. "Why did you come to me?" Naruto blinked. "Excuse me?" The Hokage gave a shrug. "You obviously don't want to be tied down. We never knew a thing about you and yet you showed yourself to me alone. What was your reason?" Naruto nibbled at his lower lip. Abruptly, he said, "Assure me that you will give Naruto the sword." The elderly man furrowed his brows. It was his mother's, he uttered quietly as he realized. "Granted, on the day of his graduation. I found information regarding Orochimaru, the new leader of Sound. He plans to invade Konoha." Sharply, the Hokage took a breath. When the playful war comes to the leaf, the snake will strike, in the final hour." Hiruzen's head cocked. When he looked up, he saw Yurei leaving. "Thank you." With a sigh, Hiruzen reluctantly praised his perseverance. Saying, "I can't let you just disappear," he raised his hands in a jutsu pose. Yurei turned, his back to the roof's edge, and grinned at him. He spread his arms wide and allowed himself to fall off the roof, saying, "Remember, I'm a ghost. What does not exist, cannot disappear." Hurrying to the edge, Hiruzen looked down and saw nothing. It seemed as though he had just vanished, as though the storm had wiped out all traces of him. Hiruzen was joined by an Anbu. "Shall I send out the search parties, Lord Hokage?" Slowly, Sarutobi shook his head. "Don't bother. He means us no real harm and we would not find him anyway. Get me Iruka and the upcoming Jonin sensei. You'll find Kakashi in a hospital ward with Guy and Wolf. Tell Iruka that he is to prepare a graduation exam for next week. If what Yurei says is true, then the fresh genin will need all the training they can get." All but 2 of the people who would make up the rookie 9 slept soundly in their beds. While one fought to escape, the other slept in the bed of the person she had loved for many years. Everyone was oblivious to the fact that a few words had permanently altered the world that had been laid out for them. But will it be for the better, or for the worse? Arlia thought. The storm continued to rage outside. Surveying those who had interacted with Yurei, Sarutobi shook his head. To make their care easier, they had all been called into one room. The Hokage had hoped that he would also be able to receive a debriefing, but as he looked around the room, he became increasingly aware that this was unlikely to happen because hardly anyone there was both physically able and in the know to provide what he was looking for. One Anbu was splitting his time between trying to walk without a limp and trying to talk normally, but his high falsetto made it very hard to understand what he was saying. The medics were still trying to treat the massive concussion of the next person to reach Hiruzen's attention. The third lucky contestant was a mass of bruises, with a burst eardrum, a slight concussion, and intermittent blood flows from a broken nose. He was also reportedly delirious, as he insisted that his condition was brought on by being struck by the 4th Hokage's signature jutsu. To the embarrassment of the Jonin, he claimed that all of his wounds had been sustained in less than 3 seconds, a claim Hiruzen had to dismiss as implausible because only the yellow flash was capable of such rapid movement. In fact, he was pretty ashamed of it. Hiruzen chuckled to himself as he noticed Asuma down the line. Hiruzen was no longer a cage, feared throughout the elemental nations, after he saw his son lying on a pallet on the ground with his clothes soaked in the dark, nearly black-red blood that was the sign of an arterial wound. Rather, he was a father who was tired of worrying about his son. His voice was worried as he demanded, "Asuma, are you all right?" Asuma Kick flipped to his feet and rolled his eyes at his father's overprotectiveness. "I'm fine, Dad. See?" he said, spreading his hands wide to show that he was in fact healthy, only to have a smaller, slimmer, and paler-skinned hand take hold of one of his large olive-skinned hands. Only then did Hiruzen notice Kurenai, who had been sitting beside his son with her knees pressed against her chest, and he said, "Sit down." But, with her eyes flashing, she ordered, "Sit." With a gentle thump, Asuma suddenly put his bulky body down to rest. Kurenai reprimanded him and said, "You were severely injured. You will stay put until you've been examined by a medic." With a long-suffering sigh, Asuma lit a cigarette, only to have it snatched from his fingers and hit the floor. Kurenai gave him a charming smile, but Asuma glared at him, asking, "Wait, what the?" After rolling his eyes, Asuma reclined. "Fine, you do the report." "What happened?" inquired Hiruzen. "I take it that you faced Yurei." Kurenai gave a nod. "We came across a situation where an unknown was facing an Anbu and a pair of Chunin. The assailant was using some form of wind jutsu, which immediately caught Asuma's interest. It's not often that he comes across someone who shares his elemental affinity. We caught the tail end of the fight. Yurei blinded his opponents and used that time to strike a few light blows. When the Anbu used a flare, they found that their opponent had seemingly fled the scene, prompting them to follow. As it turned out, he had sent them on a goose chase and was about to run off." Kurenai broke off as a female medic arrived and gestured for her to check over Asuma. But soon, convinced that the other woman did not need to touch Asuma's chest so frequently, she began to grind her teeth a little. Asuma nodded, concurring with his romantic interest's previous statements. "I was impressed with his tactics and his wind style, so I faced him while Kurenai stayed in a backup position. She would step in if needed." Sarutobi examined his son from head to toe. He said dryly, "I take it that help was needed?" Kurenai shook her head, expelling thoughts of using genjutsu repeatedly to exact revenge. Hiruzen raised his eyebrows in surprise and said, "At first, no Asuma proved to be more than a match for him in close combat. For example, His kenjutsu sucked, Asuma explained. And his taijutsu wasn't that good either, especially when faced with a wind chakra augmented weapon. He proved to be extremely proficient in fuinjutsu, however, by creating a rather impressive barrier with just a single tag and some kunai. The third gave a nod. They had discovered that obstacle. After some research, they discovered that one side of it was totally impenetrable, while the other side only required a tiny bit of chakra to make the entire thing inert. Naturally, they had not anticipated that the object would then detonate with the intensity of a low-yield explosive tag. Luckily, nobody suffered any serious injuries. He used only taijutsu to defeat an Anbu and a Jonin, Hiruzen said mildly. Asuma acknowledged the point with a nod. Yeah, but neither of them are taijutsu specialists and I heard their report of the fight. They lost because of the same reason I did. Oh, Yurei, he fights dirty. He gets the first blow in, and then builds up enough momentum in the fight with a series of crippling blows that leaves his opponent with little to no chance to retaliate. He's the type of guy that will do anything to get any advantage in a fight. Hell, he spat in my face to get me to flinch. With that half a second he cut almost completely through the tendons on my shoulder and stabbed deeply into the muscle of my leg. The red-eyed Jonin simply shook her head when asked, I assume that was where you stepped in, Kurenai? Asuma clarified the reason. No, that's when I hit him with fire style, burning ash and got a wind-enhanced kunai to the gut in exchange. Strangely enough, that's also when I lost consciousness. Not liking to be so casually reminded of Asuma's near-death experience, Kurenai shuddered a little and carried on with their report. Yurei immediately went to Asuma's side. I thought that he was about to finish him off and hit him with my tree-binding illusion. The genjutsu took hold quickly, but not only did Yurei recognize it as such, he even called me out by name and asked me to stop or watch Asuma bleed out. That was when I realized that he was performing first aid. Hiruzen gave a slow nod. What was the extent of my son's injuries? Kurenai grimaced and continued. The ash had disrupted the wind streaming of the blade that struck him. Instead of going in and coming out the other side, the damage had spread. The kunai was in deep and had cut several blood vessels, one of which was a major artery. It had also perforated his stomach. With a clonk, Hiruzen's pipe fell from his mouth and hit the floor. I think congratulations are in order, Kurenai, he said at last. I had no idea that you were such an accomplished medic. Kurenai gave a headshake. It wasn't me. Yurei and I kept pressure on the wound and Yurei gave Asuma what I thought were plasma pills. He waited for a while and then retrieved his kunai, leaving Asuma to bleed out. Hiruzen's face started to resemble the storm clouds outside. Had he been aware of this earlier, he would have ordered the kill rather than telling the Anbu captain to try to capture him without killing him. Only, he didn't bleed out. Instead, I watched as his flesh knitted together and healed right before my eyes. It must have been those pills, Lord Hokage. I don't know how, but, somehow, they healed him. For the first time, the medic raised her voice and interrupted, they did more than that. Oh? Sarutobi asked the medic, raising an eyebrow. She gave a headshake. The medic trailed off, trying to figure out how to explain her findings. Forgive me, Hokage-sama, I'm not saying that I don't believe Kurenai-san, but I'm detecting no trace of any wounds that have been recently inflicted. But that's not all, I've treated Asuma-sama before, she said. Sarutobi sensed a very well-veiled, but rather powerful, intent to kill as her voice faded to silence. Kurenai's murderous thoughts were not known to the medic, who went on with her explanation. The amount of scar tissue that Asuma has accumulated over the years has been decreased. Even the damage done to his lungs from his smoking habit has been mitigated. The third knew what those signs meant, so she didn't have to go on. Regeneration, exhaled Hiruzen. While the Hokage was still preoccupied, the Anbu captain who had ordered Yurei's death crept out of the room. He had to explain this to Danzo-sama. Gritting his teeth, Naruto pushed himself to stay in his fox form throughout the journey to his apartment. He sincerely hoped Shinigami had considered cautioning him about some of the more serious dangers of absorbing too much of the essence of the wind before he had done so. However, he couldn't deny that the experience of doing so had been truly remarkable. He had taken advantage of the wind's speed, and the entire world had slowed down for him. Never in his life had he been more conscious of everything. Even as he moved at speeds he had never dreamed of trying, his mind had been working at a maddening pace, shifting course with all the unpredictableness of a breeze. However, the strain and stress he had placed on his muscles was now causing them to seize up and completely revolt against him. Still, everything was oddly subdued. The pain was almost tolerable, as if it were someone else's pain. As he was no longer wearing the same form as before, He assumed this was because he had been changed into a fox. Maybe that was why he was not feeling the pain as much. The fact that he managed to maintain a shaky hold on the wind while trotting home could also be the reason. Yes, he was aware that it was foolish. Yes, he was aware that it was likely hurting him more. However, he was also adamant that he would never be able to survive the storm and return home if he didn't do it. Kyubi gave a snort. Not quite, Kit. Yeah, you're not feeling as much pain because you are in fox form, but that is only because you're transformed into a fox. We VULPINES have a very impressive pain tolerance. There have been many cases when a fox caught in a trap will spend several hours gnawing off its own foot in order to escape. There have also been cases of foxes pushing their bodies so hard when being hunted that they have destroyed their own muscles almost to the point of paralysis in order to survive. When Naruto said, "Not that you've ever been hunted before," he scowled wearily. He was far too weak to reach the window, his usual point of entry, even though he had finally arrived at his apartment building. He dragged his body toward the stairs, moaning. To be honest, how would someone like the Kyubi know that they are being hunted? Kyubi concluded that now was not the time to bring up the fact that he had once been the object of a fox hunt by a certain lord. While he and his friends chased after dogs and quarry while riding horses and blowing bugles, all in the name of sport, the so-called noble man in question had thought it was entertaining to let loose a pack of hounds to track a fox. And this fool believed that his nobility was demonstrated in some way by doing this. It goes without saying that when those fucking redcoats finally caught up to Kyubi, they were in for a different kind of fun. It goes without saying that they stopped fox hunting. At Kyubi's crazed laughter, Naruto rolled his eyes and concentrated on dragging himself up the stairs to his back door. Naruto finally made it to the door, looking and feeling miserable with his wet and disheveled fur clinging to his body. He sat up, closed his eyes, and prepared himself in his mind for the pain that he knew was coming. Naruto slowly exhaled and removed his henge. As he became acutely aware of what his body was telling him, tears rose and trickled down his cheeks, blending with the rain and his own perspiration. As he hunched over and closed in on himself, his face twisted into an uncontrollable snarl, making him appear smaller and more vulnerable. With a jerky motion, Naruto opened his door, thanking Shinigami for forcing him to perform the sealing technique. The seal on his entrance unlocked the door on its own by identifying his special chakra. Pulling the door shut behind him, he nearly fell over his threshold. A huge error. For the first time, Naruto was genuinely helpless against the torment that now gleefully attacked his senses, and he let out a cry of agony as the wind left him. Amidst the thunderous roar that throbbed through him almost ravenously, he heard the sound of rushed footsteps. Naruto's gaze expanded. There was a visitor at his home. With his hunched shoulders and trembling legs, Naruto dragged himself into a ready position that even he knew had to be laughable, despite the fact that he was in no condition to fight the water that was dripping from his body and creating a puddle at his feet. He was a complete mess physically, but at least he could be prepared mentally for whatever was within his domain, right? Naruto froze as Hinata ran around the corner. This was more than he had anticipated. Hinata appeared, her face displaying fear at the strange noises she had heard. She looked at Naruto's bedraggled appearance, and her heat-reddened face started to fade its fear before his startled eyes. Her eyes also filled with concern for him. He could see how much she loved him, and he knew then that he would always remember the sight he had been fortunate enough to witness that evening. Even though her hair was damp and stuck to her head, it still had a healthy sheen to it, with one strand dripping through the middle of her forehead and ending in a small curl. When wet, her ebony hair, which was kissed with a hint of blue, appeared longer, extending over one bare shoulder and the graceful arch of her neck. The tiny droplets of water that were beaded on her skin only accentuated its beauty. It was fair, perfect, and free of blades and bruises. He noticed that she had one pale arm folded against her body, highlighting her hourglass figure and the swell of her breasts. Naruto could tell that her legs would be incredibly soft to the touch because they were long and well-formed. Every move she made seemed full of life, and her step was light, like a dancer's. When Naruto finally noticed that she was wearing a towel, neither more nor less, he blushed a little. Naruto realized that, overall, things could be much worse when he finally gave in to his agony and fell to the ground, struggling to hide a smile. When Naruto fell to the ground, unconscious, Hinata simply blinked. The fact that she had not fainted when Naruto saw her in such a state was a testament to how much she had changed since he had become a constant in her life. That would likely be a different story, though, if he had been conscious for a lot longer. She scowled as she used her dojutsu to see what was truly wrong with him. The condition of her favorite blonde made the Hyuga heiress gasp. His whole network of chakras was pulsing, pumping out to a startling intensity and then dwindling to nearly nothing. It was odd how Naruto's chakra flowed through his coils. Perhaps it was like wind. The condition of his muscles, however, was more worrisome. In certain instances, they were so severely damaged that the muscle itself appeared to be vanishing from the edges. Whimpering at the sensation of his cold flesh, Hinata picked Naruto up right away and carried him to his bed. His skin felt particularly cold because she was warm. After emerging from the rain, Hinata had showered at Arlia's suggestion. After turning on those taps and starting to relax beneath the showerhead, she ended up using nearly all of the hot water, despite her initial concerns that she was encroaching a little too much in Naruto's house. Only after hearing the door open had she shut off the water. When she heard Naruto scream, she had thankfully already wrapped a towel around herself after getting out of the shower because she was too busy checking on him to worry about how she was dressed or undressed. That rush had ended when it was discovered that he wasn't. She quickly threw Naruto onto his bed and grabbed the top of her towel that was about to fall to the ground. Noting in passing that the storm finally appeared to be coming to an end, Hinata pouted as she walked to Naruto's wardrobe. Wouldn't it be okay if she donned some of Naruto's clothing? She didn't realize how much trouble that one question would cause Naruto. When Hiashi Hyuga finally reached his clan compound's main gates, he sneezed. Since Hiashi was the only person they knew who could give a Byakugan such a menacing expression of icy rage, the guards at the front did not even bother to verify that it was indeed him. As he entered the room and saw the damage to the clan grounds, the Hyuga's head froze. They seemed to have been struck by lightning, a lot of lightning. For the moment, Hiashi disregarded them as irrelevant. He commanded, "Summon the elders." Yes, he would speak with them. I would have words with them. It was time to show them how cruel he could be, both as a furious father and as the leader of a clan. It was necessary to carry Horinsa into the council chamber. He made the decision to attempt to pursue Hinata in spite of everything that had been happening. Not surprisingly, the man nearly got struck by a lightning strike. Ordinarily, it would have been sufficient to murder a man, but apparently Horinsa had been very fortunate. He had been near enough for Hyuga to restart his heart by sending a Juken strike into his chest. But Horinsa did not consider himself particularly fortunate. The man was on the verge of losing his temper as he continued to twitch and stare around with wild eyes. He had just experienced some rather tough times, to be fair. He had been transported to the world of Shinigami after his heart briefly stopped beating. It was a particularly vivid nightmare, and he was pretty sure that was all he had seen. "You, sir, or a dick," would be the strongest statement the Shinigami could ever make, after all. Yes, he thought to himself, trying to comfort himself. It must have been a dream. Despite this, everything seemed so real, particularly when the phony Shinigami began using a red-hot poker to cauterize the numerous wounds he had made. But before he could finish, the pseudo-Shinigami paused, sighed, and told him it was time to return. Horinsa had been a gibbering wreck at the thought of his next punishment, which was actually going to be pushing that red-hot poker up his ass, so it was just as well. Hiashi interrupted Horinsa's thought process by saying, "Now that we are all finally here, we can get started." Eager to resume his search for his youngest daughter, who had not yet been located, Takashi questioned, "Why has this meeting been called?" "Well," said Hiashi coolly, "it regards Yurei." A thoughtful silence descended upon the room. "You see, last night he broke into the Hokage's office, before being captured by an ANBU, Kakashi and Guy. As per procedure, he was interrogated, which was no use at all as he managed to resist all forms of interrogation. After this, he was locked away in one of the highest security holding cells that the ANBU headquarters has to offer." Many of the faces in the room lit up with a vindicated smile. "Then we no longer have any problem with Yurei and can act as we wish," Miyadora Hyuga stated with great satisfaction. With gritted teeth, Hiashi spoke as the room seemed to drop to below freezing temperatures. Confounded, the council said, "Not exactly." Hiashi went into further detail. Apparently, Yurei did not like the idea of being locked up. So, he promptly escaped from a maximum security prison and made his way to the surface, where he vanished like a ghost. This statement, which was calmly delivered but had an undercurrent of rage that left many Hyuga perspiring, caused silence to descend upon the room. One of Horinsa's yes men, Hitori, questioned, "What happened?" "Good question," Hiashi remarked with a hint of glee. On his way out, Yurei faced 13 Jonin and a pair of Chunin. 9 of those Jonin were Anbu, the remaining 4 included Sarutobi Asuma, Yuhi Kurenai, and myself. 7 of the Anbu are now hospitalized. He locked an Anbu in his own prison, evaded 3 others and forced Kurenai let him go so that she could save Asuma's life, as the man was bleeding to death after facing him. With a tone of surprise mixed with mockery, Horinsa asked, "You faced him as well, Hiyashi? He defeated you then?" "He did not defeat me," Hiyashi snapped, giving the man such a ferocious look that Horinsa could not help but wince. After stating, "I was, however, unable to bring him in." Hiyashi then focused entirely on Horinsa. Hiyashi paused while he said, "He did, however, have some interesting information that he volunteered, so that the council would fully absorb his words. Apparently, he was under the impression that you, Horinsa, were planning on sealing my daughter with the cagebird seal while I was away." The elder Hyuga went pale. Hiyashi went on, his tone now surprisingly gentle. "Despite being in prison, Yurei was also able to ascertain that you had blackmailed Takashi-san over here into agreeing to place the seal on my daughter by threatening his youngest, Higashi I believe her name is, with torture." All of the elders except Takashi were perspiring in their boots by this point. This wasn't good. Takashi's face broke into a slow smile. "Is this true?" Horinsa was defiantly shaking his head. There was no way. The man had been imprisoned. In the privacy of their own compound, how could he have learned about what had transpired? How did he know? The elder rambled on and on. With his eyes widening, Horinsa snapped and lunged towards Hiyashi, hands glowing with chakra. "That," Hiyashi said slowly, a vengeful smile threatening to burst through his stoic expression, "was a confession." Horinsa fell to the ground as the Hyuga head, moving too quickly to be seen, slammed an 8 trigrams. Air palm into his chest. "Guards!" Hiyashi yelled, his voice still surprisingly gentle, and 2 branch members came into the room. "Restart his heart and take that worthless sack of shit into custody, I'm not quite done with him yet." "Are you mad, Hiyashi?" yelled Hattori. "You could have killed the man?" Hiyashi let out a sigh. "I'm not that lucky. Now, if I'm right, most of the rest of you were going along with Horinsa's plan as well, despite Yurei's threats and my express orders not to." One by one, the elders gulped. Meanwhile, a voice that was much too joyful for its context could be heard down in the underworld. "Hello. Hello. Back again so soon?" Shinigami's realm reverberated with the girlish screams of Horinsa. Kurenai, a little let down by Asuma's initial dismissal of his father despite his evident concern for him, asked him inquisitively, "Why do you act so harshly towards your dad?" Asuma let out a sigh. Asuma paused to take a long drag on his cigarette, ignoring Kurenai's frown. "I suppose that it all goes back to the reason why I joined the Guardian Shinobi 12. Dad is an excellent Hokage, fiercely protective of the leaves of the great tree. Most people would probably say that he looks on every villager of Konoha as family. They would be wrong. When it comes to family, Dad reaches a whole new level of protective," he said with a low laugh. "Naruto is a good example of this. But he isn't blood. No, Naruto may not be a blood relative, but he calls the Hokage old man. Hell, he basically claimed him as a grandfather, and I'll be damned if Dad doesn't look on him as another grandson." Kurenai gave an understanding nod. "Anyway, when it comes down to it, I've seen him time and time again risk his life for people of this village without a second thought. After being with the 12 for a while, I was able to recognize what his death would mean, what kind of worldwide repercussions him dying would cause. So I marched right up there, full of righteous indignation, and told him exactly how foolish he had been." Asuma concluded with an obvious grin on his face, recalling the event. Kurenai inquired, "What happened? Did he chew you out?" Asuma said, "No," and shook his head. "Worse. Thing is that he honestly did not understand how he could have done anything else. He just looked at me and asked curiously, 'How could I have done otherwise? They're the leaves of this great tree.' Man, I felt like such a heartless bastard after that." Kurenai laughed. She had no trouble picturing the scene. "Well, I forgive you, but I thought you said that this story was about Naruto?" A blank expression replaced Asuma's laughing expression. Kurenai motioned for him to go on, saying, "Yeah, it was, wasn't it? I warn you, though, this is not a pretty story." Asuma sighed and went on in a somber tone. Kurenai merely glanced at him, both eyebrows lifted in a look that said, "You're really asking me that question? You know that Naruto is not exactly popular, right?" The conversation had somehow become much darker very quickly, and she was trying to lighten it. Asuma's voice grew even more ominous, if anything. Kurenai's eyes widened as she said, "It may be hard to believe, but it used to be a whole lot worse." Asuma laid out the story slowly, It started out with small things, like mild doses of food poisoning. Sometimes the gas was left on in his apartment, or he'd get sold a kettle with bad wiring. We didn't think anything of it really. Naruto was just a kid and these are all things that a kid would do. Then the kid got sick a couple of times. We thought nothing of it, until one day he began vomiting and vomiting until he started puking up sick mixed with blood. Turns out that someone had been slipping doses of cyanide into his meals for a very long time. The kid had eaten enough of the stuff to demolish a full battalion. Yet not only did he survive, but he's completely immune to the stuff now. Then accidents started to happen. One such example was a flower pot falling to the ground when he was underneath. That one split his skull, but it healed up in under an hour. He fell down a rather large flight of stone steps a couple of times. Once he was kept in the hospital overnight for observation. By that time, Dad had put a detail on him. Strangely enough, Kakashi was the most eager volunteer. He was the one who realized that Naruto's saline drip had been tampered with. It was fresh water instead of salt. Kurenai felt appalled. Normally, the punishment for injecting that much fresh water into someone's bloodstream was death. Red blood cells would absorb fresh water, and because they couldn't stop, they would eventually burst, allowing the fresh water to return to the bloodstream and find another red blood cell to repeat the process. You would eventually suffocate because your blood would no longer be able to deliver enough oxygen to your brain. Slowly. Asuma gave a shrug. After a while, I guess they got sick of waiting, cause they sent a cutter to just slit Naruto's throat. Kakashi was waiting. Who was the cutter? Inquired Kurenai. Asuma gave a shrug. I don't know. You don't know? She questioned with astonishment. Once Kakashi had finished with him, he was unidentifiable. But the copycat still got the location of a meeting of would-be assassins that were meeting that very evening. Dad went in alone. Asuma shook his head and spoke in a terrified tone. That evening reminded me just how much of a gap there is between my dad's skills and my own. I still remember seeing him come out of that room, clad in his battle gear, with Enma at his side. They both had so much blood on them that they could have almost passed for an Uzumaki. I was already a Jonin at that time, and once I had finished throwing up after I saw their remains, if they could even still be classified as such, I had a question to ask Dad. I thought that they were leaves of the great tree, I said. He just looked at me and growled out, "Screw the bloody leaves of the damn tree. Naruto is family." After that he excused himself and got washed up. Apparently he still had some paperwork to do. So, the assassination attempt stopped after that? Kurenai asked, unable to speak for a moment. Asuma roared with laughter. You know it. Once again, it was Kakashi who made a point of this, but he, with the Hokage's permission, dragged every member of the council to that room, for the purpose of identifying the bodies and told them the story of what had happened. After that, there was not a single person willing to risk attempting to kill Naruto. He was 5 years old at the time. After a long moment of silence, Asuma extinguished his cigarette and grabbed another. I never really thought of the Hokage as so ruthless, Kurenai interrupted before Asuma could regain her composure. Sarutobi, the younger, shrugged. He's not all the time, just overprotective. I mean, take a look at me. I'm an A-rank shinobi, yet, before I went to the 12, I was lucky if Dad gave me a B-rank mission. He didn't want me to do anything too risky. After I joined the 12, Dad and I eventually had a talk together and he told me that he would try and be dispassionate about what missions he gives me. Before that, it felt like he was insulting what I had worked so hard to achieve. Kurenai gave a nod. I understand. Asuma put his hands on the back of his head and grinned at her. Come to think of it, that is probably why Dad was so hard on this Yurei chap in the first place. Oh, I thought he was just following protocol. Mostly, there were really only two ways that, as a Hokage, he could have perceived Yurei. 1. A major security leak and a highly skilled spy, or 2. A loyal Konoha shinobi who has been AWOL for almost 12 years, which would classify him as a rogue ninja. Having a Yamanaka look through his head is the first thing that he would normally do. When that didn't work, the machine was the only other option, really. But I'm talking about sealing away his chakra, or trying to, anyway, since, judging from what he did afterward, Yurei did indeed have access to at least some of his chakra. That was probably because of Dad's natural inclination to protect family. Yurei had mentioned that he knew who had killed my mother and he knew far too much about Naruto. That was why he tried to seal him. He simply knew too much and was too powerful to do otherwise. Kurenai questioned, then why did he let him go? Asuma gave a shrug. There was no way that they could have caught him. And, from what Dad tells me, he had already come across several shinobi who had faced him. All were very carefully knocked out, and he never once tried to kill them. That, more than anything else, convinced him that Yurei was not going to harm Konoha. Asuma gave a startled snort. That is the reason why Dad often feels inferior to the Yondaime. He would sacrifice himself for the village in a heartbeat. He's now able to force himself to send his family on missions that could be deadly. But, deliberately and knowingly sacrificing your family for the good of the village? He doesn't think himself capable of it. Kurenai bit her lip and nodded in agreement. Given that she had nearly witnessed Asuma's death in front of her and all of this discussion about Sarutobi family values, she started to reflect. Asuma, I've been thinking, ever since. Directly beside them, an Anbu arrived. Forgive my intrusion, but you two have been summoned to appear before the Hokage. Kurenai cursed their perfect timing, as well as the Anbu. When Naruto awoke, he was lying on his back and gazing up at a clear blue sky filled with wind-driven clouds that were moving quickly across the heavens. However, something was different. Naruto raised his eyebrows in surprise at the sight of an arm that he recognized but hadn't seen in a long time. At least not without purposefully making it so. He got to his feet and looked around, wondering why he was in his old body instead of the child he had grown into. He shrugged and looked around to see where he was. Okay, that's new, he said. Naruto let out a gasp. The sights he could see were almost unbelievable. In the middle of an island, he stood. Oceans of grass, taller than a man reaching for the sky, filled his vision of rolling plains. Beyond that was the sea, buffeted by the wind, breaking and rising. Waterspouts were strewn all over the island, tornadoes of wind and water that combined to create a fine silver mist. As lightning struck from a cloudless sky, the mist caught the sun's light, creating multifaceted rainbows that danced around. Naruto had the impression that he was floating. He glanced down and saw that his feet were indeed off the ground. Startled, he grabbed the grass nearby and used it to pull himself back to the ground before using chakra to secure himself to the ground. But for some reason, it was not functioning as well as it ought to. A deep voice said, "A wise choice," echoing back to him. "If you leave the ground here, then you will never again return." Naruto turned and saw an enormous man wearing antiquated armor. He carried the scabbard of a long sword by his side, and his face was concealed by a forged gold mask. He carried a bow over his shoulder and held a wooden sake bottle in one hand. The scabbard had nothing in it. Naruto questioned suspiciously, "Who are you?" The figure laughed in a way that sounded like distant thunder. He extended his hand and started to tick things off, saying, "I feel as if I must congratulate you, boy. You have done a great many things to be proud of in your short life. You are the first male Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi and the first human to go back in time. You are also the first mortal to befriend that bastard Shinigami and stay alive while doing it." Naruto gave an uncomfortable shrug. The man blinked, shocked that Naruto had such foresight. "I wouldn't really call us friends. To be frank with you, I'm kind of terrified that he'll go all death god on me again if I show him disrespect." It wasn't exactly what he had anticipated him doing. The armored figure snorted, or worse, Naruto whispered to himself, "The baka might start going all pervy about me and Hinata again." The latter had been more in line with his expectations. And finally, the unidentified person added, "You are the first in more than a millennium who has drawn so deeply on the wind that you have entered my realm instead of going straight to Shinigami's." Naruto hesitated, his expression disbelieving. "Back up a second. Do you mean to tell me that you're Susanoo?" The recently revealed god of storms gave a nod. Now, Naruto was furious with him. He concluded with anime tears streaming down his face. "What did you mean trying to test me like that? 6 Anbu. 6. I'm still just a genin, remember? Why would you make me go through something like that? I could have died," he said. You are dying. What? You drew too much on the wind. Right now, your very flesh is becoming air itself and you will soon be passing from this world." Naruto was unable to speak. Was he going to die now for everything he had done? "Unless, of course, I send you back." Naruto became cautious at once. He had discovered early on that favors were rarely given for free. "Why would you do that?" Susanoo gave a shoulder shrug. "You're a Namikaze. Wave and wind, put them together and you've got a storm. I was your clan's patron god. Plus, you're an interesting child. It would be a pity to ruin such potential entertainment before you really had a chance to get going." Naruto said anxiously, "Gee, well thanks for that." Since his feet were now off the ground and the grass he was clinging to was the only thing preventing him from floating away. "So, can I go now?" Naruto was somehow unsurprised by Susanoo's laughter. Nice one, kid, nice one. Before I let you go, if I decide to let you go, that is, you have to pass a little test of mine. A test? Now? Yes, Susanoo said, delivering a sweeping kick that held Naruto to the ground as it sliced through the grass. Naruto yelled as he leapt like an arrow from a bow toward the firmament, but he stopped suddenly when Susanoo clapped his hand in hers. What is this? Shouted Naruto. You failed the test, I let you go. Alright, snarled Naruto. Get on with it. Susanoo laughed. I like you, kid, you got spunked. So, before we get underway, I'm going to offer you a gift. Naruto was suspicious right away. What kind of gift? Naruto's clothing ripped as the wind howled all around him. Around them, lightning struck the ground, igniting the grass, but the rain that sheeted down to the earth quickly put out the fire. This caused steam to hiss all around them, which caused Naruto's skin to blister, and he was deafened by the thunder's roar the entire time. However, at the same time, it seemed so inadequate to just describe it. To truly understand how humbling it was to be exposed to these raging elements, one had to witness this. All of that, however, was insignificant compared to the overwhelming presence that the entity before him simply emanated. Why don't you think of one? Susanoo smirked. Naruto licked his suddenly parched lips and swallowed. Figures, why would I have ever thought that Susanoo would want to be circumspect? Susanoo chuckled. Choose any gift that you desire, Naruto. I have the power to make you a god among men. The thought of it briefly ensnared Naruto in its seductive clutches. More power than he could ever acquire on his own was being offered to him. He could make good use of that power. He could use it to defend his priceless people and to defeat Madara. However, if he failed the test, he would still die, war would still break out, and all of his valuable people would. No, it wasn't worth considering. Shinigami's words, which were unanimously accepted by everyone in the god's court, suddenly came to him. No mortal should have that kind of power. Naruto bit his lip and made his decision. Susanoo asked softly, his voice still echoing around him, have you decided? Yes, exclaimed Naruto. Now put me down. Not until you tell me your decision. Fine, I don't want your stupid power. That's something that the old Sasuke would have done, not me. You cannot refuse the gift of a god. Naruto shouted, fine, once again. Give your gift to Hinata. Not enough to make her all-powerful, but enough so that if I'm gone, she will always be able to protect herself. Naruto's heart skipped a beat as Susanoo roared, is that your final answer? Yes. Susanoo grinned, and his tone softened and reassuring, you have chosen wisely. Suddenly, Naruto was upright again, feeling secure and fully clothed. The place was quiet again. You are a very interesting human, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. You are the first person who has passed this test in a millennium. Slowly, Naruto said, so, I'm not going to die? No, not yet. Yada, however, Susanoo said, elaborating. Naruto stopped his partying. To be honest, he ought to have realized that this would have included a but. However, you are still stuck in my realm unless I send you back. Naruto tried the puppy dog eyes on him and said, Please? Susanoo turned away with a shudder. I will do so, provided that you promise me to do me a favor. Naruto inquired cautiously, what kind of favor? Susanoo pointed to the unkempt grass surrounding them. I need Kusanagi back. Orochimaru found it through ways that I will not divulge, but I want the grass Longsword back in my possession. Promise to do that for me, and I will send you back. Without hesitation, Naruto nodded and extended his hand. Deal. Despite a small laugh at the gesture, Susanoo still shook Naruto's hand. The agreement was made. Iruka glanced around the room and swallowed. Even though he was aware that everyone in his immediate vicinity was a comrade and that they were all working for the village of Konoha, he could not help but feel a little overwhelmed, and perhaps even inferior. Ultimately, he found himself in a room primarily occupied by Jonin. Asuma Sarutobi, Kurenai Yuhi, Ibiki Morino, Hayate Gecko, and Enko Mitarashi were among the group's more well-known members. It did not help that the snake mistress mentioned earlier was staring at him as if he were a piece of meat. In fact, it did them absolutely no good. With a loud bang, the front door flew open, letting the Hokage enter the office with 8 Anbu on either side of him. They were being pulled by a somewhat reluctant guy, who in turn was pulling a reluctant Kakashi behind them. One particularly strange Anbu was among them. He wore a white coat, not the more conventional black ones worn by the others. He did, however, have bandages tied around his right leg and was dressed in black pants. And last of all, his mask, unlike any other. His face was covered in a plain white porcelain veneer that was only adorned with 3 thick stripes, 2 on each cheek and 1 on the forehead, and intricate eyebrows. The fox motif was completed with pointed ears. Perhaps more than any other village in the elemental nations, Konoha recognized Kyuubi's strength despite the fact that the animal had amassed a great deal of hatred since that October 10th. For this reason, the Anbu commander-in-chief of Konoha wore the only fox mask ever. Nervously, Iruka swallowed. Hiruzen remarked, "Thank you all for coming. I summoned you here today after gaining some very important information." Everyone in his immediate vicinity leaned forward. The Hokage gestured to Kakashi before continuing, and the latter made a series of hand signals that were too quick to read before slamming his hands down in the center of the room. For 5 seconds, seals and Fuinjutsu characters glowed suddenly before disappearing into oblivion. Following this, 4 Anbu sat in a diamond formation around Kakashi, each covering his hands before the former Yondaime student pulled his hands away, letting the Anbu take over the responsibility of feeding chakra to his sensei's privacy seals. The Anbu signaled to their Hokage that the room was fully secured by nodding. After bowing his head in gratitude, Hiruzen resumed his quiet but solemn speech. "War is coming." These words made everyone in the room tense. Some of them had very strong recollections of their previous wartime experiences. They had no desire to participate in it once more. Iruka felt even more uncomfortable at this point. Excuse me, Lord Hokage, but if this is a meeting to inform some of your top jonin about an upcoming war, then forgive my need to ask, but why on earth am I here?" Sarutobi laughed. "I'll get to that." A little excluded, Ibiki inquired, "Where did you come across this information, Lord Hokage?" When it came to information, he was usually one of the first to know. "Yurei passed a message on to us. A slightly cryptic one, it is true, but nonetheless easily decipherable." In a monotone, Kakashi questioned, "You believe him?" "Yes, I do. The message went like this. When the playful war comes to the leaf, the snake will strike, in the final hour." Translation. A sing-song voice said, "Dear old sensei is coming back home," Anko said. Fearful of the flame that appeared to be guttering in her eyes, everyone in her immediate vicinity retreated a step. Muttering, "That does not give us a lot of information," Guy said. "Yet it gives us more than we had," Asuma remarked as he drew on his cigarette. Gritting her teeth, Kurenai declared, "He plans to attack us in the next Chunin exams that come to Konoha." When Iruka realized why the Hokage had wanted him, an academy teacher, in a Jonin meeting, the blood left his face and he became a little green. Iruka remarked, "My students will be genin by then," as though he were going to throw something. "Some of them may even be in the Chunin exams." The Hokage gave a nod. "I will not allow them to be in such a situation unprepared. So, I ask you this, Iruka, who in your class will be ready to become a shinobi by next week?" Iruka closed his eyes and covered his face with his hand. He wasn't always a teacher at the academy. He had previously been on the front lines and witnessed friends lose their lives in front of him. He began teaching at that time. In short, he was too concerned. Once he had seen the deaths of those around him, he broke down because he could not stop caring for them. And now the ugly head of the same problem had appeared. He loved his students, some more than others, and he did not like to think about the possibility that his choice at this moment would condemn them to an early death. Kakashi approached Iruka and gave him an eye smile while putting his hand on his shoulder and whispering to him, "Come on, Dolphin. The Hokage is asking you a question." Iruka inhaled deeply and slowly. He said, "Thanks, dog," softly enough that no one could hear them. Iruka said, "Pardon me, Hokage-sama," and moved forward. "We have an extremely promising class of hopefuls this year, including a number of heirs from some very prominent clans. Although I am not sure if all of them are ready for the shinobi lifestyle, I believe that they will be competent enough to pass both the academy exam and the graduation testing." Sarutobi said, searching through a stack of folders, "Their names?" "Yes, of course, Shikamaru Nara, Hinata Hyuga, Shino Aburame, Kiba Inuzuka, Ino Yamanaka, and Sasuke Uchiha." "Is that in ability order?" Curious, Anko asked. Iruka paused, then said, "Mostly. Although Hinata is a more skilled ninja than Shikamaru and possibly even Sasuke, I'm not sure how much her personality will influence how well she performs in the field. You see, she's a really nice girl. Shikamaru is incredibly intelligent, but his own indolence gets in the way." Anko grinned broadly, relieved that there was at least one competent kunoichi each year. "What about the civilians?" In response to the Hokage's query, Iruka shook his head and said, not good. Most of them will pass the academy exam but have to repeat the year after failing the graduation exam. One in particular, Sakura Haruno, I am sure will be able to graduate early. Out of all the girls in the class, she is the best, but if things continue as they are, Hinata will surpass her in less than a month. She performs the Academy 3 flawlessly because she has the book smarts to get full marks in school and has highly developed chakra control, but Hinata outperforms her in every physical activity. Hokage-sama, I can't think of another civilian who will be prepared besides Sakura. How about Uzumaki Naruto? As one, all of the ANBUs in the room asked. To be fair, the Jonin had not dealt with Naruto nearly as much as the Anbu, so they were quite taken aback by their coordinated outburst and turned to face them. Everyone in the room was perplexed by Iruka's first response. I'd say that Naruto, more than any other student I have, is ready for the life of a shinobi. So why didn't you suggest him? Guy inquired in a childlike tone. Easy, Iruka shrugged. That fact is irrelevant because he will fail the academy test. For some reason, he is unable to perform the Bunshin no Jutsu, and I fear that I will not let him pass if he is unable to do that jutsu to my satisfaction. How about Rock Lee? Asuma inquired inquisitively. An alternative situation. Guy put his own reputation on the line by sponsoring Lee and taking him on as an apprentice despite the fact that he was completely incapable of performing any jutsu. Next year, Naruto will simply have to try again. Many members of the Anbu sighed in relief and sympathy for the boy, the former because they did not like the idea of Naruto being a full-fledged ninja and the latter because many of them actually liked the boy. Iruka's direct evaluation of Naruto's prospects of graduating made Hiruzen scowl. Iruka, that doesn't seem totally fair. I don't want to hold Naruto back because he doesn't have a jutsu that isn't even utilized in many combat scenarios if he is as strong as you claim he is. I'm just following the curriculum, Hokage-sama, Iruka said with a helpless shrug. Kakashi thought, and if you follow the curriculum, then Naruto will definitely fail, before he let out a satisfied sigh and said, glad I'm not in Anbu anymore. Kakashi-senpai, why is that? With caution, Wolf asked. Kakashi gave his former comrade in arms an eye smile and said, easy, of course. Naruto will have 6 weeks off before the next term begins if he doesn't pass the graduation exam. To be honest, Kurenai stated, I don't follow. However, it is clear that the Anbu did. Naruto would be without the academy for 6 weeks if he were on vacation, and he would be alone for 6 weeks if he was unsupervised. Naruto would typically become bored after being alone for 6 weeks. Additionally, Naruto had a tendency to find ways to entertain himself when he was bored. The sight of 3 Anbu sitting in the corner wrapped up in the fetal position, 2 of them rocking back and forth, and the last, a rookie Anbu who was clearly regretting his career change as of his first meeting with Naruto, was mumbling under his breath while rocking ferociously, caused Kakashi to giggle perversely, as if he had found a good part in his book. Inquisitive about what the rookie was saying, Kakashi turned his chakra-enhanced ears to listen. I am a good boy, mother, please stop wearing pink spandex. The devil's color is orange. What a good boy horse is. Kakashi shuddered a little and shifted his focus to something else, anything else. That was just wrong, but he couldn't help but smirk a little, almost feeling sorry for the person who had chosen Naruto to be a student. Kurenai said incredulously, come on, he can't be that bad. At this point, all of the ANBUs in the room, past and present, paused whatever they were doing and turned to face Kurenai before turning to face one another. Quote comma quote quote comma quote quote comma quote quote comma quote quote comma quote. A good boy is a horse. Iruka chose to ignore the sobbing rookie and give a thorough explanation of the situation, saying, from what I remember, the last time Naruto failed the academy, he declared an all-out prank war on Konoha as a whole. Thing is that it went a little bit overboard. What took place? Iruka and the Hokage looked at each other intently, swallowed, a little uneasy, and told them everything. Skipping time. The room was filled with chaos and disbelieving horror. Anko appeared to be in awe of the stars, while Kakashi was pale and wide-eyed. Asuma had just begun smoking his second pack of cigarettes, and Kurenai had collapsed to the ground in a faint. You know what? Training this group of brats might be a lot more enjoyable than I anticipated, she said, slowly. Was he there? Hayate uttered the words incredulously. With all due respect, Hokage-sama, I do not believe that we should let Naruto go completely free for all of this. I know that he is a special case, but... I completely agree with you, Ibiki-san, Sarutobi remarked. Ibiki blinked, not anticipating that persuading the man would be so simple. So why hasn't anything been done? He asked slowly, knowing that there had to be a reason, but the only explanation that he could think of was, to be honest, absurd. We can't prove that Naruto did it, Hiruzen said with a slight grimace. There's just one problem, Ibiki. We're fairly certain that Naruto was the one who did it, but he covered his tracks, or at least that's what we believe, after realizing that he had gone a little too far this time. It was probably much simpler in the ensuing chaos. I still don't understand how he was able to obtain so many supplies. Not to mention how he gained access to our water supply and numerous other high-security locations in a single week. I am certain that he had no malicious intent, but if he had, then he could have realistically caused damage to the entirety of Konoha. With a hint of panic, the Anbu turned to face Fox, who stood composedly with his arms folded, having already made up his mind that Naruto would pass this upcoming academy exam by any means necessary, even if it meant assigning his Anbu to serve as Naruto's personal tutor. Hiyashi was becoming anxious, and after the talks Naruto had given him, he had been trying hard to straighten his priorities, which is why he had just spent the last few hours personally looking for Hinata. Of course, this may have been partly because he was unable to properly sentence Horinsa without Hinata as a witness, but the Hyuga head was improving, and he was still far from perfect, and Hiyashi genuinely wanted to see that haughty old man get the shaft. However, the more time he spent looking for his daughter without success, the more he started to feel truly worried. He had already looked at Kurnai's house, but she wasn't there, and then he looked at most of the nearby training grounds, but to no avail. With a small grimace, Hiyashi finally made the decision to stop delaying the inevitable and started walking to Naruto Uzumaki's house. Hiyashi made it 3 steps before he paused, his brow furrowed as he realized that there was a flaw in his plans. He did not know where the young Uzumaki lived. Of course, being a member of the Shinobi Council, he at least knew the district that Naruto lived in, being one of those who had cast their vote for Naruto to reside there in the first place. His reasoning for doing so was sound, in his mind at least. The area in which Naruto was to reside was sparsely populated, therefore, if the young Jinchuriki at any time lost control of his tenant, then casualties could be kept to a minimum. However, despite this, Naruto's actual address eluded him. Sighing at the inconvenience, Hiyashi turned towards the Hokage Tower and began the trek to see the third. Of course, he could just enter the district and ask a citizen for directions, but that would be far too much of a drag. Indeed, having the general population of Konoha wondering why his 12-year-old daughter had spent the night over in a young male's apartment. Hiyashi shuddered imperceptibly. No, that would simply not do at all. And if they found out that it was not just any male, but the demon brat. On his way to the Hokage's tower, Hiyashi pondered when he first began to feel bad about calling Naruto by that specific title. The Hokage had completed his last meeting after Hiyashi had been made to wait for roughly 20 minutes, and he emerged with a sword that he knew very well. "Ah, did you want me, Hiyashi-san?" Hiruzen inquired. Hiyashi bowed his head to his cage and nodded, saying, "Yes, Sarutobi-sama. I was hoping you could help me locate my daughter, who has vanished." Remembering the incident with Kumo only a few years ago, the professor's eyes flashed with concern, instantly imagining the worst. "I shall send out search parties at once," he said softly, his voice calm and quiet, but there was a molten steel in the back of his mind. "That won't be necessary, Lord Hokage. I have the situation well in hand. The culprit has already been detained," Hiyashi quickly corrected him. "Right now, I just need the directions to Uzumaki-san's house." Hiruzen couldn't understand. Shouldn't they be at the academy? Hiyashi just gave a nod. All the third did was sigh. "I was on my way to speak to Naruto myself. If he's not at the academy, he's probably at home. Or at Ichiraku's." Hiyashi gave another friendly nod. "Then, by your leave, I shall accompany you." The Hyuga approached the door, but the Hokage was still standing there. "It was not a request." "Explain." Hiyashi smiled ruefully at him, which was unusual for him. "This is going to be a long walk." "Well, I suppose you could say that it all started when the Hyuga Council and I found out that my daughter had been keeping some questionable company. Indeed, it was a lengthy tale, meticulously concealed beneath a somewhat ostentatious genjutsu. Indeed, it did indicate that people in the vicinity knew the two were having a private discussion. What the heck? Because they were ninja, they were inherently secretive, and the Hokage and a clan head would frequently discuss things that were only necessary to know. In fact, it could be argued that this was a much safer way to communicate than most. A conversation in the shadows could be overheard, and a room could be bugged with electronics or seals, but this? The Hokage was walking right in front of everyone. There was genjutsu, and it was evident, but powerful. Since they can sense their own cage's chakra, most ninja who are able to pierce such a technique would leave well enough alone. If the illusion was broken, the third was able to detect it right away and dispatch his escorting Anbu to capture the spy because no one else would attempt to listen in on Konoha's military chief's private conversations. Luckily, Hiruzen understood the main idea by the time they arrived at Naruto's apartment. He paused his genjutsu and reflected on the most crucial information he had learned from the clan head. Hiyashi was a jerk attempting to recover, Hinata was not deserving of all the mistreatment she had endured, and Horinsa would require a lengthy meeting with both Anko and Ibiki before a slow execution. One of his Anbu broke the customary silence and interrupted his thoughts. "Ah, shit. What's the matter, Fox-san?" inquired Hiyashi inquisitively. A series of strongly suppressed curses echoed through the Anbu. "From what I can see, Hiyashi-san, Naruto has closed his window. Swearing in front of their commander would not be acceptable." The Hokage was equally perplexed. "How is that a problem?" Kat flipped her long hair over her shoulder and said, "Well, sir, Naruto's apartment is one of the safer residences in Konoha." Hiruzen gave a nod. He was aware of this, since he and Jiraiya had worked together to install many of the security measures in order to keep the child safe. Curious, Hiyashi questioned, "Is that why I have difficulty seeing through it with my Byakugan?" Wolf gave a nod. "The building has been strengthened with a number of jutsu. The door, for instance, would take a strong jutsu, normally a B rank or higher, to break down, or someone of Guy's physical strength. And when everything is locked up, the apartment puts a barrier jutsu into place. This was necessary after some of the more radical elements of Konoha tried to torch his apartment." Hiyashi gave a blink. He could appreciate how much work such a project would have required. He was also unable to dispute the rationality of employing such measures to safeguard such a significant military asset. However, he somehow questioned whether the Hokage had been motivated in any way by this rational thinking. The issue is that all of this was prior to Naruto deciding to carry out some of his own work to strengthen security, Hawk added slowly, grimacing. "Normally he'll just leave the window open, since it's mostly civilians who give him trouble, but, with it closed, we're going to have to take the Anbu all said, path of death, with a chill of fear shivering through their bodies. Their eyes, however, gleamed with anticipation. "That's a rather pretentious name for Uzumaki-san to give his little pranks," Hiyashi grumbled. The Anbu gave him a blank stare. Horse inquired inquisitively, "What do you mean, Hiyashi-sama?" "We were the ones to name it." Fox called for backup, saying he was about to put Hiyashi and Hiruzen through some intense training, and a big bead of moisture formed at the backs of their heads. Since his initial return in time, Naruto had advanced significantly. A stronger bond with his friends, particularly Hinata, was one of his more noteworthy accomplishments. His taijutsu had improved, his kenjutsu was marginally more proficient than what would have previously made someone like Zabuza or Kisame laugh uncontrollably, and his jutsu repertoire had more than tripled. That, along with his improved intelligence and tactical abilities, as well as the fact that he was now even harder to kill, made him a formidable opponent. But that didn't change the fact that he would lose badly if he had to battle his future self. That much ass was just kicked by Sage Mode. Similar to using Kyuubi, his most powerful weapon at the moment was a double-edged sword. Additionally, he was fairly certain that he could still be defeated in a straight-up duel by both Guy and Kakashi. He simply lacked the experience of those two, who were legends in their own right. This implied that Ero Sennin and Ba-chan would join him in wiping the floor. But Ba-chan would drop her on her ass if he started using that one-finger tactic. Shinigami had thus forced him to concentrate on things he had all but forgotten since he was aware that his size limited his strength. Stealth, patience, and dirty fighting are a few examples. He set up a number of pranks around the village as part of this training. However, this had unlocked a different set of skills that he hadn't utilized since turning into a genin, creating a trap. Additionally, the traps had started to become increasingly complex after some practice. Not to mention risky, and my goodness, he had worked so hard on some that were simply too deadly to discard. Particularly considering how many people are spray painting graffiti everywhere. The majority of it was unflattering. It got worse from there. This is where obtaining permission to renovate came into play. Luckily, the building belonged to a civilian council member, and he was the only occupant. He had chosen to curry favor with the Uzumaki and grant Naruto complete control of the building after putting on the show for them and being shown how much political power he could potentially wield. He was now receiving double rent from Naruto in exchange. It wasn't as though he couldn't afford it now, and the building was only useful to the merchant for tax purposes. Naruto had sealed off his original front door, which led straight outside, as his first action. Unless, of course, you had your chakra signature keyed into the doorknob, it could still be used as a traditional exit but no longer as an entryway. This trap-free entrance was currently only open to him and Hinata. Any other person would receive a rather unpleasant shock. Cutting a second doorway into the apartment next door was the next item on the agenda, and it turned out to be a fairly simple task. In addition to giving him twice as much living space, this also gave him a new front door that led straight into the hallway on the top floor. Only his window and the main door remained as the apartment building's entrances after Shinigami sealed all the lower windows and entrances. A task he had to coerce and convince him to complete before surrendering and employing the overt bribery of a new jutsu. 10 floors of Naruto's unique brand of devilry were required to reach him because he lived on the top floor. By the way, Naruto discovered that all of the practice had significantly improved his seal work. To the extent that he was able to incorporate a sensor seal into his array that assessed the quantity and quality of an individual's chakra and then modified the level of traps to employ to make up for it. Hell, he'd worked hard enough that his sealing array could distinguish between an elemental clone and a human. Unfortunately, it was much harder to determine whether it was a cage bunshin or not. As a result, no deadly traps were ever set against a regular citizen. They were going to have their own few hours of hell, though, because this invasion party was composed of a large number of chunin, a good deal of jonin of various caliber, a clan head, and the Hokage himself. Hiyashi watched in confusion as the local Anbu population grew from 5 to 30. The medic ninjas they had dragged from wherever they could find them were not included in that. They currently have 6, including Hana Inuzuka, who, in spite of her advanced age, is the village's best veterinarian. Hana wandered over and saw Hiyashi, whom she had vaguely known because her mother was a member of the Shinobi Council. Her voice was curious as she muttered, "Any idea what is going on here?" Hiyashi had no idea, she could tell by his brooding silence. "It almost looks as if they are about to invade a hostile area," Hana went on, disregarding Hiyashi's desire to project superiority. As he shook his head, Hiyashi thought, "It does, doesn't it?" To tell the truth, he had no idea what the Anbu was doing with his movements, particularly when they began to open tactical armor from a number of scrolls that appeared to have been brought specifically for the event. As 2 Anbu began opening and distributing gas masks, his bewilderment turned to mild alarm. Slowly, Hiyashi said, "Lord Hokage, do you know what the Anbu are doing?" The Hokage said, "Haven't the foggiest," directly. "We just have a rather healthy respect for Naruto-san's abilities, hence the need for you medics." Perplexed as to why she was here, Hana protested, "I'm not a medic, I'm a vet. I've never really practiced on humans before." Kat said, "Don't worry, Hana-san, with kindness. You'll have plenty of practice before this day is out." The Inuzuka heir objected, saying, but I'm used to completely different body structures." "That's fine, too," Lizard remarked gloomily. "Odds are that you'll get the chance to work on some completely different body structures before we're through as well." When Hana realized that she had left her mouth open, she snapped it shut. Hawk gave a firm nod, concurring with Lizard's evaluation, and then he faced Wolf. "Wolf-san, would you mind checking the entrance?" Wolf simply gazed at him. Despite the mask concealing it, Hawk shivered a little at the ghoulish expression he just knew was being displayed. "Yes, Hawk-san, yes I would." Lizard moved forward, rolling his eyes at his coworkers. He said, "Allow me," while making 6 hand gestures. "Iwa Bunshin no Jutsu." Since Iwa was fiercely protective of this jutsu, Hiyashi was extremely shocked to see it used. The rock clone was far less intelligent than any other Bunshin, but it was also more resilient. According to Hiyashi, it was similar to the typical rock ninja. However, the casual use of such a jutsu was somewhat unexpected. Lizard sent the Bunshin to scout ahead while the other Anbu cried out about their foolishness for not thinking to send a clone in first. Without employing any strategies, the clone simply trusted its strength and charged through the front door in a manner reminiscent of Naruto. Shink. The small boulder rolled across the floor, catching everyone's attention. It stopped at the feet of the wide-eyed Hiruzen and his friends, exposing the face of the decapitated rock clone before it crumbled to dust. "Pity," Fox said with a sincere expression of disappointment. "It's only on the passive-aggressive setting." But Horse, Hawk, Wolf, Lizard, and even Cat let out a great sigh of relief. On the other hand, not all of the other Anbu were as relieved. As they started whispering to one another, anxiety descended upon them. "Why did he do that?" He knows that it doesn't like clones. Lizard Tycho has angered the demons of the path. Perhaps, a virgin sacrifice. Where's Kakashi when you need him? Fox acted when he noticed his men growing agitated. Anbu. Gather. The authority that echoed in Fox's voice called the Anbu together as one in front of their captain. Fox said courteously, "Wolf, if you please." Wolf nodded and used jutsu to raise a platform from the ground that was about 3 feet high. Fox jumped onto the makeshift platform and drew everyone's attention. "Friends. Konahans. Anbu. Lend me your ears." Fox received almost religious attention from the Anbu, while the others appeared somewhat perplexed. "We few, we happy few, face the trials ahead of us, as a band of brothers. For he who sheds his blood with me is my brother. Hoo-ah. In this age of shinobi, we face dishonor and dismemberment every day of our lives. We face death itself." Fox started to pace the platform back and forth. "Yet death, in time, comes to all men. We fear death, that is true, yet here you are," a few Anbu members complained. Fox roared, "It is true, my brothers, for I see in your eyes the same fear that would take the heart of me. We feel fear, for we are human, not just simple tools, and that is why we are Anbu. For a real Anbu will never let their fear of death overpower their sense of duty, of honor, of comradeship. For the will of fire burns strongly within us." The Anbu as a whole erupted in agreement. Fox yelled out at them, pointing at each of them. "You are here today because you took a vow to protect your family and your homes. You took a vow to obey our Lord Hokage's orders. You are here for your own self-respect, for you would not want to be anywhere else." He became quiet. "We are to go on a journey that you have all trained for. All of you have been subject to what is affectionately known as chicken shit drilling, for one reason and one reason alone: alertness. And you will need every scrap of it that you can grab hold of in this mission, or you will get it in the nuts. You men and women are veterans. All of you have faced the enemy. All of you have some idea of what he is capable of. This journey will take us into the teeth of his very territory. Any man or woman who does not wish to go on this journey, step forward now." There was a grim silence in the air. Fox gave a proud nod. "Then, I say, we will walk the path together. Keep in mind what makes Konoha Shinobi different from other ninjas. We fight as a team, we eat, sleep, and die as a team, and we will not only consider ourselves but also our comrades who are by our sides. Watch out for your friends and, if you can, get them to the ambulance, but keep moving. I'm holding my position," is something I don't want to hear. Ignore that. Our basic strategy is to go under, over, and through whatever debacle is thrown at us. Woo-ah. Hoo-ah. You're absolutely correct. Our name is Anbu. There might be a day when all oaths are broken and biju and broken masks occur, but that day is not today. We stand as those who go into the night in silence on this day. In order for others to walk in the light, we must give of ourselves. Let's shout it out now. We won't give up easily. You will be old and tired in a few years, bouncing your grandchildren on your knee, and you will be able to share your own legend with them. A myth from the era when we were blazing with the will of fire. The Anbu roared its approval. My brothers, ha ha ha, sisters, ha ha ha. Anbu. R-A-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. For the Hokage, together, with a roar, Fox pulled out his sword and threw it into the air. Ha ha H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. The Anbu of Konoha, united in purpose and mind, charged forward, their commander at their head, his sword leading the way. The doors offered no resistance at all, splintered apart by a few tagged kunai. A great blade swung at them at head height, striking with the speed of a snake, but it was no match for Fox's smaller, wind-enhanced blade, which struck like lightning, sending the blade spinning over their heads, where it plunged into the road behind them, causing a series of cracks to run from the point of impact, and suddenly the Anbu entered the home of their greatest enemy, a smaller-than-average 11-year-old boy. Hana simply watched in disbelief. Don't you think that was inspiring, Hokage-sama and Hiyashi-sama? When she looked back at them, she saw that they had joined the attack. With a disapproving growl, Hana said, "TCH, men." Upon entering the academy classroom, Uruka greeted Mizuki distractedly, somehow oblivious to the fact that someone had shaved the sides of his head and dyed the rest of his mohawk a bright fluorescent green. That being said, he noticed that neither Naruto nor Hinata were there, but he decided to wait until recess in a few hours. If they didn't show up, he was sure he could find them during the half-hour break. First level, to your left, Captain. Fox whirled on his heel and defended those behind him by weaving a web of steel with his sword in front of him. severing each kunai from the swift volley that was headed his way. "Keep moving forward. We can turn off the traps, at least temporarily, if one of us manages to get to the stairwell." "Hello." With a smile on his face and a surge of adrenaline that he hadn't experienced in years, Hiyashi swung forward, his palm outstretched, smashing a boulder that had flown at him from the wall. "Leave me." Byakugan activated as he uttered those words softly and dashed forward. "No, you idiot, remain together," Hawk yelled as he stepped forward during his brief diversion and was pulled to the ceiling while wearing a rope around his ankle. Ignoring him, Hiyashi trusted his sight and ran forward, leaping over Senbon that protruded from the sides and using a Kaiden to destroy the ceiling pillar that attempted to crush him. With his all-seeing eyes alerting him to every danger, he skillfully avoided every trap and made it to the end of the corridor. "The superiority of the Hyuga clan is proved yet again," he said, Byakugan still activated, grinning at the stunned expression on the faces of many Anbu. A small, but extremely painful trap for Hiyashi, activated as a bright flash of chakra burst in front of the clan head, blinding him as if to mock him. Dude. The rookie cocked his head and said, "I suppose this validates the rumor. A stick is actually thrust up the Hyugas." "Equine." Scandalized, Kat screamed. When the house shook, Hinata woke up with a start and looked around before blushing deeply. She had been caring for Naruto when she suddenly felt her chakra swing wildly and passed out, lying on top of him in his clothes with her head resting on his chest. It was an awkward position to be in, but she was so exhausted right now. A second, bigger explosion rocked the building, but Hinata did not even flinch as she collapsed back into her dreams, curled up by Naruto's side. Level 3. When they arrived at the next corridor, Fox held up a closed fist, sensing that something was amiss. The area appeared to be completely innocuous, but 3 feet in, the floor had been cut down into a rectangular pool about 20 centimeters deep, and then filled for some reason with an orange liquid. Fox's senses were warning him to be wary of the situation, and he scowled as he looked at Hiyashi, who appeared to be in a daze. The final corridor had added a lot of flash grenades, along with several other nasty surprises, to the already sadistic traps, and he questioned how an academy student could possibly obtain so many paper bombs. Suddenly, Fox whipped his katana out of its sheath and drove it straight into Hiyashi's face. A normal flash grenade blinded you for about 5 seconds, but it seemed that the ones made with Naruto's powerful chakra were much more effective on an active Byakugan. The eyes of the Hyuga clan head looked back at him sightlessly, and Fox nodded to himself, satisfied, and sheathed his sword, the tip of which had been just a hair's breadth away from tickling Hiyashi's eye. Fox motioned to Wolf, who nodded and carried out his own special clone, now confident that his subordinate's secret would not be revealed. With a kunai in hand, the wood clone advanced cautiously. As it approached the orange border, it halted and inhaled deeply to regain his composure. His eyes snapped open, and he charged forward with the gravity of an experienced shinobi, arms out for balance and cognizant of his surroundings. He took 3 steps, at least. The corridor walls erupted in a veritable hurricane of fire, and Hiyashi gasped as the heat of it struck his face like a living thing. If the clone had screamed, no one had heard it above the roar of the ravenous fire. 2 seconds later, the fire vanished, except for the 2 legs of the clone, which were still standing in the center of the floor. The wood clone completely burned from knee to knee. Hana, who had been standing in the stairway, which had been carefully cleared of traps, along with the other medics, just stared in awe. Hiruzen calmly thumbed more tobacco into his pipe and said, "Mental note, explain to Naruto the concept of overkill." "Hokage-sama, hello, Horse-kun. We tried. What took place?" Hiruzen inquired, unsure if he really wanted to know. "He replaced our reality with his own, rejecting it. We're in it right now." Holding the door at the other side of the corridor open would temporarily disable all the traps, allowing the medics to pass through, which was a good thing, too. They were needed, but it was the only thing that allowed the Anbu and their Hokage, Hiyashi, and a group of medics to make their way through the path of death. They couldn't really name one floor that had been worse than the others, but so far, Hiyashi's least favorite had been the first floor, where the incident had happened, and the 3rd floor. It wasn't so much the fire that roared overhead, or the large circular saw blades that had begun zigzagging their way across the floor at a reckless pace, but rather having to army crawl through that sticky orange syrup, which would have definitely dampened his day if he had been burned alive or bisected. To make matters worse, they were all covered in feathers, making them resemble big orange chickens. Iruka sighed as he glanced at the classroom clock and realized that neither Naruto nor Hinata had arrived at school after more than 2 hours. He waved to Mizuki and said he was going to go find some class cutters, but Mizuki smiled amiably and told him that it was okay and that he should hurry and bring the strays back. Iruka scowled a little, unsure if he had liked the way Mizuki used the word strays. Then he shook his head, letting the thought go, and the Chunin marched out of the academy, squaring his shoulders. This should be quick. Even though they had taken much longer than anticipated, victory was within sight. All but one of them had been hurt, blinded, cut, bashed, beaten, or simply humiliated. Despite the fact that their numbers had decreased, no one had been killed thus far, and the medics were overworked, tending to all the various wounds that had been caused by the traps. Hiyashi in particular had required a lot of care, and it appeared that the Byakugan was more of a liability than a help. Until the events on the last floor, he had escaped any serious injuries. Retrospection. At floor 6, Naruto had somehow taken the main sprinkler system and used it for his own purposes. The first time they heard it was when they heard the hiss of escaping air before shinobi began dropping to the ground, in the middle of life-threatening traps, completely unable to control their bodies. The Anbu were now wearing their full tactical masks, and all other personnel were wearing gas masks and goggles. Somehow, through sheer will and Hyuga dignity, Hiyashi managed to ward off the effects, which made the occasional crazed giggle he let out all the more unsettling, but at least Hiruzen had now identified the person responsible for the alleged missing bottles of laughing gas. Hiruzen didn't even want to know where Naruto got hold of that much capsicum spray, but the breathing apparatus did nothing to protect their eyes, so when the first Anbu entered the next floor, there was a lot of pain, cursing, and swearing. Even though it made for dangerous footing as they passed through the usual, or more accurately, unusual, traps, the last floor was rather unexpected because, instead of having anything that could hurt them, they had been soaked with a lot of tuna oil of all things. It would take them a very long time to get the smell out of their clothes, but it was not a very good deterrent. The most damaging floor to their forces was the last one, and the oddest thing about it was that there was not a single man-made trap. "Everyone, hurry up! We're almost there," Horse yelled, bringing the Anbu together behind him as he slammed the door open, revealing a serene hallway flooded with sunlight and a furry figure sitting upright in the center of the space, watching them closely. Bull, one of the unit's tougher ANBUs, simply clomped forwards, staring at the animal, who looked back at him with an almost orgasmic look of pure anticipation, while Horse cautiously took 2 slow steps back. "Hey, isn't this the wife of the fire daimyo?" Tora leapt. There was carnage, the end of the flashback. Ibiki would have approved of that ploy with the tuna oil and then that devil cat. Hiruzen shuddered at the memory of that cat's claws tearing through the porcelain masks of his Anbu as if they were made of mere tissue paper. He had decided to give in to the suggestions of his Genin and Junin sensei and raise the price of the mission to hunt that cat down after witnessing the carnage that creature could cause with his own 2 eyes. To be honest, he had never remembered that cat being so horrible in his time. At the same time, the Anbu had reached Naruto's door and were now playing a game of Janken to determine who would actually have to knock on the damn thing. One of the Anbu had thought of going through one of the doors and simply cutting through the walls to reach the other side, and he was quickly volunteered for the mission. Long after his attempt, the Anbu came crashing out of the same door he had entered, completely insensate, and they were unable to extract anything from him other than his traumatized cries, something about spoons and mice. He was now scheduled to see the Yamanaka. They had also discussed using kunai as climbing spikes to navigate through an open window, and they had named the barrier against that strategy the Sucker Punch Wall. Needless to say, nobody there was interested in putting Naruto's resourcefulness to the test when it came to protecting his own front door. In the end, Wolf knocked on the door, not because he had lost at Janken. Fox had actually lost, but because Wolf had made fun of his senpai for losing, he was told to do it himself right away. With a sigh of relief, Wolf knocked loudly and was rewarded with the sound of movement within the apartment. Wolf had already knocked once and had cringed instinctively afterward, only to discover that he was completely unharmed. They listened to the sound of locks being opened, and finally the door opened to reveal Uzumaki Naruto, who was wearing a night hat that seemed to be eating his head and stumbled a little, catching the door with one hand to steady himself and using the other to wipe the sleep from his eye. "Nani?" he asked, attempting, but failing, to contain a yawn. As they looked at the adorable scene before them, those who had reached the top felt less of a desire to kill. Naruto finally opened his eyes, letting out a long, low whistle as he took in the view of the war-torn Anbu before him. Damn. How in the hell did you end up? Urge to kill, rising, was what everyone in the room thought. While trying to cover up the tears in his clothing, Hiruzen said, Naruto, I need to have a little chat with you, if you don't mind. Sure, Gigi, I don't see why that would be a prob. Naruto shrugged, but his response was cut short when he was hit in the back of the head with a chalkboard eraser. Are you too nah? How come you're still here? More than 2 hours ago, Academy begun. Naruto, begging Iruka for forgiveness, prostrated himself in front of the user of the demon-headed jutsu, completely disregarding the Hokage. Pardon me, Iruka-san. The others simply stared at the scene before them, first at Iruka, then at Naruto, and finally at one another. Iruka continued to beat Naruto's head with a paper fan before noticing the other people in the room for the first time. Oh, Hokage, Lord, I didn't see you there, Gomen, Iruka said, nervously lowering his head to the others. Totally fine, Iruka, totally fine. But I do have a question for you. How did you enter here? With pleasure, Hiruzen inquired. I just used the back door, Hokage-sama. The rear door? Indeed, and Bufox-sama, Naruto frequently forgets the small things, so it's not unusual to discover that he hasn't locked his back door. I see, Fox said before kindly asking his subordinates. So, who here actually checked to see if the back door was locked or not? This inquiry was met with silence. Hiyashi broke it with a loud giggle, and Naruto looked at him with a look that could be easily interpreted as WTF. Naruto took a big, unintentional step backwards as a result. The expression on Hiyashi's face, particularly the way that eyebrow had started to twitch, bothered him. Naruto-kun? Come back to bed, you really overexerted yourself last night. Hinata entered this scenario wearing one of the jackets that Naruto was meant to grow into, which was about mid-thigh in length, her hair unkempt from sleep, her eyes bright, and her expression content. Naruto gave Hinata a grateful glance. It made her seem like his, and he enjoyed seeing her dressed in his colors. He heard a winter-cold voice speak behind him, and a sudden feeling of horror and pure, unadulterated fear overcame him. Uzumaki-san, may I ask what my daughter is doing here? Naruto turned around, gulping, and looked into Hiyashi's angry face. He had never imagined that Hiyashi's glare could be more menacing than those he had previously witnessed. Even without considering the fact that his eyes were bloodshot, this glare would have blown anyone else out of the water. Hiyashi's face broke into a slow smile, and he occasionally burst out laughing. He had just been subjected to some of the most horrific forms of torture for the last 2 hours. His eyes had been brutalized by flash bombs, and he had endured humiliation and pain unlike anything since Kushina Uzumaki. In the eyes of Konoha's top Anbu, he had gained and lost respect. After all of that, he arrived at his destination to discover his daughter with a man, dressed as the man. Whether he liked the boy or not didn't matter. Hyuga lost his last semblance of dignity. Hiyashi cracked his knuckles for emphasis as he burst into full-fledged, deranged laughter, and Naruto could feel the blood dripping from his face. He moved slowly forward on the trembling blonde. Oh, fuck me, Naruto exhaled, anticipating discomfort. Hiyashi's eyebrow began to move even more erratically. He said pleasantly, wrong answer, and then rushed directly at him. Naruto screamed like a child and fled. Before Hiyashi caught him by the rumple of his orange jumpsuit, he managed to get out the back door and onto the street. Hiyashi remarked sternly, no mortal being can escape the all-seeing Byakugan. Naruto's eyes grew wide with insight. Of course. A mortal would need to use something more if he couldn't get away from the Byakugan. Log, aid me. A little puff of smoke surrounded the boy. The entire Konoha main road was engulfed in smoke as the Anbu, who had just received an order from their Hokage to save Naruto's life, stared. Upon clearing, it exposed a large number of logs that had joined together to create Naruto's escape route's stepping stones. Hiyashi swore and started to chase. Meanwhile, Hinata had already dressed and attempted to flee, but the Hokage's wrinkly hand clapped down on her shoulder. Saying, not so fast, little lady, Hiruzen grinned. You have school to get to. Hinata voiced concern as she asked, what about Naruto-kun? Iruka calmly clarified, I'll mark him down as sick, possibly injured. The Anbu, who had begun drafting a second contract for the Hokage to sign after gazing at Naruto's escape route, snorted. The Orange Devil would have to be caught by Hiyashi first. As they stood in front of Fox and Cat, Hawk, Horse, Wolf, and Lizard shuffled their feet guiltily. Oh, damn, it's the tapping of the feet. Horse cried softly as he looked at Cat, his face displaying complete fear. The majority of people would think that the Anbu would be more concerned about their boss's anger toward them. Clearly, these individuals had never visited the Anbu. In general, The explanations for why Cat was so much more feared were fairly straightforward. Fox was generally quite lenient when it came to punishment. Additionally, he had boundaries and would not do certain things. In contrast, Cat didn't. The outcome of her outburst was typically discussed in terms of reverent fear, behind barred, locked, and closed doors, rather than in polite society. Step 1 was the folding of the arms. Step 2 was the pursing of the lips, which wasn't exactly fair because her mask was usually covering this step, and step 3 was the tapping of the feet. Luckily, her wrath usually came in phases, giving at least some indication as to when that rope around your neck was going to prove to be a quick way out. Since step 4 was the cracking of the knuckles, which was immediately followed by the drawing of the sword, Horse had valid concerns. Every step was capitalized for a reason. According to rumors, step 8 was the cause of Hayate's persistent cough. That time, he had made a huge mistake. Fox calmly asked, "Would you gentlemen mind repeating that? To get their focus back on him?" "He's gone," Fox Tycho, Lizard explained somberly. "Start from the beginning." This was a directive rather than an appeal. "Well, sir," Wolf said, "it started after we thought that Naruto had been terrorized by Hiyashi long enough." Lizard interrupted, counting the seconds on his fingers. 8 hours, 32 minutes, and 47 seconds, he said. "Some voted for longer, but by that time most of us had gone to bed. We offered him a place of sanctuary, one that the Byakugan cannot pierce. He jumped at the chance." Hawk said, like a drowning man reaching for a float, with a mischievous laugh. "Once we had him in the Anbu headquarters, as per your orders, we started his training," Wolf went on, unflinchingly disregarding any interruptions. Despite her curiosity, Kat said, "Wait, back up. How did you find him in the first place?" The Anbu appeared somewhat taken aback by the question and hesitant to respond. "We didn't." Fox asked in a tone that left no room for interpretation. "Then who did?" As Wolf, who had been chosen as their designated spokesperson, concluded, there was a great deal of guilty shuffling of feet among the four of them. "Well, why you see Fox Tycho, we had been searching for him in the academy. Apparently, we were disturbing Iruka-san, who was catching up on some paperwork. In order to get rid of us, he offered to go find Naruto." The irate, incredulous shriek that comprised the academy student's name could have broken glass. "Do you mean to say," Kat said slowly, "that you sent an academy teacher, a mere chunin, to hunt down Uzumaki Naruto?" What was left of the ANBU's poise was indeed shattered. The final straw for them was the menacing crack of knuckles. But they refused to bow down. Despite their pride, Anbu maintained its standards. Wolf complained, "We're sorry, all right?" Lizard cried out, "We were getting desperate." Horse groveled and clutched at Cat's feet, pleading with her for forgiveness, saying, "Oh, we are worms. Worthless worms." The proceedings paused slightly as a result. Horse's response was understandable, to be sure. As a gifted ninja, Horse was, to put it mildly, a snob when he joined the Anbu Corps because he came from a very powerful family. This little rough corner had been left to Cat to knock off. She did this, completely. With a great deal of bias. As far as the command structure was concerned, Horse was at the bottom of the food chain after this traumatic event. Due to the fact that he had not made many friends upon joining, the majority of his subsequent missions involved anything and everything that fell under the general heading of Code Orange. Hawk muttered ominously, "Besides, Iruka-san brought Naruto to us in less than 15 minutes, ignoring his sobbing subordinate." "Come again?" Fox asked, a little surprised, but when Hawk started repeating himself, he waved his hand. "Never mind, I believe you, continue the report." "Well, we started on his taijutsu," Wolf thought, a smile spreading across his hidden features. "For some reason, we had a large number of volunteers willing to help with that." On an unrelated note, Horse continued, having miraculously recovered his composure after Cat had ceased to leak killing intent, "The devil can bleed." Cat scowled disapprovingly. Hawk went on, quickly shifting the topic. "Next up, we moved on to his ninjutsu." A pause grew longer as the four Anbu exchanged meaningful glances. "And?" inquired Fox. "His inventory of ninjutsu is already quite impressive. Substitution and henge are perfect, but he also showed us 4 other wind jutsu. 3 of them are apparently of his own creation, so 3 C rank jutsu and 3 D rank. While impressive, that list lacks the necessary requirements for him to pass the academy exam," Fox replied frantically. "Ah, well, that was where we hit a little snag. No matter what we tried, Naruto simply has too much chakra to perform the Bunshin no jutsu." "And," Fox had faith his men wouldn't allow something as trivial as that to prevent them from completing their task. Well, he's a wind affinity, so that put paid to the chance of an elemental bunshin. However, Horse over here happens to know the Cage Bunshin Jutsu. In order to make a decision, the four-man team waited for their captain to speak. They were understandably anxious. To teach someone who wasn't even a ninja a Jonin-level jutsu, from the Forbidden Scroll, Fox would normally have throttled his subordinates for the very idea. However, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was not your typical person. There were other factors to take into account. Specifically, were they able to trust Naruto with that kind of technique? To be honest, not a single Anbu in the entire corps would put their money, or more significantly, their sanity, in Naruto's hands in a game of cards. For uncontrollable reasons, Naruto had always been despised by the majority of Konoha. And even though the Anbu detested Naruto for reasons that were solely his fault, they all harbored a strong affection for the blonde. They had discovered him to be erratic, dishonest, cunning, and obnoxious during their time together. He was one of the dirtiest fighters many of them had ever seen, and he scalped them all when it came to cards. He also constantly humiliated them and would not think twice about kicking you when you were down. Strangely enough, though, they would not hesitate to entrust their lives to him. Considering that Naruto was ultimately one of theirs, he was both their comrade and their problem. Fox, therefore, was remarkably oblivious to the violation and merely inquired as to whether Naruto had mastered the jutsu. Wolf said, not at first, with hesitation. Then Horse told Naruto that this was a chakra-intensive jutsu, so he could use as much chakra as he could. Horse cowered slightly and hunched his shoulders defensively. On the plus side, Naruto no longer has a problem with the clone jutsu, Lizard said cheerfully, attempting to show optimism. Hawk muttered, yeah, but he can also summon about 700 Cage Bunshin in a single go, to frame the situation. Fox froze, his thoughts racing as the number repeatedly echoed in his mind, 700, 700, 700. Naruto Uzumaki was able to create 700 physical, intelligent, and identical copies of himself. That was how he managed to escape. We were all kind of shocked and then we couldn't tell which one of him was him. Fox was freed from the horrors his imagination was bringing to life by Horse's explanation. Fox concentrated all of his considerable willpower into a single thought as he gazed at the four people in front of him. They were to blame for this. Cat gave a feeble nod before vanishing in a whirlpool of leaves. Cat, call up the search parties. Find Naruto now, his academy exam begins in 1,600 hours. Fox gave a contented nod. Excellent. Moreover, there are no witnesses anymore. As Fox slowly turned on them, the wolf, lizard, horse, and hawk gulped. Not good, whimpered Horse. Hiriksen felt concerned. Naruto was only 30 minutes away from the exam's start time. Although their parents had only recently been told that their children might be promoted, none of the students had been aware that the exams even existed. The same principles as a field promotion would apply. Fox would be coming to inspect the academy. He would casually inquire about the abilities of the academy students. He would be able to determine at the end of the day which students were prepared for life as a genin and which would need to remain in the academy for an additional 6 months. However, for the promotion to be approved, the students' grades had to be passing. Since they had the best chance of finding Naruto at this point, he would typically send out Wolf's team to do so, but they had mysteriously been admitted to the hospital a few hours earlier with serious injuries. Having reached his breaking point, he followed Fox's counsel and asked Iruka to ensure Naruto arrived at the academy as soon as possible. When Kiba told the others that a major job was coming into the academy today, he became the center of attention. When he could be bothered, the Inuzuka was usually a surprisingly good source of gossip. He didn't do this very often, only because Ino usually thought this was really annoying. She was Konoha's gossip queen, after all. That is, behind her mother. However, Kiba's sense of smell was superior to his sense of hearing, and he frequently heard things that were not intended for him to hear. This meant that he was frequently more informed than he seemed to be whenever he could be bothered. A series of yells, punctuated by the roar of pain every now and then, broke them up. A few seconds later, Iruka showed up pulling Naruto by his hair. Look, you see, Naruto? I told you, Hiyashi is not here. How do you know? He's a ninja, yelled Naruto, his reasoning inconsolable. Shinigami and Kyuubi were more than a little perplexed inside his seal. Shinigami thought, so, he's been hunted by multiple S-class shinobi. Kyuubi went on, defeated multiple S-class shinobi. Shinigami couldn't help but continue, suckered a demon fox into helping him travel in time. Bent a death god to his will with the threat of more paperwork and not getting any, Kyuubi quickly retorted. Shinigami bowed, acknowledging the point. He's broken into the Hyuga compound and made himself the subject of their nightmares. Outruns Anbu for the fun of it, and has broken out of their headquarters in under 2 hours. All of which are highly impressive accomplishments. So tell me, Naruto, how on earth is it that you can't avoid your academy teacher for more than a few minutes? I don't know, Naruto, who had been listening to the two talk, sobbed inwardly. Kyuubi whispered, also, considering all this, keeping Naruto from hearing. Why is he so terrified of Hiashi? Before the idea of his father-in-law came to him, Shinigami shrugged his shoulders. I think I understand. Iruka turned a dejected glance at Hinata, having made little to no headway in appeasing the blonde who was breathing heavily. When a smirking Mizuki slammed the door shut in front of him, Naruto heeded the distraction enough to break free and run for it, only to crash into it face first. Naruto twitched and glared up at the teacher. There will be a reckoning, he said in a bitter whisper. Mizuki turned pale, gave it some thought, and opened the door for him. He bowed his head courteously and signaled Naruto to come. Iruka drew the big guns, or, more accurately, the big head, when she saw Naruto preparing to flee once more. Demon Head no Jutsu in full force, he screamed, Uzumaki Naruto, get to your seat right now or I will not be held responsible for what I do to you. Naruto raised both hands as though weighing the balances after giving Iruka a quirked eyebrow. Angry Iruka, possible detention, no free ramen for a month, he said thoughtfully, squinting at the end. On the other hand, we've got a stark raving mad Hiashi, complete with family sword, certain painful injury, threatened castration. Akamaru and every other male in the room stooped instinctively. Naruto made up his mind. Yeah, goodbye. Hinata grabbed Naruto's hand as he turned to go. And Naruto-kun, don't worry, I explained everything to father and he's not going to come after you anymore. Oh, said Naruto, who was suddenly very alert, before becoming suspicious, are you sure? What did he say, exactly? That he acknowledges his mistake and will leave off your punishment until he finds you have done something to necessitate it, Hinata said. So, he'll kill me later. Without confirming or refuting his suspicions, Hinata blushed. Awesome. That I can live with a laugh, Shikamaru muttered. The question is, how long? Shut up, Nara. Naruto walked up to his seat, feeling a lot better about his circumstances. Hinata was not far behind. It wasn't until they were seated that they became aware that they still held hands. Luckily, the majority of the remaining students were preoccupied by Fox's arrival and failed to notice this act. At the front of the class, Fox emerged in a shunshin wreathed in flames. In an instant, the wooden surface was entirely unsinged as the fire roared and burned itself out. With his head bowed, hands in his trench coat pockets, and his mask firmly in place, Fox made a commanding and striking impression. While Fox stood motionless for a lengthy count of 10, whispers and murmuring erupted throughout the classroom. Good morning, class. Quietly, Fox spoke. His voice could hardly be heard over the cacophony of the students. But when he spoke, his voice was full of authority. The authority that comes from years of encounters. The authority that comes only from leading people who entrust their lives to you through one battle after another and emerging from it with newfound wisdom. Suddenly the room fell silent. Behind his mask, Fox grinned at the expressionless faces of the academy students in front of him, except for one who was joyfully greeting him. He laughed a little and remarked, well, that didn't work well, did it? Shall we give it another go? Greetings, class. Good morning, Fox-sama, exclaimed Naruto. The rest of them murmured a greeting. Sasuke was enjoying the power he sensed as he gazed at the man in front of him. He could get help from this man. This man could help him reach his goals and make him stronger and more powerful. Ow! Sasuke scowled at Naruto, who was whistling naively while holding a stick behind his back. He detested that stick, Kami. Fox chose to ignore the incident. To be honest, it was frequently not worth it when it came to Naruto. He gradually allowed his intent to wane. The type of intent he had just been using was just one of the more complex and infrequently used types. There had always been more than one. Let's say the client lied about the mission ranking while you were on a mission with a genin who had just graduated from the academy. You suddenly encountered a notorious, strong missing nin who was leaking killer intent as if it were a passing fad. Although it is improbable, it is still possible. You could simply match his killing intent with your own if you were alone, but what would prevent one of your genin from killing himself if you did that? Intent of authority was thus created. My name is something that I have not used in years, so you may call me Taiko while I am here, or Fox-sama. The Hokage has heard some very impressive reports about this year's academy students, and as such, he has asked me to take a look at your development. I'm not interested in any academic progress. While useful for code breaking and other less active parts of a ninja's life, you are aiming to be genin, and if you want to advance and survive in this world of ninja, then most of the time, academics mean squat. Make no mistake, you are to show me your best. At that point he glanced aside and said, I will know if you are not and will sincerely enjoy making it troublesome for those who do not show me a full effort. Shikamaru gasped. First up, ninjutsu. In the beginning, the lesson was fairly routine, with the students forming a long line and performing a basic henge at the front of the class. Although the results varied, Fox was able to quickly determine who was most likely to pass thanks to the straightforward exercise. It should come as no surprise that the only people who actually stood a chance were those Iruka had specifically named. The other pupils, well, they weren't really worth considering. Hell, only half of them were able to do a flawless henge. Reflecting on this, Fox quietly moved his trousers. However, Naruto had used what he called a distraction technique to accomplish an acceptable transformation. Additionally, the clone jutsu had advanced similarly to a typical lesson. The fact that Naruto had created 3 flawless clones, something he had never done before, caused some surprise. Then all 3 of them turned to Fox and smiled malevolently. This development would probably cause them a lot of trouble down the road, Fox thought with a shudder. At that point, the lesson started to take an unexpected and painful turn. He led the academy students outside and declared that he would now use the replacement jutsu to evaluate their skills. But first, a little quiz. Who can tell me about the importance of the substitution? Fox responded. No one was surprised when Sakura's hand suddenly rose. Yeah, Pinky? Sakura inhaled deeply before starting. The replacement jutsu, or kawarimi. Classification, ninjutsu, general skill. An E rank, supplementary jutsu. Hand seals, ram, boar, ox, snake. With this technique, users replace their own body with some other object, generally with a block of wood, the moment an attack lands. This creates an optical illusion, making the enemy think the attack was successful. From this, the user can use the lapse in the enemy's attention to attack or flee from the battlefield. Explosive tags can be attached to the replacement for an added surprise. It's a basic ninjutsu, first taught at the academy, but it's still a useful art that can be applied in a variety of situations. Fox blinked. Twice. Was that word for word from the textbook? With a collective, yes, the rest of the class responded. Sakura smiled. Fox let out a sigh. Poor child. A kawarimi is so much more than that. It is a way, nay, the way, to call the log to thine aid. Listen to me, all of you, Fox yelled, outstretched his arms. Listen to me as I tell you of the holiness that is the log. When thou art alone, when foes beset thee on all sides and thou hast no other allies to call upon, the log will hear your prayers and aid thee, Fox said with kindness. And as the log takes thine place, thou becomest the log as the log becomest thee. For not but a moment, thou art an extension of the log's blessing unto the ninja, Naruto whispered, his eyes glassy. Fox nodded, relieved that at least one person could relate. The log has stood by the ninja of Konoha since its founding. It can save your life in direst of circumstances, against jutsu or enemies that would normally overwhelm you. A replacement requires just a small bit of chakra, so much so that even civilians can perform it. In times of war, this fact has saved the lives of countless people, ninja and non-ninja alike. The replacement jutsu is part of our heritage, and as of such, I will not accept any blunders in its performance. You there? Fox selected a random student from the academy and began humorously. Are you ready to call upon the log? Why yes. Fox said, good, then pulled out a baseball and threw it at him. The student was nearly instantly rendered unconscious when the ball struck his forehead with a loud smack. Fox gave a shrug. The kid wasn't ready, apparently. Right. Who's next? 10 minutes later, clutching an ice pack to his head, Mizuki staggered off the academy grounds. Demon brat, damn you. The demon used him in place of a log when that dumb Anbu was aiming for him. Mizuki frowned, recalling Naruto's justification. Log excerpt number 437 states that the use of the log in a situation that clearly could be avoided using a variety of other methods or techniques is looked down upon. Even worse, the demon brat was then awarded bonus points by that naive Anbu. Not everything was lost, though, because this did give him an excuse to slink off and wreak some mayhem. Only this morning did Mizuki learn of the unexpected promotions, and he promptly notified a number of civilian council members of the new developments. He got a prompt and forceful answer: it was not going to be the demon. That worked perfectly for his plans. Mizuki let out a sigh. Why did the demon feel the need to indulge himself and shut the door when he had been so close to simply leaving before the exam could begin? That Hyuga bitch had had ample opportunity to soothe him. The Chunin searched frantically for a method to disqualify him from the test, or at the very least, render him incapable of passing. A smile slowly swept across his face. He knew exactly how to do it. All he needed to do was ask for an old favor. In fact, if he was lucky, he might be able to get it for free. Mizuki slipped out of the grounds, heading to see an old friend. Fox appeared to be extremely happy with his performance. The majority of the class was uneasy about this fact. Naruto or the others were knocked unconscious. With a rhetorical question, Fox said, "That was fun, now wasn't it? Well, now that I've warmed up my throwing arm, it's time for you to do the same. 10 shuriken, 10 kunai. 2 people to a target, I'll call out the pairs. Remember, kids, I want your best." The target was a plain wooden post that was embedded in the ground and lacked even a single bullseye. Sakura went first, followed by a girl named Amy. This was presumably lucky because Sakura had more opportunities to shine than the other civilian. However, Fo gave the girl a face palm during the subsequent catfight that the two started, even though he did observe that the pinky had a really powerful right hook for such a small girl. Choji and Ino were the next pairs. Ino received 12 hits, and even 6 of each, 1 more hit with a kunai, and 1 fewer hit with the shuriken than Sakura, despite the fact that their projectiles were embedded throughout the post. As Ino threw, Choji kept a close eye on her and received 1 fewer hit from each weapon than she did. "Hold," shouted Fox, as Fox strode over to Choji and casually raised him by his scarf with one hand to eye level. The students froze. "You got a problem with your hearing, pork chop," Ford bellowed in a voice reminiscent of a parade park. Choji shook his head in surprise. "What was that?" exclaimed Fox. No, sir, I asked for your best, and I will have you give me nothing but your best, or are you out to shame your clan by giving a piss-poor performance?" "No, sir." "Well, we'll just have to give an opportunity to show your worth then, won't we? Now drop and give me 200 sit-ups." Choji dropped to the ground and started right away, despite his horrified expression. Fox aloud counted each sit-up. 1 Akai Michi. 2 Akai Michi. 3. The students who were waiting erupted in cruel laughter. The same student who had previously informed Naruto that Hinata would prefer to be with him because he was more human, Fox turned on the instigator with a vengeance. "You think it's funny, y'all little turd? Well, I'm sure you'll think twice as funny if 2 people are doing it, so why don't you get down on the ground and give me 300 push-ups?" Fox sat on the comedian's back and proceeded with the count after he reached 10. He could understand the Akamichi's reasons for holding back because it was fairly clear to him that they had a slight crush on the Yamanaka. But he was probably going to be on a team with her in the future, and if he kept holding himself back to avoid upsetting her, he would either die or stunt his growth. Neither was an option. Regarding his present seat, well, there was no justification for anyone to make fun of a fellow soldier's bad luck. It was okay to make fun of a teammate because you either genuinely hated each other or it was usually done in jest and meant no harm. What was some innocuous laughter in the face of a team that battled the enemy and one another, endured every day together, and by the end of it, the majority of teammates would voluntarily put their lives in each other's hands? The little turd had laughed cruelly in this case. Fox was sitting down because that was not the kind of thing he would tolerate. As Fox exclaimed, 200 Akai Michi. A smile spread across Choji's perspiring face. After he got off the fallen civilian, Fox kicked him in the ribs and informed him that he still had 176 push-ups to complete. Fox pressed a weapons pouch into his hands and walked toward Choji. "Believe in yourself, Akamichi, and give me your best." Standing at the line with resolve in his eyes, Choji threw his weapons with a strength and accuracy that had never been witnessed by any of them. Thunk, thunk, thunk. His score reached 17 hits with the final 3 hits, 9 with kunai and 8 with shuriken, all of which were grouped together within a 30-centimeter radius. As Kiba and Naruto applauded the Akamichi's performance, Choji returned to the other members of the group, his face flushed with triumph. Ino appeared to be seeing him for the first time. The remaining shuriken and kunai passed without any problems. Shikamaru duplicated Choji's score, Hinata received a perfect 20, and neither Kiba nor Shino were able to surpass it. Naruto and Sasuke came last. Naruto asked nonchalantly, "Oi, Teme. Feel like a game of tic-tac-toe?" Sasuke gave a tiny half-smile, curling his lip. "Sounds good, Dobi." The 4 lines required for the game were formed by their kunai thudding into the target one after the other, only millimeters apart. "You first," Naruto politely said. Sasuke sent a shuriken dead into the center square while rolling his eyes. The angle at which it landed was precisely 45 degrees. Naruto casually shrugged and threw 2 shurikens simultaneously, both of which fell into the same corner. The game ended in 6 seconds. Naruto scowled as he looked at the 3 shuriken that were all alone. "Damn it," he said. He brightened as he glanced at their few surviving weapons. "Best out of 3? He asked Uchiha, who was grinning. They had to set up a couple of Sasuke's shuriken for the following game, and they had to throw their remainders at various angles to determine who was whose. Naruto yelled, "Ha! In your face, Teme." Now that they had run out of ammunition, Sasuke merely scowled. His words were, "We'll finish this later." Fox laughed and ticked his clipboard conspicuously. The same posts were used in a subsequent easy exercise. All they needed to do was damage it as much as they could in 2 minutes. Since Ino's jutsu weren't intended to do much harm, she was useless in this situation. Choji's meat tank jutsu merely flattened the target, giving him another opportunity to shine. It was easily defeated by Kiba's Gatsuga, but the use of so much chakra left him gasping on the ground. The wood was sufficiently charred but not burned by Sasuke's fire jutsu. Sasuke was sensible enough to leave it alone after that, saving his chakra for when he needed it most, unlike Kiba. Shino exploited this by repeatedly forcing his Kikai bugs to bore through the weak wood, a move that left the majority of the class's female students gasping in dismay. "Nara, Shikamaru, you're up. Man, what a drag," moaned Shikamaru, stumbling to the same post where Shino and Sasuke had both been. He knelt down and placed his hands in a circle in front of him after staring at it for some time. He stayed there for more than a minute, then got up and went to the post. He apparently found what he was looking for when he ran his hands over the damaged surface because the Kikai's holes allowed his shadow to enter the wood. With a little chink sound echoing through the air, he pulled out a kunai 10 seconds later and stabbed it half-heartedly into the post. The whole thing fell to dust. Shikamaru shrugged, seemingly saying, "No biggie," and walked languidly back to the gaping onlookers. To put it mildly, Fox was taken by surprise. The child had just created a shatter point directly in front of him, utilizing his shadow to erode the wood from the inside out before stabbing the precise location to deal the most damage with the least amount of effort. It was unprecedented how much intelligence it took to do such a thing. Slowly, Fox shook his head. One day, that boy would pose a threat. Or deceased. Hyuga Hinata had fallen short of his expectations. That had been a mistake. Looking back, in less than 5 seconds, Hinata destroyed her target with powerful juken blows, blushed a little, and hurried back to try to blend in with the crowd once more. Naruto pulled her into a congrats hug, ruining that effort. It was the reddest face Fox had ever seen. Nor had he had high hopes for the civilian with the pink hair. He was mistaken, boy. Before Naruto seemed to feel sorry for her, she had spent more than half of her time pounding futilely at that thing. He first attracted her attention by wearing a rather ingenious henge. Just thinking about it caused Fox to slightly lift his mask and wipe the blood from his nose. The girl seemed infuriated by this, as she screamed his name and charged at him, fist raised. Naruto made 2 substitutions right before her fist made contact. A log that had been stacked against a post was used by one Kawarimi to switch him, and Sakura herself was used by the next. The top of the post was completely snapped off by the punch that connected. A loud voice crowing his victory to the skies broke the stunned silence. Naruto exclaimed triumphantly, you see, I told you she hits hard." As far as Fox was concerned, Naruto was the last person to attempt the post. At first, he had been more than a little let down. Naruto had just run to the post and begun frantically chipping away at it with a kunai when the timer went off. The damage was negligible. At that point, the unruly student put a hand on his post and just walked away, seemingly giving up. With his hands in his pockets, he asked inquisitively, "Yo, Fox-sama, how much time have I got left?" Fox replied while glancing at his timer, 12 seconds. "Really? Cool. Hey, you guys might want to take a couple steps back." Everyone else left the area, leaving Fox suddenly alone. The class, and every Anbu, had long since learned that Naruto's commands to move aside were not the same as those of a typical child, who is almost 12 years old. You might anticipate some paint, water balloons, or the occasional kunai or shuriken when a typical child tells you to move aside. Man, you complied with Naruto's order to move aside by doing so right away. Sasuke, can you give me a countdown from 5? Why not? Sasuke shrugged, after all. His tone was deadpan as he complied. 5, 4, 3, 2. Fire in the hole, bitches. Boom. With the exception of Naruto's wild laughter, there was silence following the big explosion. When the smoke eventually cleared, all that was visible was a sizable crater where Naruto's post had once been. Uzumaki-san, said Fox placidly, I was not aware that you had any knowledge of seals. As if it were the most apparent thing in the world, Naruto remarked, well of course I do, Fox-sama. I wouldn't be an Uzumaki if I didn't, now would I? Fox tried to figure out how much of a pay increase his Anbu would demand after learning about this incident, knowing that nothing he said would make the blonde change her mind. After estimating the amount, the Anbu commander absently contemplated whether he ought to join Iruka-san in pleading with Hinata to persuade Naruto to break the habit of transforming city property into enormous explosive tags. Fox pushed the idea from his mind and moved on to the next task on his agenda. Taijutsu. Mizuki grinned after sneaking back into the academy 30 minutes earlier. This was his opportunity to seriously hurt the demon brat so that he would be unable to finish the test. Anko yelled, woo, it's about bloody time. Using a number of carefully positioned video cameras, she, Kurenai, Kakashi, Asuma, and Guy had been watching the entire impromptu exam from the beginning. Other potential Jonin sensei were present in the room, but they were left out of the chosen group. After looking for his rival for one of their youthful matches, Guy, who already had a genin team, chose to stay even though he hadn't been invited. The technique, a game called Shish, was given by Anko. Guy was defeated. Their covert activities served to assess this year's students and determine who would go where, when, and whether to form teams. So far the tests had been fairly easy, and Anko had become bored as was to be expected. In addition, her supply of dango had already run out. She hadn't come here for that, but it was true that the explosion had made things a little more lively. Actually, she had been anticipating just watching the kids beat the living daylights out of one another for an hour or two. As long as she wasn't fighting Naruto, she already had a number of bets on him to win his match and a total of 5,000 ryo on Hinata to win hers. Indeed, she might be able to add some interest to the wager. Listen up why, pussies. The room's occupants said, observing her with interest. I'll match any bet, at any time, on Uzumaki Naruto winning any match by his opponent forfeiting if I'm given 2-for-1 odds. Any takers? The first encounter was between Shino and Ino. Ino managed to win this one by a surprising margin. Shino was far more proficient in taijutsu than Ino, even though he had never been one to practice. Unfortunately for him, one of his bugs decided to crawl out from his jacket sleeves and down Ino's leg while he had him in a hold. Ino received a fortunate blow during the ensuing thrashing, which was accompanied by a lot of shrieking, while Shino did not. Shino took the blow, turned to face Fox, and calmly released Ino from his grasp. He uttered the words, I forfeit, in a tone devoid of feeling. Then he just left the circle and passed out. Not even willing to claim this victory in Sasuke's name, Ino flushed. Another regrettable consequence of this match was that Ino's unintentional behavior had managed to win Anko's unwavering approval. She had missed it because she had gone for a quick dango run during the match. After learning all the graphic details and recalling the girl from one of her "Don't let my babies eat you" pranks she concluded that this prank was not only incredibly entertaining, but it was also a legitimate training technique because Ino had been feeling a little hopeless before. Fox said, well, that was unexpected, and then looked at his clipboard. Iruka asked, maybe we should just move on to the next match. Agreed. Next up, Hyuga Hinata vs Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke winced a little and Naruto laughed. The muscle movement was hardly noticeable, but he believed he flinched. But what transpired next validated his suspicion. No. With his head cocked slightly to the side, Fox simply gazed at him. No? He inquired gently. Sasuke broke out in a cold sweat and shivered. But he did not waver. He maintained his composure even after doing things that will not be discussed. On this matter, no amount of threats could persuade him otherwise. You want me to show you my best, don't you? I thought I had made that obvious by now, Fox replied, maintaining the same falsely gentle tone. Sasuke was adamant, so Fox rolled his eyes at the Uchiha's apparent haughtiness and pitted Hinata against Sakura. I would not be able to show you my best against Hinata. He yelled, Hajime, to begin the match. Sakura looked around. She loudly cooed, Are you watching me, Sasuke-kun? To the object of her interest, who winced a little as sympathy for the girl rose in his breast. Only Fox, Iruka, and Naruto were able to see Hinata's hand move. Sasuke just caught a glimpse of a blur. As far as the others were aware, Sakura was poised and self-assured one moment, poised to impress her Sasuke-kun, and the next, Hinata had somehow twisted her ear. Oh, 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 wow, cried Sakura. Hinata had to be persuaded by Arlia to consent to this stunt, but she realized it was for the Pinkhead's benefit. She was initially still opposed to the idea, but Sakura's first move dispelled her doubts. To be honest, the Hyuga heir was appalled by Sakura's lack of common sense in leaving herself so exposed in order to see if Sasuke was observing her. At least she had been astute enough to check on Naruto before the match began, even though she had done so covertly herself. It should probably be noted that Hinata still harbored a slight resentment toward Sakura for all of the times she had struck Naruto. Hinata said, Sakura-san, softly. You are an intelligent girl, are you not? Oh, 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 wow. Hinata's voice hardened and she gave Sakura a slight shake. Yet you take your eyes off the enemy after the match has started. I'm a Hyuga, you know, and right now I could turn your brain to mush with absolute ease. Hinata released Sakura and stepped back into a taijutsu stance. You are studying to be a kunoichi, Sakura. Right now, you are nothing more than a fangirl living in a pretend world, confident that no matter what happens, you will always survive because your knight in shining armor will be there to save you. Says Hinata. Sakura's eyes were filled with tears, which made the good-hearted girl's heart ache a little, but Hinata refused to let this stop her. She remained in her soft fist position and raised one outstretched hand in a come at me gesture. Sakura rushed forward with her fist up in the air, blinking away her angry tears. The Pinkette's own strength and momentum worked against her as Hinata simply dropped near the ground and swept Sakura's legs out from under her, causing Arlia to roll her eyes. Sakura's feet lifted off the ground and she sailed over Hinata before slamming hard onto the hard ground. Hinata sighed, straightened to the floor, and slowly spun around to confront her opponent again. She had the option to break up the fight right then and there, but that would not have accomplished her goal. Hinata said, Don't give up already, Sakura, with kindness. Sakura regained her feet and swallowed, suddenly terrified. You are training to be a kunoichi. Show me your strength. She was only now beginning to see that this battle might be more difficult than she had initially believed. Somehow, Anko managed to get a lot of popcorn, which she ate on the spur of the moment while taking in the carnage in front of her. It was clear that Hinata was controlling the battle. However, the Hyuga would not stop it. In fact, she continued to drag the battle out, leading to humiliation after humiliation and defeat after defeat, solidifying her dominance. Some of the Jonin were so disappointed in the Hyuga heir that they began to mutter out loud. Shut ya traps! Shouted Anko. Girl ain't doing nothing wrong. His opinions were expressed by one of the more outspoken, if not less intelligent, people in the crowd. Well, naturally you would say that Anko, girls being vindictively cruel, but of course, you don't really care about that, do you? As he turned a page of his Icha Icha book without thinking, Kakashi spoke up softly, stopping Anko from killing her colleague, which incidentally would have demonstrated his point. I agree with Anko-san. Everyone paused their activities and paid attention. Despite being an open pervert, Kakashi was an A-class ninja who was on the verge of being S-class. He was an individual who had accomplished more S-class missions than nearly all of them combined. He was a pupil of the fourth, who had copied 1,000 jutsu and created the Chidori. Despite his peculiar personality, Kakashi was a well-liked shinobi and among the best in Konoha. This meant that people paid attention to what he had to say. Guy slowly nodded. His statement, I too agree with my eternal rival, was earnest. You do? Anko inquired, sounding a little surprised. I mean, of course you do. Asuma agreed with his countryman and nodded his head. Many shinobi were confused by this, as they attempted to view the situation from the perspective of their senpai. Kakashi let out a loud sigh and started to tell them about it. You people have got to start looking underneath the underneath. Tell me, out of the two of them, who do you think is more ready for the life of a ninja? As Kurenai put it, Hinata-chan, of course. Good choice, Kakashi smilingly remarked. Now, how many of you think that Sakura-chan is ready to be a ninja? There was a noticeable silence in the room. Why? The Hyuga has a better mindset. Asuma took over and nodded. Exactly. Haruno-san may have the knowledge and the know-how, but I'd rather someone brought a kunai to a knife fight, not a book. Anko said bluntly. Sakura is a fangirl, pure and simple, while silently applauding as the object of interest struck the ground with force. Oh, she's got potential, a whole lot of it. But that potential means diddly squat if she doesn't have the attitude and motivation to actually get her ass into gear and make something of herself. Guy concurred. It may not look it, but all that Hinata-san is doing is trying to fan Sakura's flames of youth, so that she may bloom like a delicate flower in the springtime, full of youth and the zest of life. Kakashi started talking again. He waited to hear the response. The Uzumaki clan had a saying. Where does the chain break? He said. At the weakest link. The copy nin gave a nod. Exactly. Think about it. The faces of those around them lit up with understanding. Hinata was not having any fun with this. She simply wasn't meant to hurt someone in this way. Sakura would have to receive a wake-up call later in life, most likely while on a perilous mission, if she did not receive one now. Arlia had given her a straightforward explanation. You beat this into her now and you beat it into her so hard that she will never forget it. Sure, she will suffer pain and humiliation. But she will learn and she will grow. Make no mistake about it, this is a lesson that she will learn if she survives long enough in this profession. Question is, what will it cost her then? Pain, humiliation, embarrassment. No, the price will be measured in blood. Blood, suffering and grief. That was something that Hinata was unable to tolerate. Sakura shouted, Shanaru, and charged Hinata again. Hinata was taken aback because Sakura had become more circumspect and had never committed to anything significant. This had obviously changed. Sakura was in pain and exhausted. Who exactly did this girl believe she was? Hinata, the shrinking violet, was supposed to be an easy kill. Everyone knew that she was a Hyuga, and Hyugas only used the Juken. Then why all these extra kicks and moves? The gentle fist did not include any of those. Sakura briefly separated from her, looked at Sasuke's face, and paid for it with a forceful backhand slap to the face. Hinata then instructed her to focus on her opponent. Sasuke was not taken aback. Indeed, it appeared that this was precisely the outcome he had anticipated. Although she should have expected that at this point, it hurt her that he did not believe in her. The expression in Hinata's eyes, however, was what hurt the most. She had pity, understanding, and sympathy in her eyes. Sakura snapped. She was not entitled to sympathy. She decided to try her hardest to remove that expression from Hinata's face. Keeping this in mind, she rushed forward again. Hinata's counter was never even visible to her. But so did the Jonin. Hinata took a small step back, timing it just right as Sakura unleashed her morally right hook. No one resisted Sakura's punch, and Hinata struck when she lost her balance. Hinata's left hand tightly encircled Sakura's extended arm's upper part before she moved close enough to her opponent for her right hand to grab the front of Sakura's clothing. Hinata finished the spin by throwing Sakura over her shoulder after gaining the necessary leverage by tucking her right elbow under her armpit. Sakura's lungs were forced by the air as she struck the ground first. As Hinata leaned forward with a dagger hand at her exposed throat, she was momentarily paralyzed and powerless to do anything. Hinata whispered, "You could be strong, Sakura," with kindness in her eyes. "Stronger than you could possibly imagine. But to do that, you have to work for it. Then, one day, instead of constantly trailing after that precious person, you can walk alongside him. Instead of being a burden, you will be a help, and together, you and he will be able to overcome enemies that would otherwise be the death of you." Hinata's face became more serious. "Or stay as you are, and rely on your teammates to carry you through the mission. But know this. There will come a time when your teammates need you to carry them. If you are strong, you might manage it. If you are weak, they will die and their blood will be on your hands." Winner, Hyuga Hinata. There was silence in the Jonin room. Kakashi had started speaking out loud for everyone to hear and lip reading. He had managed to continue reading his Icha book while doing this in a flawless mimicry of Hinata's voice. Anko was gloating a lot about being proven correct, as well as the little mound of Ryo that had gathered in front of her. "Honestly," Asuma replied, "I'm surprised, no to mention impressed. I did not think that any of the genin would have been able to look so far ahead. I certainly didn't expect Hiashi's firstborn to be the one to blow my expectations out of the water." Anko gave a snort. Anko paused here and said, "The girl is shy, not to mention kind." When no one took the bait, the snake mistress gave a cute little pout and said, "She's a lot like me actually. She's also best friends with the Gaki, so I'm not going to be surprised with a lot of the stuff that she's capable of anytime soon. Indeed, Guy uttered, reflecting. I never thought I'd see the day when a Hyuga of all people performed a Marode Seoinage. Curious, Kurenai said. Oh, so that's the name of that throw? Guy gave a serious nod. The Marode Seoinage, otherwise known as the two-armed shoulder throw, is a technique done by those who follow the gentle way, or Judo. Judo. Yosh. Judo is not a very widespread taijutsu style, despite it being an old one. That said, it would meld in nicely with the gentle fist. Oh, allow me to clarify, no one in the room knew more about taijutsu than Guy, so when he spoke seriously and without the typical references to youth, people paid attention. The gentle fist, although a formidable style, has several weak points, Guy said, commanding the full attention of his audience. The gentle way would act to make up for the places where the Juken is not up to par. Of course, I will not reveal the weaknesses of another leaf shinobi, he said, his teeth glinting slightly in the nice guy pose. However, after the face fault, he and Kakashi looked at one another, and Kakashi nodded slowly. Despite their eternal rivalry, Guy was Kakashi's best friend, or as close as it came, and Guy felt the same way about Kakashi. They had an unspoken discussion about whether or not judo should be included in the Juken. The gentle fist has no throws or grapples in it. Of course, it is generally considered suicide to grapple with a Hyuga, but it can be done, if one is fast enough and strong enough. The gentle way is largely made up of throws and grapples, not to mention ways to get out of them and make the enemy pay while doing so. Strong enough blows can negate the Juken, as the Hyuga will have to choose between either exerting chakra to deflect the blow, or to damage the fist. However, if the blow is not strong enough, then they can do both, and a powerful enough punch to force them to choose one or the other is also often a good way to get beaten if you are not fast enough to avoid the return strike, or at least prevent one from being used. But the gentle way used the strength of an opponent against him, rendering that option useless. The gentle fist had no kicks in it, although this was compensating by the annoying habit that Hyuga had of laming you whenever you tried to kick them. Not so the gentle way. Both Guy and Kakashi had used these methods in the past to beat down elite Hyuga in pure taijutsu battles. However, if Hinata continued using both styles together, she would undoubtedly become an opponent to be reckoned with. Stop talking, everyone. The Gaki are going to battle. He wins this fight, according to 60,000 Ryo, without even striking him. Anko shouted. I'll accept that wager, a few more people yelled. With a look of hunger covering his face, Naruto watched his opponent, who whimpered a little as he slowly raised half of his top lip to reveal an elongated canine and lightly brushed the tip of his tongue over it to bring it into his opponent's line of sight. Hajime, Fox yelled, and without taking a step, Naruto unleashed a brief, well-controlled burst of killing intent at his opponent, who nearly froze in place. Naruto sighed a little before approaching him and leaning in close, face to face. Boo! His opponent screamed in terror and jumped over the ring's edge, losing the bout. Kakashi blinked slowly back in the Jonin room. Well, that was anticlimactic, he said lightly, as Anko cackled wildly in the background as she gathered her winnings and calculated in her mind the cut she had to give the blonde. Fox was not happy with the performance, so he made the loser do push-ups while he offered another victim. 5 minutes later, a line of 7 people were all performing push-ups, which had left Fox feeling frustrated and Anko much richer. Some people simply never learned. At last, Mizuki spoke up and said, if I may, Fox-sama, this method does not seem to be doing much good. Let me offer you a solution. A friend of mine who lives close by would be delighted to serve as Naruto-kun's sparring partner. Since we are both Chunin and he has fought against Iruka and me numerous times, it would not be fair to make Naruto-kun fight us, much less you, Fox-sama. Even though my friend is a genin, Naruto is currently among the top students at taijutsu, so they ought to be matched equally. All right, said Fox, bring him out. Mizuki gave a nod. Koji, come on over here, he yelled. People's eyes widened when they saw who Naruto's opponent was, and he could probably be described with just one word. Big. He wasn't just tall, though he appeared to be just over 6 feet, but big as in, well, big. He would have weighed well over 100 kilograms, and he wasn't just fat either. He had the physique of a professional bodybuilder, with biceps that dwarfed Naruto's head. Hell, the guy was bigger than Guy-sensei. The other thing that set him apart from the others was a large burn scar on his face, which looked like a large animal had raked its claws through his flesh, just missing his eyes. Muttered, "Fee fi fo fum," Naruto said, "What beanstalk did you fall from?" What on earth is that person? Asuma choked on cigarette smoke and sputtered. Is it important? Kurenai stared and asked. Muscles, with a little drool, Anko concurred. Ahem. Anko was still drooling when he turned around and saw a long line of jonin with cash. I think, Anko-san, that you stated that, provided you were given 2-for-1 odds, you would match any wager at any point in time that Naruto-kun wins his matches by forfeit. Anko went pale as she slowly looked at Naruto, the TV screen, the enormous stack of Ryo and IOUs in front of her, and the long line of people vying for her possession. Some of us would like to take you up on that bet. When Koji bowed to Fox, he said, Fox-sama, mighty good to see you again. Despite being taken aback by Koji's appearance, Fox behaved appropriately. Similarly, Koji-san, I assume you are Uzumaki-san's opponent? Seems so. After giving him a serious look, Fox chuckled a little and wondered briefly if his choice had anything to do with Naruto's path of death, TM. He decided that it did, and said, I see, go ahead. Iruka objected, saying, Fox-sama, I have to protest, this doesn't seem very fair. Looks can be deceiving, Iruka-san, Fox said with ease. I have full confidence that Naruto-san will make do. Wondering exactly what he had done to deserve this, Naruto muttered curses under his breath, and the list that Kyuubi and Shinigami gave him was extensive and lengthy. Kyokan Koji vs Uzumaki Naruto, Hajime. Koji stayed still, but Naruto quickly performed a few backflips to get some distance, realizing that he would need to approach this battle cautiously. So you're Naruto Uzumaki, huh? He inquired inquisitively, but Naruto said nothing. Koji said in a conversational tone, I've heard that you've caused a lot of trouble for a lot of people. In fact, he went on, I've heard that you're constantly disrespecting your superiors. His gaze widened. I've heard that why think yourself to be someone important. I've heard that you're not ready to be a ninja, Naruto said, but he said nothing. I've heard you ought to quit. Why do you think so many people give him the perfect setup for that line from the pervert's book? Shinigami sighed. Shrugging, Kyuubi said, the plot called for it. In the same conversational tone, Naruto said slowly, really, well, I heard your mother plays pool with the planets. Crack. Those who witnessed it flinched at the sight and sound of the blow that struck Naruto's jaw. It was so powerful that if he had angled it to send Naruto backwards and out of the ring instead of sending him to the ground, it would have ended the match right there. However, despite the punch's strength, the big man had misjudged the thickness of Naruto's hard head, so he quickly rolled out of the way and, using chakra, brought both of his legs around to slam them feet first into Koji's supporting knee. Seeing it coming, Koji allowed himself to fall forward into a kneel, taking the kick above the knee, but it was a feint, and Naruto used it to push himself out of Koji's reach before kick-flipping to his feet and using the momentum to immediately dive into a somersault, sending a chakra Enhan foot into Koji's nose. Blood began to trickle from Koji's nostril, but Naruto was in the air, vulnerable, and the big man reached out and grabbed him, throwing him back towards the center of the ring. With a grunt, Naruto hit the dirt and skidded for several meters, scraping off the first few layers of skin before digging his hands into the ground beneath him and stopping his slide just a meter from the arena's edge. Kyokan Koji walked forward slowly and casually, wiping the blood from his face as he said, "Feisty little brat, aren't you?" he said, reflecting on the blood on his hand. When he slowly got back on his feet, Naruto snorted and said, "Funny," before spitting a mouthful of his own blood aside. "When it comes to me, people always forget the first rule of a ninja. Never undervalue your opponent." "Maybe ya just overestimate yourself," Koji intelligently retorted, raising an eyebrow. Naruto gave him a contemplative glance and said, "Nah." The two of them exploded into motion. Koji was far stronger than Naruto, even with the Jinchuriki using chakra to strengthen himself. Sure, he had chakra to burn, but that didn't mean much when it came to augmenting your strength. Just ask Tsunade. But Naruto was also just a little bit faster than Koji and provided a much smaller target. Not that it helped when he found it impossible to get past his opponent's vastly superior reach. Dodging and weaving, Naruto did his best to avoid each titanic blow that came his way, trying futilely to find an opening in the man's guard. Slowly, Naruto got into the rhythm of the rather predictable punches. That was a mistake, as proved by the roundhouse kick sent towards his chest. Powerless to dodge, Naruto was still able to cross his arms in front of him in a block. Not that it mattered, as the kick was powerful enough to send him rocketing back off the ground. Naruto rolled as he hit the ground, regaining his feet and charged, ignoring the throbbing of his arms. They would heal soon enough. Koji almost seemed to sigh as he swung one ponderous fist forward in a blow that would have taken Naruto's head off. At least, it would have, if Naruto had not dived underneath it, sliding through the gap in Koji's legs and coming up behind him, facing the same way that he was. Turning to the right, Koji attempted to face Naruto, but the attempt was in vain as Naruto turned with him, hopping and sliding his feet to keep up. Koji was growing impatient. He knew Naruto was behind him and that all he had to do was turn around to face him, but it did not appear to be happening that way. It was almost as though Naruto knew exactly what he was doing before he actually did it. That was actually pretty close to the truth. Most shinobi, with the exception of the Hyuga, never really spent any time on Hellstromism, or the ability to read someone's thoughts based on the way their muscles moved. Naruto actually sucked at it, but at the moment, his opponent's muscles were incredibly overdeveloped, but he had an advantage that gave him the edge he needed: his instincts. When you combine those two things with a lot more combat experience than anyone believed he possessed, he was able to read just enough to stay one step ahead of his enormous opponent. Feeling secure in the knowledge that he was safe for the time being, Naruto launched an attack. His fists appeared small compared to his opponent, but they each had a specific target, 3, to be exact: the kidney, the coccyx, and the third lumbar vertebrae. Naruto repeatedly slammed his fists against these 3 points, swearing a little at the sensation of punching a brick wall, but it didn't matter because he had already done that in training, but he could only imagine the pain that Koji would be in at the moment. The big shinobi rolled forward, avoiding those punishing hands, and he might have actually defeated him if the little runt had continued to do so. Even now, his mobility had been severely limited, and his entire body was twitching from the pain that ran spasmodically through it. "Aren't you a ferocious little scrapper?" With a wolf-like smile, Naruto said, "I try." Had this been a normal fight, Kakashi said slowly, shaking his head in amazement at the little blonde's progress, Naruto would have already won. "Tell me about it," Asuma said, nodding while puffing on another cigarette. Any of those points would have ended the match if he had used a kunai instead of his fists. I was unaware that the academy was instructing its students on all of these important topics. The other Jonin, who had already lost a significant sum of money to the snake mistress, had objected, so the softcore bondage scene began. "They don't," Kakashi said, looking at Anko, who was currently tied up in the corner after attempting to sneak out of the room. She had been certain that she could win her rather outrageous bet, but that was before she saw who his last opponent was. As a result, she had tried to sneak out of the room to avoid the possibility of handing over all her lovely Ryo, at least, as soon as she had stared long enough at the muscles. "Never let an opponent get behind you," declared Naruto with assurance as he returned to his unconventional taijutsu stance. "I assumed that the first rule was to never underestimate your opponent," Koji inquired, as if interested. With a nonchalant wave, Naruto said, "We're shinobi training. Making a mistake could result in your death in this dangerous line of work. All rules are therefore the first rule." Koji gave a low laugh. "You know what? I believe I like you, child. Therefore, I will no longer insult you." Koji directed chakra to his limbs for the first time since the match began. Youthful flames have been displayed by Uzumaki-san, yet he will not be able to win this match, Guy concluded quietly and firmly, punching the air as he went. "What? Why?" Anko screamed. She was greatly upset by Guy's remark and had rather easily slipped her bonds after witnessing Naruto's success against the larger man. After shrugging, Guy said in a matter-of-fact tone, "Easy. Kyokan-san is a very young person. He joined the Ninja of the Leaf after arriving in Konoha with his family prior to the last war. Due to an accident that claimed his teammates' lives during a Third World War battle against an Iwa team, he is currently a semi-retired shinobi." "What took place?" Kurenai inquired. As he recounted the incident, Guy grimaced. His teammates were overconfident. Without carrying out a thorough investigation, they charged the Iwa Nin. The fact that Koji's teammates were skilled shinobi contributed to their conceit. When Jinchuriki of the Five Tails tore them to pieces, that didn't really help them. As far as Kakashi was concerned, from what I understand, Koji was able to get away from a four-tailed blood shroud. Additionally, he carried the remains of his comrades as he did it. "He's a blacksmith now," Guy added, "and since he's one of Konoha's best, he's not allowed to go on any real missions. However, he and I will occasionally spar amicably. He is one of the few people who can push me with just taijutsu, but he has never won in pure taijutsu. Another nice bonus is that he can take one of my full-powered punches to the jaw while I'm on the third gate and still survive, getting up and ready for more." This statement was met with silence before more people began placing bets against Naruto with Anko. Anko put it succinctly when he said, "Blondie's screwed." It was like fighting a whole new creature. He could hear the whoosh of displaced air every time a hand passed near his head, but he did not panic. He could handle this, he calmly reassured himself. Koji came in fast and hard. Naruto tried to block the first punch, but the sensation of his forearm breaking from the impact told him just how bad an idea that actually was. He felt the bone knitting itself back together as he tried desperately to avoid each punch. Whumph! Koji threw a left hook at least twice as fast as the others, just when Naruto thought he had gotten used to the pace of his blows. Unprepared, Naruto took it right in the belly and tried to cry out in pain, but there was no air left in his body to do so, so blood spurted out of his mouth instead. The compound was silent except for Hinata's scream, "Naruto-kun." Koji turned and started to leave as Naruto fell to the ground, but he was startled to see Naruto standing again when he turned around and noticed a shifting of dirt. "Remain calm, child. Give it up," Koji said matter-of-factly, "because you're not going to win this one." "Give up trying to make me give up," laughed Naruto. Naruto said this as he rushed forward again, pirouetted around Koji's fist as fast as he could, and finished the move by putting his elbow point directly at a point just below Koji's heart. The big man was faster, so Koji just took one lazy step backwards and avoided the blow, hammering Naruto hard across the face with his own elbow strike, followed by a left jab to Naruto's ribs, and then kicked the side of Naruto's body, sending him to the ground once more. "Are you really that conceited? It's hard for me to believe you would still believe you can defeat someone so much stronger than yourself," Koji asked angrily, his strangeness growing stronger as anger entered his voice, and all traces of the kindness he had previously shown vanished as if it had never existed. "Haughty? What on earth are you talking about?" Naruto uttered the words incredulously. "You're really good, kid. However, you're not nearly as good as you believe yourself to be. You enter the field with that mindset, refusing to give up, and you will all perish within a week." "I don't give a damn," Naruto yelled. Anger burned in Koji's eyes as he started to attack again, but he stopped as Naruto continued to speak. "You don't realize my weakness. Do you really believe that I am unaware that there are monsters out there who would rip me to pieces the moment they laid eyes on me? Bozo, newsflash. I am aware. However, that certainly does not imply that I'm the kind to simply flee. You know why I intend to become Hokage one day?" Koji sarcastically remarked, "Let me guess, so that everybody will recognize you?" "Ignore that. The Hokage is the strongest person in the village, and I want to be strong enough to protect my precious people," Naruto yelled, his blush camouflaged by his slight rage. Koji shook his head slowly, looking impressed despite himself, saying, "That sounds mighty pretty, kid, but y'all don't even know what's out there. Monsters." Fox simply nodded his head slowly, not understanding the other academy students' looks. He knew Naruto was more world-weary than most, but this was more than he had previously believed. "Monsters, you say? How about the ones that are concealed beneath your bed?" Koji remarked in jest. "I really hope not," Naruto said, shuddering at the idea. He shook his head, saying, "I'm talking about real monsters, monsters in human form, people who kill, torture, burn, subjugate, rape, conquer, manipulate, slaughter, all for the pleasure of it. Because if they were, I'd probably be dead soon, or wishing I was. There are people in the world who would smile while dissecting me. Some individuals in the world would abduct young girls with the specific intent of using them as breeding animals. There are people in the world who have killed every member of their family just to see how strong they are. How would I ever be strong enough to take on one of those monsters if I surrendered to someone like you?" These words caused several audience members to wince. "Why don't you tell me then? If you were now up against one of them, how would you respond?" Sincerely interested in learning Naruto's response, Koji posed the question. Naruto nodded wisely and said, "I have the perfect plan. Turn around and run like hell. You don't have to scream like a little girl." "Too right," concurred Shinigami. "Yeah, just ask Hiashi, shrugged Kyuubi. Steel glinted in his eyes as Koji let out a brief bark of laughter that ended as suddenly as it had started. "How is that any different from giving up?" "There's nothing wrong with that. It's a tactical withdrawal. You determine if it's worth it after weighing the risks. It would be foolish of you not to. Keep in mind that, a fox who fights and flees lives to fight another day." "What if you were accompanied by your loved ones? Then what?" Naruto's reaction was immediate and unwavering. "I'd fight." "You'd die. It was a factual statement delivered in a manner that shunned disagreement. I would gladly slit my own wrists if it meant that my precious people would live just a moment longer, shrugged Naruto. In addition, Konoha would incur the least expense if I died. I have no family to grieve for me. My clan has passed away. I'm not a famous ninja, at least not yet, and I'm not a clan heir. Hell, don't you remember that you're speaking to the village outcast? I'm sure a lot of people here would be happy to see me go. My loved ones would be sad to see me go, but it's better for them to be sad than for me to bury them. I realize it's selfish, but it's true. Unaware that Naruto's words had won him many allies that day, the Jonin in the room gazed at the young man incredulously. At last, Koji spoke up, saying, "So, don't you guys give up?" he inquired again. Koji nodded while threateningly cracking his knuckles, and Naruto said nothing. "All right, then. Then you leave me with no other option. Sama Fox." "Yes, I forfeit." A loud yell from a distance broke the stunned silence created by Koji's words, and Fox nodded, his smile concealed behind his mask. "Hello. YEHHHH." Ignoring Enko's cheers, Fox pointed to the two combatants and said, "Uzumaki Naruto 1. Guys, shake hands." Naruto shook Koji's hand, perplexed. "Why?" he asked plainly. "People were worried that you weren't ready for the life of a ninja, mentally at least," Koji said, smiling sheepishly and taking a business card out of his pocket as he relaxed again. "Most likely because you treat everything as though it were a joke. In fact, you even treat the Anbu as though it were a joke." "However, they are," Naruto objected. The spectators' perspiration fell. "However, we were concerned that you would die young if you attempted to approach your career as a shinobi in the same manner. It turns out you are far more knowledgeable than you admitted. In any case, child, you have my respect, which is something I don't give to everyone. If you persevere, you'll become one of the greatest ninjas in the world." With a lump in his throat, Naruto swallowed and said, "Thank you," in a humble manner. After giving him a contemplative glance, Koji took a business card from his pocket and said, "Here. Look me up if you ever feel the need to be beaten up again. You might even be ninja enough to defeat me in a spar if you practice for a few years." Naruto gave him a furious glance and said, "Oi." Koji's loud, deep laugh reverberated throughout the training area. When Koji left the academy, Mizuki rushed to catch up with him. "It was your responsibility to make sure he couldn't pass." Mizuki's teeth were clenched as she spoke. Looking down at the irate man, Koji simply laughed and said, "Old friend, you were wrong. He wasn't prepared to be a shinobi, you told me. You were mistaken. He is more than prepared to become a leaf ninja." "Who did this stupid ox think he was?" Mizuki gritted his teeth and exhaled, calming himself because it wouldn't be appropriate to reveal his identity just yet. "I'm sorry, Koji, it's just, never mind." "Just what, ma friend?" the blacksmith asked, looking down at him with concern. Mizuki resisted talking about his worries, saying, "It's just, ever since I saved your little sister's life, you've always done your best for me. You took me in, lent me money if I was low, invited me into your home, and this is how I repay you." "What is it?" "Remember that we brought the issue before the council. When I informed them that Naruto wasn't prepared to become a ninja, they became very worried. They specifically instructed you to fail him, or at the very least, make it impossible for him to pass this year. Better broken bones than a dead body, after all." Koji dismissed his worries, saying, "I told him that I wouldn't let him pass if he wasn't prepared to be a ninja. You're a good teacher, Mizuki, and you show your students that kind of care. However, you must let this one go. According to my perspective, Uzumaki has the potential to be among the best ninjas that we have ever seen. He was prepared to become a ninja. When I saw that, I had no intention of breaking him." "The council will make things difficult for you," Mizuki cautioned and said. Koji gave a shrug. "All right. It's better that I break a child's spirit than that my life becomes challenging." After saying goodbye, he headed back home. "I can take a bit of trouble." Mizuki scowled after him, saying, "Koji, you ought to have followed my instructions." "Some trouble? Oh, unfortunately, you've gone too far this time. You had the opportunity and the command to break the spirit of the demon brat, but you chose not to. Eye for eye, one tooth for another, for your spirit, his spirit. You bastard, you'll regret this." "Good job, everyone." After searching his jacket for what he was looking for, Fox tossed the items to 9 people in the room and declared, "I've seen enough." After staring down at his new Hite-8 in disbelief, Naruto quickly turned to see that, with the exception of one, the other rookie 9 were all wearing the same expression. This is going to be such a drag. You guys deserve congratulations. To be assigned your team and sensei, Jenin, come to room 3A tomorrow.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.